A young mage engineer, clad in glowing armor, faces a formidable purple dragon in a rocky clearing. He sighs in exasperation, raising a gauntlet hand to his face as he questions the gravity of the situation. His gaze lifts to the sky, revealing not one, but an entire horde of elite dragons descending upon him. He recognizes this tactic as an attempt to overwhelm him with sheer numbers and decides to offer them a proper welcome. With a snap of his fingers, a colossal stone hand erupts from the earth. The full scale of his creation is revealed. A massive golem of stone and light towers behind him. With a confident expression, the mage declares it is time to get moving. The construct clenches its gigantic fist, raw power crackling through its form. This is his ultimate weapon, the barrage steel golem, orchestrion. The roots of this conflict trace back 15 years to a woman known as the Demon King. Possessing unparalleled ambition, she wielded a skill called Grand Dominion of Charm, which could dominate any man and even transcended gender. She wiped out several great nations, and her control over her enthralled subjects was so absolute that it persisted even after her death. Her enthralled followers, the Demon King's slavers, returned to her side as loyal minions. Faced with such overwhelming and unstoppable power, the world fought back by creating many warriors and relaxing its regulations to foster strength. Now that the Demon King has finally been defeated, only the exceptions born from that era remain. The question of how to handle these individuals in a time of loosened rules lingers, with the belief that history itself holds the answer. The scene shifts to the present day, inside the palace hall of the Diamante Kingdom, where a crowd has gathered to listen to an address from a high-ranking official. The official, a portly noble, bellows with rage from the podium, his voice echoing through the hall as he makes a shocking declaration. All of you are fired. He justifies his decree with disdain, asserting that the royal palace of a noble kingdom should be staffed exclusively by the most competent nobles, carefully selected by their own kind. Among the stunned and dejected crowd of dismissed staff stands the young mage engineer, forced to listen to the pronouncement. He stood amongst the other dismissed commoners as the noble's voice declared that the World Council's ban on job discrimination was the only reason they had been allowed to stay. But now, with the Demon King defeated, that reason was gone. The noble continued his tirade, roaring that commoners had no right to be there and ordering them out. In response, the young mage raised a hand, attempting to ask a question. He managed to interject, calmly asking what they should do about the handover of their duties. The portly noble was momentarily stunned into silence by the unexpected query. Before the noble could respond, a young woman from a ducal house, standing on a raised platform, questioned their audacity. The mage engineer clarified that while they would leave as instructed, the lack of a proper handover would cause problems. The noblewoman scoffed, stating she couldn't care less about such a low-level issue. The portly noble agreed emphatically, finding the idea that nobles would need to be taught anything by commoners to be utterly absurd. She did, however, acknowledge that the World Council prohibits interfering with personal belongings upon dismissal. With that settled, she dismissed the need for any handover and simply ordered them to gather their things and leave. His expression remained placid, though his eyes held a sharp focus. He calmly confirmed that he understood no handover was necessary and that they would take their belongings and depart. With a slight, formal bow toward the portly noble, he expressed his appreciation for the opportunity and announced his departure, citing that he was quite busy. The noble glared at his back with contempt. He turned and walked away, his head lowered and fists clenched at his sides as someone brushed past, rudely telling him to get out of the way. As he departed, he reflected bitterly on those who believe everything can be solved by simply giving orders, completely ignorant of the importance of a proper handover. He watches as the last of his work uniform dissolves into wisps of smoke, a symbolic end to his service. Standing amidst the discarded clothing of his fellow commoners, he clenches his fist, his expression hardening with resolve. As the nobles hastily use their own item box magic to gather the abandoned equipment, he calmly activates his own, securing his personal effects with a flash of light. With his belongings stored away, he turns his back on a now empty hall and walks towards the massive, open gates, leaving the royal grounds behind. He pauses for a moment, reflecting on his work. The golem operation tests were all finished, but now, without royal permission, he could no longer use the specialized antenna required for them. Walking down a long stone corridor, he considers the trade-offs he made. Sacrificing control range to boost processing speed had been the right decision. He mused, though a mere 3-meter range was far too restricted. He stops, pulling out an identification card bearing the name Hollis. If trouble came, he decided he would simply have to figure it out then. His resolve solidifies. Now, his first task is clear. He will search for the best possible materials to construct a golem of his own. Meanwhile, in the throne room, King Barzil presides over his court. The portly noble stands beside him, along with other members of the aristocracy, before a depiction of their vanquished demonic foe. King Barzil of the Diamante Kingdom addresses the noble. Zates, he says, a slight smile on his face. You look to be in good spirits. Zates confirms this, explaining that he got rid of some unpleasantries earlier and now feels refreshed. He stood beside the throne as a guard announced the teleportation array was operational. An attendant then informed King Barzil that they were departing for a hidden World Council meeting to meet the hero, reminding him that he must not give a bad impression by frowning. The king, however, seemed unsettled, admitting he was still not quite used to teleportation. Zaitz simply chuckled, assuring His Majesty that he would grow accustomed to it. Elsewhere, other powerful figures took note. One noble remarked that the World Council still manages the teleportation system, but his companion confidently replied that, in time, it would become theirs. Moments later, the royal party emerged from behind a grand curtain into a vast hall, filled to capacity with dignitaries. The hero, the reason for this gathering, was already present. An announcer at a podium thanked the assembly for waiting and formally presented the hero. With the resonant clank of armored boots, she began to walk forward. Her impressive presence immediately silenced the room. Murmurs spread through the crowd as they realized she was the one from the rumors. The sheer force of her aura washed over the gathered nobles, leaving them visibly stunned and intimidated. Her sharp, unwavering eyes scanned the assembly. King Barzil swallowed nervously as that intense gaze fell upon him. He began to sweat, overwhelmed by the power radiating from the warrior. Oh, he muttered in awe. So this is the hero. The journey leads to Calcite Village, a lively settlement with wooden buildings and a bustling main street. Their Hollis sits at an outdoor table, finally free. Having been fired, he muses that he can now pursue what he's always wanted. Still, he acknowledges the time constraint on his project, estimating he'll need at least 10 years of research to complete. His thoughts turn to logistics. He decides he'll have to try his luck at the rare stone market, which is located near the Grand Urvain. A sigh of frustration escapes him. He is startled from his meal when a voice calls out, asking what he's daydreaming about in such a peaceful place. The sound of a cart wheel grinding to a halt accompanies the interruption. Looking up, he sees a friendly young man with light-colored hair, holding the reins of a white horse. The newcomer offers a casual greeting. He hesitates for a moment, but the young merchant offers a listening ear, noting that Hollis seemed to be thinking about finally escaping a black company, a place of harsh employment. Hollis reflects on the merchant's words, admitting to himself that he's had to accept the time constraints on his goals. Despite his newfound freedom, he feels as though his luck is constantly being tested. He is pulled from his thoughts as the merchant apologizes for speaking out of turn, acknowledging his own lack of awareness. The merchant then asks if Hollis is heading to the treasure capital, Lapis, while commenting that the Dragonstone Kingdom isn't a shady place. The destination is indeed the same. Hollis confirms he has business to take care of in Lapis, taking another bite of his food. The merchant, confirming he is a tradesman, explains that in Lapis, Hollis could find all sorts of metals and even trade rare metals from the Grand Urvain. As he speaks, Hollis's attention is drawn to the cart's wheel, and he points out that the axle looks old and worn. His keen observation was met with a cheerful laugh from the blonde merchant, who readily admitted that Hollis had good eyes. The merchant's expression shifted to one of mild surprise as Hollis explained his familiarity, revealing that he was directly involved in the technology behind the cart's construction. Pivoting the conversation, the merchant then asked about Hollis's own travel arrangements, noting the long distance to Lapis. Hollis replied that he had no specific transport, planning only to hitch rides on shared carriages. The young merchant, perched atop his horse, offers a ride to the town of Lapis in exchange for assistance. The dark-haired engineer accepts the proposal, introducing himself as Hollis and agreeing to handle the task. With the terms set, the merchant extends a hand, introducing himself as Jinji. They confirm the deal, pleased to make each other's acquaintance. As their agreement is sealed, a sudden, violent tremor shakes the ground beneath them, startling both men and cutting their conversation short. He turns, trying to pinpoint the source of the disturbance. Jinji wonders aloud what caused the shaking, while nearby townsfolk cry out in alarm, asking where others are going in such a panic. Hollis's gaze, however, is fixed on the sky. He spots a massive winged beast descending from the clouds, its purple scales a horrifying and familiar sight. He can scarcely believe what he is seeing. Before the creature can wreak havoc, thick, dark chains erupt seemingly from nowhere, ensnaring its body and limbs. Hollis watches in disbelief, marveling that a dragon would appear in such a place. A new figure leaps into view, brandishing a sword with a flourish. He declares that there is no need to worry, introducing himself as Urif Chiode, heir to the Chiode Count family. As he boasts that he will handle the beast, the chained dragon unleashes a torrent of fire upon the helpless crowd below. Hollis looks on, questioning if this man has any real chance of success. His attention shifts from the posturing noble to the chaos unfolding in the town square. He watches the panicked civilians, his expression hardening as he recalls warning them it was dangerous to approach. The dragon's fire has set a building ablaze. A woman pleads desperately for help, crying that her daughter is still trapped inside the inferno. While others lament that nothing can be done, Hollis breaks from the crowd and sprints toward the burning structure as a bystander shouts a warning that he'll be killed. He plunges into the smoke and flames without hesitation. Inside the collapsing building, he calls out, announcing he is there to help and asking where the trapped individual is. He receives no response, his eyes scanning the fiery wreckage for any sign of life. He finds her lying motionless in a bed amidst the smoke-filled room. To his relief, she's not dead, but her condition is critical. Panting from the heat and lack of air, he leans over the small, still form. With no time to spare, he materializes a potion from his item box, wondering if he can act fast enough to save her. He swiftly uncorks the vial and administers the life-saving liquid to the unconscious child. Just as he finishes, a sudden rustle from the doorway catches his attention. The hero has arrived, her presence cutting through the haze. Meanwhile, outside, Yurif Chiode taunts the dragon, asking if it has given up, only for the beast to unleash a furious counterattack. Watching from the sidelines, Jinji expresses his frustration, lamenting that he knew this would happen. Back inside the collapsing structure, the hero leads the way, guiding Holus and the child he carries through the falling debris and towards safety. He emerges from the inferno, cradling the small girl. Jinji shouts in relief, asking if Holus is all right. The child, safe in his arms, clutches a soot-covered teddy bear. A man, his face a mask of awe and relief, takes the child. Jinji is stunned by the feat, but Holus calmly clarifies that the girl is fine. She only fainted. The girl's mother rushes forward, crying out her daughter's name, Nasha. Overcome with emotion, the parents thank Holus profusely. He reassures them that she simply inhaled smoke and will wake up after some rest. He stands beside Jinji, who quietly asks about the ongoing farce. Holus internally resolves to avoid questioning the man fighting the dragon. From their vantage point, they watch Yurif slashing at the downed beast. Jinji notes that while the mages brought the dragon down, Yurif's attacks don't seem to be hurting it at all. A nearby noblewoman, however, is thoroughly impressed, loudly praising Sir Yurif's swordsmanship and asking for Holus's opinion. He can only state that he has a bad feeling about the situation. His feeling is immediately validated as Yurif's sword clangs harmlessly off the dragon's scales. The beast lets out a low growl, and from the sidelines, the hero grimly acknowledges that she feels the same way. With a sudden, violent whip of its tail, the dragon swats Yurif aside. The nobleman Zates watches in shock as Yurif is sent tumbling to the ground, utterly defeated. Holus observes the scene, calling it a disgrace. The massive creature looms over the incapacitated nobleman. Seeing this, Holus sighs, muttering that he isn't in the mood for this, but prepares to intervene. He dashes forward, closing the distance to the dragon in an instant. He addresses the beast, stating he has nothing personal against it, but allowing it to be reused would present a problem. Leaping high into the air, Holus brings a weapon down with devastating force, striking the dragon squarely on its head. The impact triggers a massive explosion that engulfs the dragon's head. Amidst the smoke, Holus is revealed holding a small, rectangular object, the source of the blast. He stands calmly within the dissipating cloud, looking at his handiwork, and concluding that the explosion should be sufficient to cover things up. He travels onward in Jinji's cart, the merchant expressing concern over his recent actions. Jinji asks if he was truly okay with leaving all the gold coins behind, to which Holus simply replies that it's fine. He explains that while he did take the ingots, carrying around that much gold would be too much trouble for someone in his current situation. Jinji is taken aback by this display of consideration, remarking that Holus is too kind. As they sit together in the moving cart, Jinji suggests that the money was also meant to help cover the repair costs for all the burned houses. He adds that from the looks of the house's interior, it seemed to be a single-mother situation, a fact Holus quietly confirms, noting the father's absence. He reflects on the family's plight, remarking that having one's entire house burned down must be devastating. Jinji quietly agrees. With the conversation concluded, Jinji confirms their travel plans, asking if Holus is fine with them not taking any detours. Holus agrees, content to continue on their direct path. Meanwhile, in a grand royal hall, the hero Lanhea stands before a large assembly to deliver the hero community's Ruster report. From his throne, King Barzil addresses her. In honor of her achievements in saving the world, he grants her a reward of her choosing, inviting her to ask for whatever she desires. She accepts the offer, turning to face the king and declaring that she has just one request. Her request is not for herself, but for the man who trained her and the other 5 core executives mentioned in the report, Master Horus, whom she credits with paving the way for the demon lord's defeat. With all eyes upon her, she makes her startling demand. For Holus and the others, she requests the international polygamy privilege. Far away, the subject of her request remains completely unaware, engrossed in a book. In the grand throne room of the Diamante Kingdom, the hero, Lanhea, stands before the assembled court, her presence commanding the attention of all. King Barzil, rubbing his temple in weary contemplation, asks her what kind of man this Horus is. Lanhea states plainly that he is a commoner, but also the strongest Golem Master in the world. She continues, informing the court that a letter received a week prior revealed Horus had been working within the kingdom's own royal castle. The king and his advisors murmur in surprise at the revelation. The news strikes Zates with sudden, dawning horror. He clenches his fist as the memory of his own arrogant words, "You're fired. Get out," resurfaces, realizing with a sickening certainty who he had dismissed. His silent panic is shattered by the king's furious roar, demanding to know what he has done. Langia's cold voice cuts through the tension, accusing him directly, "You fire my master." Zates shrinks under their combined fury, stammering that he didn't know. He attempts a weak excuse, but Lanhea continues, explaining that her master has always been secretive and she herself would not have known his location without the letter. She reveals that due to the Demon King's influence, the World Council issued a proclamation urging nations to appoint commoners to key positions. She addresses the entire court, stating that many countries embrace this idea to build strength against the Demon King's invasion. With a pointed look, she adds that the Diamante Kingdom, however, did not share that philosophy. Zaitz sweats profusely under the weight of her implication. Her gaze remains fixed on the assembly as she concludes that given her master's destination, certain privileges are unnecessary. What is required, she states, are civil rights to access that location. Her attention then shifts, landing on a young, horn girl. Lanhea identifies her as Princess Lucia of the Dragonstone Kingdom, acting as plenipotentiary for her ill father. Taking a step forward, Lanhea makes a formal request for citizenship from Master Horus and all members of the Ruster Report. She clarifies her demand for the stunned princess. In order to use the rare stone market under the Dragonstone Kingdom's jurisdiction, citizenship in the treasure capital, Lapis, is required. Princess Lucia is left speechless. She presses her demand, stating that she asked for this as a reward for defeating the Demon King. The request stuns King Barzil, who can only stammer in disbelief, while Princess Lucia looks up at the hero, wide-eyed and surprised. The king, enraged by her audacity, slams his fist down, roaring that he will not allow it. His mind flashes to the Ruster Report, which detailed the overwhelming power of the hero community, a single group of commoners who had defeated the Demon King. His fury intensifies as he internally declares the idea absurd. He cannot fathom handing over such a valuable asset to another nation. Beside him, Princess Lucia looks on in confusion, the imposing silhouettes of other heroes looming behind her. Cutting through his internal tirade, Langia's voice rings out, sharp and commanding, warning him not to get cocky. Her sharp rebuke startles the king, who turns to her and questions what she could possibly mean by such a statement. She leans forward, her gaze unwavering, and asks if he truly fails to comprehend the weight of her words when she explicitly states her desire. A flicker of understanding crosses the king's face. He interrupts her, clarifying that her ultimate goal is to secure access to rare minerals for the Golem Master, Horus. He seizes the opportunity to boast, rising from his throne and spreading his arms wide. He proclaims that the Diamante Kingdom is the greatest of all nations, capable of procuring rare minerals for Horus, not just from the Dragonstone Kingdom, but from countless others through their extensive trade networks. He presses his point, urging her to reconsider. In his view, the logical course of action is to grant Horus a preferential rights within their own kingdom to acquire the necessary materials. She calmly refutes his grandstanding. She points out that his kingdom's current population is swelled by refugees who fled the Demon King's invasion, suggesting its greatness is merely a title. Her pointed question, "Am I wrong?" leaves the king stunned and silent. She continued her argument, explaining that the kingdom's ability to support so many civilians was entirely due to her master's power as a golem master. He had created staff golems capable of handling 10 times the workload of a normal person, and he could control over 500 of them at once. The king, aghast, could only stammer that such a thing was impossible. She then highlighted the foolishness of his actions, reminding him that despite her master's immense power, he had dismissed all those invaluable staff members. Now that the Diamante Kingdom was on the verge of financial hardship, she questioned why Horus would have any reason to stay. The king bellowed in disbelief at the mere suggestion of economic trouble. Unfazed, she began to lay out the new economic reality. With the Demon King defeated, the special provisions that had been enforced across all nations were rapidly losing their power. One of these provisions, she specified, was directly related to loans, a statement that left the king utterly confused. Her explanation detailed how, during the state of emergency caused by the Demon King's invasion, moneylenders across the world were forced to accept extensions on repayment periods and restrictions on interest rates. Some were even compelled to provide one-sided financial aid. Now that the war was over, the time for repayment had finally come. The king scoffed, assuming her words were a simple threat of force, and questioning if she thought she could crush him with power. From across the throne room, she calmly replied that this was exactly the kind of situation she was referring to. She then addressed the entire court, asking if anyone had heard any strange rumors or expressions of dissatisfaction from the nation's lenders. The assembled nobles looked amongst themselves, confused and unaware. Seeing their ignorance, she revealed the reason for the silence. The hero community had prepared nearly the full repayment amount in gold coins and had purchased the nation's debt bonds themselves. The revelation was followed by another. The hero community, she explained, also runs lending operations. She then looked the king directly in the eye and informed him that, of all nations, his Diamante Kingdom was the one with the most debt. The king's face twisted in shock. Her accusation then zeroed in on a single target, the man who was head of the Lugisak ducal house. She identified him as the largest debtor of all, with a debt so vast that even selling the entire royal estate wouldn't be enough to cover it. The king could only stare in disbelief. The news sent a shockwave of panic through the court, causing the Duke of Lugisak and other nobles to collapse in terror. Gazing down upon the chaos, Lanhea calmly stated that the repayments were structured in installments with extremely low interest rates, offering them a chance to pay it back slowly. She continued her address to the stunned king, revealing that the very sword she used to defeat the Demon King, the Dragon Silver Sword Tail, Agartha, was forged in the Dragonstone Kingdom. She then delivered her final point. Of all the nations, only Dragonstone was dutifully repaying its debts. The king could only stammer in disbelief. Pressing her advantage, she posed a rhetorical question to the shaken monarch. When choosing an ally, isn't the choice between a nation in debt and one without obvious? With the king cornered, she formally asked if her reward, citizenship for herself and her master in the Dragonstone kingdom, and control of the treasure capital Lapis, was now approved. It was Princess Lucia who finally broke the tense silence, stammering that she understood the terms. Lanhea offered a polite thank you, stating that they had their own preparations to make and would now take their leave. As they departed, the young princess watched them go, her expression fraught with anxiety. Before disappearing completely, the hero paused and turned her head slightly, her voice carrying a sharp, menacing edge. She delivered a final, implicit threat, asking if the court understood what it would mean if anything were to happen to Princess Lucia. With her warning delivered, she swept from the hall. In her wake, King Barzeel could only stand in impotent rage, his knuckles white as he clenched his fists. Sometime later, within the bustling walls of the Dragonstone Kingdom's treasure capital, Lapis, citizens went about their day in a large, official-looking hall. There, sitting alone on a bench, Lanhea let out a long, weary sigh, the immense pressure of her recent confrontation finally showing on her face. Her moment of respite was interrupted by a familiar voice calling her name. She looked up from her seat, her eyes widening in surprise as she recognized Horus, her master. In an instant, her fatigue vanished, replaced by pure elation. She launched herself at him, wrapping him in a tight embrace and crying out his title with a beaming smile. Stumbling back from the force of her hug, he could only comment on how different her behavior was from usual as she celebrated their reunion. He tried to protest, explaining to a nearby official that he still had paperwork to finish, but Lanhea cheerfully interjected, telling him it was all because he was special. She cut him off completely, brandishing official documents and declaring there was no need. To his shock, she announced she had already obtained nationality and citizenship for him. Before he could react to her speed, she grabbed him and urged him to follow. As she pulled him along, he asked where they were going. With a bright smile, she announced their destination, their mansion. The word echoed in his mind, leaving him utterly bewildered. Her excitement grew as she explained she had secured the mansion through something called a Ruster report, eagerly suggesting they live together. Her forwardness made him flush, and he stammered that a girl her age shouldn't say such things. They arrived before a massive two-story building. Lanhea proudly presented it as their house, even calling it their love nest. Overwhelmed, Horus could only stare, sweating at the sheer scale of the residence. At the entrance, a woman in a maid's uniform stood waiting. She formally welcomed Lanhea back, and then addressed Horus directly, stating that she had been waiting for him. The maid, whom Lanhea greeted as Tiras, looked at Horus with a calm smile. She acknowledged that it had been a long time since they had last seen each other. With a polite chuckle, she offered to give him a tour of the house. She confessed that she had been waiting for the day when they could all live together under one roof, leaving Horus to trail behind her, still processing everything. Inside, Tiras explained the situation. The main cleaning was finished, but they hadn't tidied up yet. She confirmed that for the time being, there were no other people around. It was just the three of them. She then led him to a specific room, gesturing proudly to its contents. They had, she announced, prepared a dedicated workshop for him to create his golems. He stands in the workshop, amazed by the setup. Wow, you've really gone all out, he remarks. Lanhea, standing beside him, explains that she hasn't done anything to repay him for his help so far, and this is the least she could do. As he takes it all in, Tiras adds that with this setup, her master will be able to fully focus on his research. Horus, already inspecting the materials, agrees, marveling at the variety of metals available. He picks up a crystalline mineral, a thoughtful expression on his face. He realizes that with everything already in place, he can work ahead on a lot of things. This is a significant advantage, as it would normally take at least 4 years just to obtain citizenship. Overwhelmed with gratitude, he bows his head slightly and offers a heartfelt thank you. He's still amazed by the sheer quantity of rare metals available to him. His mind then turns to the practicalities, wondering aloud just how much all of this must have cost. Lanhea, however, waves it off nonchalantly, calling it mere pocket change. The casual dismissal leaves him stunned. Later, Lanhea walks alone towards the grand mansion, her expression determined. She raises a hand in a grand gesture, a confident smile playing on her lips. Now then, she declares, let's see it for ourselves. Her voice rings with anticipation as she proclaims her intent to witness the true strength of the hero's master. A young woman, Idrika, a court alchemist of the Chaos Stone Dragon Kingdom, arrives at an enormous mansion, sighing in exasperation at its sheer size after a long walk from the gate. Her companion, the hero Lanhea, advises her not to let it get to her. She steels herself, remembering she is there on an official request from Lady Lucia. Lanhea adds with a confident smirk that the one who should truly be nervous is the so-called mentor of the hero. Inside an opulent office, Idrika stands before Princess Lucia, who is seated at a large desk. The alchemist asks about the nature of the request, and Lucia dramatically declares that it is an investigation, startling Idrika. Lucia explains the necessity of the task. She confirms with Idrika that the kingdom has agreed to accept the hero's entire community, granting them all national citizenship. Because of this significant step, a proper evaluation of its members is required. Idrika expresses concern, noting that there are more than just a few members and questioning if she must investigate all of them. Lucia acknowledges that trusting them is a major question, but the scope of the investigation is more focused. She clarifies that it is only necessary to investigate the one who raised the hero, Horus. When Idrika asks why, Lucia explains it is because he is the hero's master. Lucia elaborates that since the hero holds him in such high regard, he might be a person of great character. Furthermore, she has heard he is a Golem Master, a claim Idrika can evaluate from a technical standpoint. Lucia challenges her to see for herself if his abilities are genuine or merely a bluff. The scene shifts to a sitting room where Lanhea informs Horus that they wish to see his abilities demonstrated in the underground magic power room. Lying casually on a sofa, Horus acknowledges her statement. He sits up and asks for clarification. Is this an official request from the government? Lanhea confirms that it is, and Horus calmly agrees to the evaluation. As they finalize the arrangement, Idrika appears nearby, looking on with a hint of apprehension. Lanhea turns to Horus and asks if she and the alchemist may observe the demonstration as well. He gazes down into the palace basement, speculating that while there could be many things down there, it most likely houses the power source for the mana pipes. Princess Lucia, standing nearby, asks him to clarify his meaning. To illustrate the concept, Tyrus explains to the princess how common stationary magic tools function. Much like flipping a switch for a light or fire, these devices are powered by mana supply from external source, which Lucia acknowledges with understanding. Horus elaborates on this system, describing how monster coins are loaded into a central core component. This core then converts the coins into energy, which is distributed to power homes and make daily life more convenient. Hearing his detailed explanation, Idrika addresses him directly. She presumes that as a Golem Master, he must be familiar with magical tools. Confirming that she is in charge of maintaining this system, she declares her intent to assess his skills while they are here. She stares at him intently, stating that a simple explanation is the bare minimum. With a stern expression, she warns him that her judgment will not be easily swayed. He looks back, puzzled by her intensity. Before Idrika can continue, Princess Lucia interjects, insisting that she will be the one to judge him. Surprised at first, Horus then smirks, remarking on her youthful declaration. His casual comment leaves the alchemist flustered and annoyed. Annoyed by his remark, Idrika grabs him by the pauldron. She agrees to show him the way, but warns that any failure will not be forgiven. Unfazed, he calmly accepts her terms. She leads him into a vast chamber filled with intricate pipework and machinery. Pointing towards a large, central apparatus, she identifies it as the main unit of the magic power supply room. Standing before the dormant machine, Idrika issues her challenge, get it running. Horus confidently states that he can, as he has experience setting up similar units in the Diamante Kingdom. His comparison seems to catch her off guard, but she concedes that it makes sense. She then asks if he understands the current situation, that the magic supply is completely stopped. He confirms his understanding, his gaze fixed intently on the silent machinery before him. He stands before the machine, but before he can begin, Princess Lucia offers an explanation. She states that the current hero's mansion is undergoing extensive renovations, and even with the main supply shut down, a current of magic still flows through the system. Idrika reacts with disbelief, questioning the statement aloud. In response to her skepticism, he turns to Lucia and asks if Tyrus had performed maintenance on the teleportation hub. The princess confirms with a smile that such a task would be simple for her maid. Idrika is left momentarily speechless by the implication. She struggles to process the information, her mind racing. She finds it unbelievable that someone could get to the mansion, let alone perform maintenance. She considers the possibility that Tyrus is simply exceptionally talented, or perhaps that a subordinate's incredible skill implies an even more amazing master. As she grapples with these thoughts, Horus decides it's time for action. Announcing that they'll find out the truth soon enough, he begins manipulating the controls of the dormant power supply. He opens a large panel on the machine, revealing its inner workings. So this is the core, he observes, noting that it appears to be a cluster of smaller components packed together. Princess Lucia, peering over the edge, asks what exactly the core is supposed to be. Idrika steps in to explain that the core is constructed from specially refined iron, designed to facilitate the easy flow of magic. She offers Horus a container of phosphorescent powder for testing, but cautions that if he uses appraisal magic, the results could be misleading. He takes the container and, with a gentle puff of breath, blows the powder across the core's surface. A small cloud of dust erupts, startling both Lucia and Idrika. Horus turns to the alchemist, asking if she said something, but she quickly denies it. With a sharp exhale, Idrika blows the lingering dust away from her face. From his position, Horus remarks on the filthiness of the component, reminding her that she is the one responsible for its repair. She begins wiping the core, and to her surprise, the pitch-black rime gives way to a cleaner, gray surface. She explains to the others that the core was originally gray and that ideally, it should turn white again when clean. However, she laments that once it's this badly blackened, a full restoration is impossible, so she's just doing what she can to return it to its gray state. After observing her work, Horus instructs her to do it one more time. Princess Lucia interjects, annoyed, reminding him that she is his employer and the one who gives orders. Ignoring her completely, he turns his attention back to the alchemist. "You're next," he commands, telling her to try it herself instead of just standing there. He and the others encouraged the court alchemist, telling her it would be fine. Visibly flustered, Idrika recoiled, grumbling that he clearly didn't think much of her to make her attempt this again. Seeing her hesitation, he took matters into his own hands, firmly gripping her wrist and guiding her hand onto the cleaning tool. She let out a choked gasp, her body tensing as he pressed her hand down onto the tool. The moment the tool, now guided by his touch, made contact with the core, the section turned brilliantly white, even purer than the part she had cleaned herself. Idrika cried out in shock while Horace laughed at her reaction. She couldn't believe what had just happened. She snatched her hand away, demanding to know how he had managed to achieve such a result. He calmly told her to simply try it, promising to walk her through the process. The alchemist stared, dumbfounded, admitting she had never seen a core come out so clean before. Turning his attention to Princess Lucia, he began to explain a fundamental principle. Magic naturally seeks stability and takes the form it desires. It isn't about forcing it into a shape. Lucia listened intently, acknowledging that she understood. He then instructed Idrika directly. She shouldn't just imagine the core turning white. She had to command it. With newfound determination, the alchemist focused her will on the task. The result was astonishing. Princess Lucia marveled that the core now looked even whiter than before. Idrika, meanwhile, had collapsed to the floor, utterly spent and muttering that the outcome was ridiculous and made no sense. Looking down at the drained alchemist, he offered a simple assessment. For a first try, it wasn't bad. Overwhelmed and flustered, Idrika raised a fist and declared she would sue him, though she had no one to whom she could complain. He coolly assessed the magic core, estimating its degradation had taken about 5 years, though he was unsure how he knew that. Beside him, the court alchemist Idrika was stunned, lamenting that it had taken her many years just to restore a core to a gray state. The hero, Lanhea, agreed, admitting she was jealous of his incredible skill. His display of power ignited a fire in Idrika. Through gritted teeth, she declared that she would now watch him so intently she'd burn holes into him, vowing to steal his technique. Lanhea remarked that this must be the power of the hero's master, a sentiment Horace acknowledged with a slight smile, adding that whether he met Idrika's standards was another matter entirely. Later that night, at the castle, Princess Lucia greeted the returning alchemist. Seeing Idrika in the doorway, she eagerly asked for a report on how her task had gone. Instead of reply, Lucia found Idrika slumped over a desk in a study, fast asleep and snoring. The princess looked on, puzzled by the unusual sight. She turned to her attendants, asking if something had happened to the alchemist. One of the men explained that Idrika had returned, stated she needed to make preparations, and then promptly collapsed. Lucia repeated the word preparations to herself, examining a small, glowing card in her hand. An attendant noted that while Idrika had been putting in a great deal of effort lately, she was now strangely fired up. Another added that her skill had improved significantly, which explained the large number of finished cards now spread across the table. Lucia surmised that Idrika must have witnessed something amazing from Horace. As an attendant apologized for the state of the room, explaining they were still in the maintenance period for the tower, the princess simply told him to keep up the good work. From the doorway, the attendants could be seen continuing their duties as the princess remained by the sleeping alchemist's side. She gazed down at Idrika's sleeping face, thinking it was the most peaceful she had looked in years. Lucia felt certain that the alchemist must have witnessed something truly incredible to be so at ease. Her quiet observation was shattered when Idrika suddenly shot upright, still asleep, and threw a punch. "Did you see that, Horace?" she yelled in her sleep. "Victory is mine." The outburst left Lucia completely startled. Meanwhile, deep within an underground magic chamber, a trio of robed technicians monitor a device. Suddenly, a blinding flash of energy erupts from the apparatus, causing one of them to cry out in alarm, demanding to know what is happening. A carriage drawn by 2 powerful horses thunders down a road, moving at an incredible speed. The sheer velocity is exhilarating for its passenger, Princess Lucia, whose eyes sparkle with delight as she exclaims that it's amazing. Watching from the roadside, a woman with hair buns resembling bear ears remarks on the carriage's incredible speed. A nearby guard confirms it's the one using the bearings Hollis created, noting that it's also carrying 30% more cargo. The guard explains further that while there's usually a limit to performance improvements, these new bearings will significantly reduce the cost of transporting metal from the treasure capital Lapis's dungeon. Hollis watches with a quiet satisfaction, acknowledging to himself that this level of enhancement was necessary. Improving transport capabilities, he reflects, is directly linked to national power, a crucial need for the Diamante Kingdom to move enough supplies for its people to survive. His knowledge impresses Princess Lucia, who notes that the hero mentioned similar things at the World Conference. She questions how he understands such logistics, pointing out that efficient office work alone can't manage such vast quantities of supplies. The bare-eared woman sputters in disbelief, recalling that Hollis had claimed to operate a huge number of worker golems, perhaps 500 of them, to handle tasks in the palace. He confirms this implicitly, explaining the situation with the refugees. With only a limited number of people able to work, they had to provide high-quality farming tools and develop better carriages just to transport the necessary food. His companion looks at him, realizing the truth. She remarks that his silence on the matter says a lot, confirming he really did accomplish it all. Hollis simply looks ahead, not responding. His attention shifts to the road, where he observes that while the blue flag carriage is fast, a red flag one is falling behind. The woman beside him smiles knowingly and asks if there might be trouble, but he calmly replies, no. He had explained that the new bearings almost completely eliminated friction. As a result, even if the carriage itself was heavier, the reduced resistance should make the load feel much lighter to the horses pulling it. He watches the animals, noting their apparent surprise. He concludes it is simply a matter of them getting used to the new sensation. Turning to the elegant noblewoman, he instructs her to let the horses run a great deal. She readily agrees, promising she will make sure of it. As they travel, his other companion, the one with bear-like ears, pores over some documents with a puzzled expression. She confesses that even looking at his plans, she cannot make sense of how he created the necessary equipment to produce the bearings in just 1 hour. Hollis asks what she is thinking about, explaining that his ability stems from having studied a broad range of subjects. To illustrate, he explains the concept of a GOLEM Master, a specialized technique that is a unique blend of 3 distinct disciplines: earth magic, magical tool creation, and alchemy. His companions listen, intrigued. The bare-eared woman remarks that mastering even one of those fields is difficult enough, requiring an incredible amount of knowledge. The noblewoman then asks Hollis how he typically learns so much. He replies that he reads books on subjects that might seem unrelated at first, believing they might connect for him later on. He downplays the difficulty, suggesting that if one already knows the necessary components, it isn't so hard. He points out that even the Golem Master technique was created by a genius who combined 3 different elements. His companion, however, questions if that approach isn't a lot of wasted time. Her words strike him with physical force. She elaborates that new technology is always a combination of various kinds of knowledge, and creating it requires constantly gathering information to form those combinations. She dismisses the idea of not wasting time as the complaint of people who lack proper planning. The critique hits Hollis hard. The noblewoman recalls that her companion, Idelica, has mentioned this before. As an example, she points out that whenever Hollis goes grocery shopping, he always returns with the fridge stuffed completely full. Embarrassed, Idelica shoves her friend, telling her not to bring that up. She then turns to Hollis, addressing him as Horace. The princess tells him he doesn't need to hold back around her and can just be his usual self. Her words leave him momentarily stunned, as he considers that being himself might indeed be easier. He found the situation strange, explaining that he was surprised by the cultural differences he encountered while studying technology in other countries. An elitist mindset, he noted, was quite rare in his homeland. The most surprising discovery was that in his country's schools, nobles and commoners were placed in the same classes based on their grades, a practice he found highly unusual as they were always separated elsewhere. Idelica elaborated that this ideology was unique. In other nations, nobles might know about the lives of poor families as abstract knowledge, but they lacked true understanding. Hollis agreed, recalling the dismissive attitudes of those who had never even heard of commoners. She continued, positing that when noble children grow up surrounded only by their peers, extravagant meals and wealth become their normal. The presence of a poor child sitting next to them in class would therefore be a significant and formative experience. If they were to see someone getting by with just a cheap school lunch, it would serve as a constant, tangible reminder of the world outside their privileged bubble. Hollis conceded her point, acknowledging that this societal structure was likely a fundamental part of their national character as they continued their journey. As they walked, Idelica changed the subject, asking Hollis about the technology he was using. She commented that it seemed rather old. He confirmed her suspicion without hesitation. It was indeed old, he explained, because as an adventurer and a Golem Master, there was a man he deeply admired. From his pack, he produced a well-cared-for book, presenting it to his companions. It was an autobiography, he revealed, written by his idol 100 years ago. The princess took the book, her eyes wide with excitement as she realized it was a book of adventures. Hollis added that it contained the records of the author's journey and the many inventions he created as a Golem Master. Before his companions can inspect the book further, Hollis snatches it back. Idelica playfully calls him stingy, but then her expression softens with understanding as she realizes the book's author must be the person Hollis so deeply admires. He holds the ancient tome carefully, defensively explaining that it would be a huge problem if it were accidentally torn. He questions what they take him for, clearly agitated by the thought of the book being damaged. He then reveals a secret. The book is filled with hidden ciphers. The revelation startles the princess, while Idelica, intrigued, playfully squishes the princess's cheeks. He continues, explaining that if decoded, the ciphers tell a grim story. 2,000 years ago, the world was usurped and plundered by 5 mysterious individuals, whose shadowy forms appear as a stark vision. His companions are stunned by the revelation. The princess asks what usurped means, while Idelica questions the number of individuals. Hollis clarifies that to defeat these 5, the power of a Golem Master is necessary. A sudden understanding dawns on Idelica. She realizes that this ancient, coded knowledge must be the very source of Holus's extraordinary skills as a Golem Master. He offers a slight, knowing smile and raises a finger to his lips, a silent confirmation that she has understood enough and that the topic is closed for now. She isn't satisfied, however, pointing out a glaring inconsistency. If the 5 usurpers were from 2,000 years ago, it seems strange that they would still be a threat, implying they have lived for an impossibly long time. He nonchalantly agrees with her point, but then abruptly changes the subject, announcing that it's time for them to head back, leaving his companions bewildered in the middle of the monumental discussion. He turns to Adelica, offering her some advice. He tells her that to become even more amazing, she should find something to admire for herself. The world, he explains, is filled with the history of people achieving incredible things, and she should witness them and decide her own path. She stands beside Holus, absorbing his words as he explains that magic power is formless, capable of becoming anything, and that its ultimate potential rests entirely with her. His words strike a chord within her. She clenches her fist, her face alight with newfound determination, and declares that she understands. Her enthusiastic response prompts the princess to offer assistance with their carriage, but Adelica smugly replies that she'll consider it if she finds the time. Their bickering is cut short by Holus, who curtly tells them both to be quiet. Having concluded their conversation, the group's journey brings them to their destination, the entrance to the legendary Kinsekai Great Vein, a renowned treasure of the Chaostin Dragonstone Kingdom, located in the capital city of Lapis. The imposing entrance opens into a vast interior. This Great Vein is, in fact, a massive dungeon where adventurers can secure high-quality metals as spoils from the monsters they defeat. Inside the bustling entrance hall, Holus surveys the other adventurers milling about as Adelica sits quietly on a chest, lost in thought. The commotion of the adventurers draws the attention of a finely dressed nobleman nearby, who complains about the noise. He is identified as Godal of the Emodiad Count family, and his companions note that the chatter is all about his famed holy sword. He basks in the attention as his companions eagerly plead to see the legendary weapon. Godal laughs with undisguised arrogance, clearly reveling in their fawning admiration. His gaze drifts across the hall, his expression smug, as others murmur about the rare opportunity to witness a holy sword. He then overhears 2 adventurers confirming that the hero Lanhea has indeed entered the dungeon. The news sparks a thought in Godal's mind. With a hero present, this could be the most profitable expedition in history. Within the dungeon's antechamber, one adventurer expresses shock to another, having just learned that the hero has a mentor. His companion clarifies that her presence isn't for profit, but for a training session. Before the conversation can continue, Godal violently grabs the dark-haired adventurer by the collar, lifting him off his feet. He furiously demands how a mere commoner dares to speak of the hero, announcing his own status as a member of the Emodiad Count family. He smirks, promising to show the struggling man something good. Spotting the hero, Lanhea, across the way, Godal declares his intention to go to her, dragging the captive adventurer along with the growing crowd. From a stone balcony above, a pair of onlookers note that the spectacle has not yet begun. Below, in a cleared training area, Holus calmly picks up a simple wooden sword. A large gate opens, revealing Lanhea standing before the assembled crowd. She apologizes to Holus, whom she addresses as Master, for the large audience that is gathered. He tells her not to mind, admitting he was the one who permitted them to watch. Her words send a ripple through the crowd, who had believed the hero to be a secretive person. Lanhea herself looks surprised by their reaction, her eyes widening slightly. She quickly regains her composure, turning her determined gaze back to Holus. With resolve, she announces that she is ready to begin. As Holus stands poised with his wooden practice sword, Lanhea steps forward into the training ground, her own gleaming long sword now drawn and ready. From his place among the spectators, Godal points and shouts with derision, questioning how this man could possibly be the hero's mentor. He scoffs, declaring Holus's stance to be that of a complete beginner. Lanhea advises her master not to worry about the nobleman, but Godal leans in toward Holus, his voice dripping with contempt, suggesting that if the hero was taught by someone so weak-looking, then her very title is questionable. He stands before the crowd, who have turned on Holus, shouting for him to get lost. They declare they are only there to watch the hero's training, adding to the nobleman's irritation. His frustration boils over. He grabs a handful of Langea's hair, sneering that it's absurd so many fools believe a mere commoner could defeat the Demon King. The aggressive act draws a sharp, surprised look from Lanhea, while Holus's gaze hardens at the blatant disrespect. Releasing her, Godal draws a gleaming blade. He announces his full title, Godal Emodiad, eldest son of the Count Emodiad family and wielder of the Holy Sword from the Shinichika Church. He vows to personally expose Holus's deception. The confrontation is interrupted as the training match begins. Lanhea lunges, her sword clashing against Holus's raised forearm. Watching from the side, Godal scoffs that Holus is merely running and throwing tantrums. His companion agrees, noting that Holus seems to believe he's on par with the class destined to defeat Demon Kings. During the exchange, Lanhea admits she doesn't understand Holus's principles, to which he simply replies that it's quite simple. Godal's voice rises in fury, accusing Lanhea of either running from the Demon King or spreading false rumors of victory. He proclaims that a weakling like Hollis, training a commoner, could never achieve such a feat, igniting his holy sword with power. He lunges forward, roaring that he will carve this truth into Hollis's very body. As the nobleman charges, Hollis turns his head slightly and utters a single command. Move it! A sudden, invisible force erupts from him, blasting Godal backward through the air with a cry of pain. He hits the ground hard, struggling for breath as his companions hurry to his side in a panic. Hollis stands unmoved, calmly stating a fundamental principle. Magic power always seeks stability. He continues his explanation, revealing that the magic power drew in the surrounding air, creating a massive wave of pressure. He clarifies that he did nothing more than slam that focused pressure directly into his attacker. As Godal is helped to his feet, utterly defeated, Lanhea reflects internally that her mentor is, as she always knew, no ordinary man. Hollis looks down on the nobleman and his retinue, stating coolly that for an opponent of Godal's level, neither a sword nor magic is necessary. A simple glare is sufficient. He stood calmly as Lanhea observed him, her mind racing. She processed the fact that he had just taken down a holy sword wielder, a trained swordsman, with nothing more than a simple glare. She recalled that intense intimidation should manifest a specific color, yet it had been utterly transparent, a sign of its immense, formless power. Breaking from her thoughts, she approached him with an admiring smile, declaring it was just as she expected from her master. Her praise prompted him to recall how Tiras used to say he had eyes like cannons, a comparison he now conceded was not too far from the truth. Her voice, sharp and determined, cut through his brief reverie. She slapped the flat of her blade against her gauntlet, a sharp sound that drew his full attention. With a confident look, she announced that this time, their duel would proceed for certain. In response, he unleashed another wave of invisible force, a powerful pressure that stopped her in her tracks. He questioned her, asking what was wrong, and pointing out that if she couldn't even close the distance against this, there was no point in trying to make her stronger. Gritting her teeth against the immense force, she defiantly vowed to press forward. He held the pressure wave in check with a single, outstretched hand, noting how light she felt against his power. He reminded her of what he'd written in his letter. The Demon King was gone, but their fight was not over. He admonished her for growing rusty, stating that he would retrain her himself if necessary. As she strained against the force, he continued his assessment, questioning if her current strength was even 100 times what it used to be. He challenged her to come at him with everything she had, assuring her they had plenty of time. With a determined cry, she broke through his pressure and lunged forward, sword ready. Her sudden breakthrough brought a faint, approving smile to his face. Seeing his reaction, she grinned in triumph, a quiet yes, escaping her lips. Despite this small victory, she looked down at her own blade and then back towards him, a sober realization dawning on her. She knew, without a doubt, that her master's strength was still on an entirely different level, far ahead of her own. This realization did not discourage her. Instead, her expression hardened with resolve. She vowed to herself that someday, she would not only stand by his side as an equal, but she would surpass even that. Inside a room at an inn, a stern-faced nobleman confronts his son, Urif Chiod, who kneels before him. The father demands to know what his son was thinking, calling him a fool. Urif, looking up from the floor, asks what he means. His father, Count Amodiad, reminds him that while Urif was correct that commoners spreading lies about the Demon King's defeat were causing trouble, it was foolish to directly pick a fight with them. He then reveals the devastating truth. The Amodiad family is in debt for 20,000 gold coins to an entity called Luster Report, leaving Urif stunned. He continues, his voice rising with agitation, explaining that 20,000 gold coins is 100 times the family's annual budget. Now that the Demon King is officially defeated, they are obligated to repay the debt. Despite having already received over 100,000 gold coins in aid, the massive debt still looms over them. His son, agitated, slams a fist against the window frame. A smirk crosses Urif's face as he proposes a simple, albeit audacious, solution. They just need to force the heroes to admit they didn't actually defeat the Demon King. The Count immediately dismisses the idea with a booming voice, questioning his son's sanity. He reminds Urif that it was the World Conference that officially recognized the Demon King's defeat. How could they possibly contradict the entire world? He explains that their plan had been to negotiate a lower interest rate, but Urif's reckless actions have ruined any chance of that. The Count laments that even for a noble family that wields a holy sword, one the royal family would pay for, this situation is beyond their influence. The Count's explanation grows more desperate. The annual budget from the royal family is a paltry 200 gold coins, which would barely cover a 1% interest rate. Furthermore, the holy sword itself cost them a massive fee payable to the Shinichika Church. Urif stares at the sword, wondering how their situation became so dire. His father reveals another layer to their predicament. The Shinichika Church is also massively in debt to Luster Report and is actively squeezing money from various countries to stay afloat. The revelation causes Urif to cover his face in despair. He drives the point home, stating that it's no exaggeration to say the entire world is being maintained by the gold supply by Luster Report. And yet, knowing this, Urif still chose to pick a fight with the leader of the hero community. Yurif lets out a cry of anguish. The weight of the revelation is too much. Yurif grabs his sword and bolts for the door. His father, caught off guard, calls out for him to wait, demanding to know where he is going. Sometime later, the mage engineer Horus walks alone down a wooded path, a sack of supplies slung over his shoulder, lost in thought. His contemplation is shattered as the tip of a sword appears inches from his face, halting his advance. An unseen assailant issues a sharp command. Don't move. The voice demands he order his disciple to erase the debt owed by the Amodiad family. He remains unfazed by the threat, calmly addressing the hooded figure. He notes that his attacker must have resorted to an ambush because they couldn't win a direct fight, then incorrectly ventures a guess at their identity, asking, "If I recall, your name was Godal, right?" The ambusher flinches, startled. "Itch, how do you know that?" Horus simply explains that he could sense the distinct aura of the holy sword from a great distance. His cover blown, the man, Yurif, throws back his hood with a snarl, readying his blade to press the attack. He lunges forward, declaring that this is not a threat, but a command from the eldest son of the Count Amodiad family. In his agitated state, he misidentifies his target, shouting, "Godal Amodiad, and I am ordering you." Horus remains perfectly still, considering the demand. He realizes that if he were to tell them the truth of the matter, they would likely just burn the contract right there. His thoughts drift to the hero's party. The money they borrowed wasn't a handout. It was earned through their own strength, defeating powerful monsters on their arduous journey to slay the Demon King. To erase their debt would be to deny their very accomplishments. Yurif bellows that he doesn't care about any of that. From his perspective, it is a commoner's absolute duty to obey the orders of a noble. His face twists into a manic grin as he lays out his warped logic. He claims it's not his fault, it's their fault for surviving. If they had simply died on their journey, there would be no debt to repay. As he rants, Horus listens with a cynical smile, recalling that the celebrated heroes party was once just another group from the adventure community. He remains still as Yurif's father shouts, demanding to know why he's being told to stop and insisting that he is the one who should be giving orders. In response to the command, Yurif finds his body has frozen in place. He stammers in confusion as Horus calmly reminds him of a principle he'd mentioned before. Magic power seeks stability. He elaborates, explaining that the human body stores magic in a separate dimension, and the holy sword strengthens the body by flooding it with that power. By simply intimidating Yurif and commanding him to listen, Horus can use this overwhelming presence to paralyze him. Yurif trembles, completely immobilized. Horus continues, stating that only individuals capable of generating sufficient pressure to counter his intimidation can move freely when he wields the holy sword. He concludes that someone like Yurif is not capable of standing up to a Golem Master. His gaze hardens as he asks Yurif if he learned anything from the pain of their last encounter. He declares that for fools who refuse to listen, the only cure is a good punch. Terror fills Yurif's eyes as he pleads for Horus to stop. Ignoring the nobleman's desperate cries, he draws back his fist, telling him to simply take the blow without resisting. The punch lands with incredible force, sending Yurif flying backward through the air. He crashes violently to the ground some distance away, kicking up a cloud of dirt and debris. As he stands over the scene, Lanhea appears nearby. She calls out to him, explaining that she could sense the presence of the holy sword from outside. She and Tiras observe the unconscious form of Yurif crumpled on the ground. Tiras remarks with a smile that it wasn't a big deal, even if Horus had been left alone. Lanhea identifies the aftermath as the result of a golem punch iron fist punishment. He examines his own fist, explaining that due to the modifications he has made to his body, even a normal punch from him carries the force of a golem strike. He reflects that with men like Yurif, a punch is necessary to make them learn. Otherwise, they will simply repeat their mistakes. He kneels in the garden, tending to the grounds as Lanhea remarks on Godal's earlier complaints. He dismisses them with a rustle of leaves, stating that if he got worked up over every piece of nonsense, he'd go insane. He explains that when running things in the capital, one receives hundreds of requests and complaints daily, a number that surprises Lanhea. Lanhea muses that since commoners are now the ones solving problems, it's become easier for them to voice their opinions. As she speaks, Tiras arrives, explaining that in the Diamante Kingdom, only nobles were originally supposed to work in the castle. Horus interjects, clarifying that due to the Demon King exception, commoners began to be hired as staff, which is when they suddenly started complaining about all sorts of things. He continues, recalling that some citizens would immediately jump to extreme conclusions whenever social issues arose. They would spread radical ideas and incite others, shouting things like, "You live off our taxes, so listen to us." He concludes that it's more important not to get swept up by such rhetoric. Letting out a frustrated puff of air, he admits that if it were permitted, he would have smacked them. Lanhea offers her sympathy, acknowledging he must have had a difficult time, while Tiras simply observes with a curious, "Oh." Their conversation is interrupted by a friendly hello from a local woman and a young girl who have approached them. Lanhea and Tiras turn toward the unexpected visitors. The woman offers them a large basket filled with produce and fresh bread. She thanks them warmly, mentioning she also bakes some sweets for everyone to enjoy. Tiras accepts the gift, her face lighting up with delight. As Tiras accepts the thank you gift, Lanhea realizes that the abundance of sweets and fruits they've had at the mansion lately must also have been gifts. Horus confirms her suspicion, reminding her of the maintenance he performed on the power unit of the city's magic chamber. He explains that because of his work, the efficiency of the city's magic power supply has dramatically improved. A diagram illustrates how the flow of magic, once impeded, now runs smoothly. As a result, the amount of monster coins needed to power the city's magical tools has been reduced to a mere 20 or 30% of the previous consumption, a fact that astonishes Lanhea. The direct consequence of this improvement was an official announcement from the palace. The tax rate would be significantly lowered. A local man reads the news, understanding that the tax cut is a form of thank you from the administration. In the background, the grateful woman and child are seen celebrating. Tiras elaborates for Langia's benefit, explaining that the Dragonstone Kingdom maintains a very high level of transparency with its national budget, making it easy for citizens to understand the nation's finances. Lanhea processes this, realizing the kingdom isn't just thinking about saving money. They're actively doing so and passing the benefits on to the people. She watches from a distance as a child points toward a public spectacle, asking their mother what is happening. The hero recognizes the name Godal and grimaces, thinking to herself that it's something good children shouldn't have to witness. Later, as she walks alongside Horace, his small companion notes that he doesn't seem very happy. Horace, clutching a bag of gifts from the townspeople, admits that he's surprised by the difference in national character, but clarifies that he is cooperating with this country for his own goals. Lanhea quietly acknowledges his statement. As he walks on ahead, his companion speculates on the reason for his muted reaction. It muses that when someone does something amazing, they'd usually expect a reward, but perhaps because Horace worked at the castle for so long without ever being praised or thanked, he's simply not used to it. Nearby, Tiras offers Lanhea a different perspective. She posits that Horace doesn't unconsciously expect gratitude, because if his abilities had stood out too much in his former home, he likely would have been targeted by the Demon King. Lanhea absorbs this, realizing it's a harsh but plausible reality. Meanwhile, in the Diamante Kingdom's royal office, King Barzil stares out at the castle, overwhelmed. He comes to a staggering realization. There's far too much to handle, and somehow, Horace had been managing the entire core of the world's largest nation all by himself. His thoughts are shattered as an armored guard bursts into the room. The king flinches, startled by the intrusion. The guard urgently reports that the bearings on the food transport carriages are damaged, and they have no replacement parts. Annoyed, the king mutters that the guard could have at least not. Before he can process the first crisis, another official rushes in with more bad news. The stationary magical devices throughout the capital are malfunctioning. Exhaling a plume of smoke, the weary king laments that the kingdom has fallen so far they can't even secure enough paper to make proper reports. The city's convenient lifestyle is supported by these stationary magical devices, but their functionality is entirely dependent on a properly maintained magic power supply. Now, with Horace gone, the system is failing, evidenced by a flickering street lamp on a dark city street. Surrounded by his noble-born alchemists, King Barzil understands the root of the problem. Most of the staff meant to handle maintenance are trained more in rhetoric than in actual skills. He concludes with despair that there is no way for the kingdom to grow under these conditions. The kingdom's deficiencies are stark. Too few people capable of doing their jobs, no spare parts for bearings, and no remaining operation manuals. It's speculated that since Horace was a golem master, he likely possessed a magical tool for dimensional storage, which explains how he managed everything. An empty shelf stands as a testament to the kingdom's depleted state. He listened to the grim report from an armored guard. It was as he thought. The kingdom's prosperity had been entirely dependent on Horace. The guard warned that public frustration was mounting over unresolved issues, a situation that could escalate into a riot. He further explained that while magical tools work the same for anyone, golems were different. The guard stammered that they lacked manpower, but the king was unmoved. He reminded the guard that a golem's performance varies by user and sarcastically asked if the man would prefer to work 10 times harder. After a flustered apology, the king gave a cold order. Tell the commoners to solve their own problems. He let out a weary sigh once alone, rubbing his chin in thought. The king knew they had to ensure food deliveries were carried out smoothly. If that system failed, the kingdom would lose its title as the world's largest nation. His brief moment of quiet was shattered by a court official bursting in to announce an emergency. The official reported that Godal Emodiad, eldest son of the count, had confronted the hero's mentor, ordered him to erase a debt, and then knocked the man out. The king's eyes widened in disbelief and fury. He listened intently as the official elaborated. For now, the hero's side had made no demands. However, the Emodiad family's debt was a staggering 20,000 gold coins. The king grimaced, realizing that just paying the 1% interest, 200 coins, would wipe out an entire noble's annual budget. He turned to a window, his mind racing. The king recalled that the Emodiad family had been granted their title of count because of the Holy Sword, yet their lands possessed no significant industry. Had they used their noble budget for public investment, things might have been different. His decision made, he turned back to the stunned official. The king gave a clear command: prepare 20,000 gold coins. They will be taken from the royal treasury to pay off the debt. The official could only ask if he was serious. The king continued without pause, ordering him to strip the Emodiad count family of their assets, leaving them with a bare minimum. The rest was to be confiscated for the royal family, and the Emodiads themselves were to be exiled to the frontier. The king, however, was lost in a memory. He owed Godal's father, Count Amodiad, a great debt. He recalled an event 12 years prior, during the Labyrinth outbreak at the far eastern edge of the kingdom, where he had put the Count through so much. He recalled that if not for Godal's efforts back then, a massive blunder would have cost him his position as crown prince. Snapping back to the present, he ordered the official to settle the matter. As the man departed, the king clenched his fist, vowing not to let anyone get carried away again. Elsewhere, the hero Lanhea reviews a document confirming the successful delivery of 20,000 gold coins to her community. The sight of the actual receipt, however, causes her a pang of anxiety, a veritable stomach ache. Meanwhile, at the royal castle, King Barziel's quiet moment is shattered by a court official bursting into the room. The official breathlessly announces that there is an urgent matter requiring the king's immediate attention, prompting a weary sigh from the monarch. The source of the urgency is a large document, which the king stares at in disbelief. What is this?" he exclaims, his voice trembling with incipient rage. "What on earth are they doing?" His hands tremble as he grips the report. The official explains that the son of the Count's family has been publicly insulting the hero community's facilities in various locations. The king is appalled, realizing that assaults have been occurring and questioning if there is a concerted effort to ruin the country. He demands to know the specifics of what was said, as they have managed to gather information from those involved. He reflects on the recent past, how the incident with the Amodiad family, where the heir drew the holy sword against the hero's mentor, was supposedly settled. The resolution involved the king repaying their debt and exiling the family head and heir to the frontier. But now, he questions if the matter was truly resolved at all. His thoughts turn to the deeper conspiracy. He recalls reports detailing how certain noble families, angered by the commoners' perceived arrogance and preference for the heroes, had manipulated the situation. They made the families of their own proud sons co-signers for debts, then deliberately provoked those sons into causing trouble, creating a pretext for action. As a result of this scheming, the plan to solve the debt crisis by sacrificing a few Count families had gained traction. The king's face twists in fury, realizing his own actions, repaying the debt and apologizing to settle things, played right into their hands, leading to the Amodiad's exile while the true culprits benefited. The realization causes his rage to boil over. He slams his fist down with tremendous force, roaring, "Are they making a fool of me?" He orders the official to investigate why this is happening, only for the man to calmly state that they have already looked into it. The official begins to speak, explaining that after His Majesty drafted the document for the 20,000 gold coins, a study session was held, led by the Duke's family. As he listens, the king clenches his fist, internally admitting his own miscalculation. "I never imagined they'd be this foolish," he thinks. He clarifies the situation, his voice low and intense. The incident with the Amodiad family was only resolved because the hero's mentor let it slide. Furthermore, he owed Godal a favor, making it a special case. He concludes with disdain that they are all fools who can only see the surface of things. He is struck dumb by the figure presented to him. A court official confirms the total amount of the debt, 1 billion gold coins. He processes the astronomical sum, noting internally that the nation's entire yearly budget is only 10 million gold coins. He cannot fathom how they are expected to suddenly repay an amount 100 times that. The official frets over where they could possibly acquire such money, acknowledging that the royal family must pay. The thought is cut short as the king erupts, slamming his fist down in a fit of pure rage and frustration. Meanwhile, in a quieter location, the maid Tiras calmly prepares tea. She reflects on the news of simultaneous attacks on hero community facilities and the Diamante Kingdom's subsequent offer to repay 20,000 gold coins, thinking to herself that she knew it would come to this. She sips her tea and comments to the hero, Lanhea, that their opponents may have cunning but possess a narrow perspective. Lanhea, looking up from a document, disagrees, stating that she doesn't find them particularly smart, but that clever people who lack imagination often do interesting things. The document she holds is a newspaper, its headline questioning if the Diamante Kingdom is turning against the hero community. Reading about the outrage among members, Lanhea agrees with the sentiment, but asks aloud what they should do and how much the kingdom's total debt is. Tiras explains the situation, stating that to pay off the massive problem in one go would require 1 billion gold coins. She relays King Barziel's own disbelief, as he doubted they could ever afford such an amount. Lanhea asks how they should settle the matter. With a bright smile, Tiras proposes an alternative. Instead of money, they should simply take something they want from the kingdom. The idea seems to please Lanhea. She mulls over the suggestion, her thoughts turning to her master. She considers that acquiring metals usable for golems would be a good idea, but her expression suggests she is weighing other options. Suddenly, an idea strikes her. With a confident wink, Lanhea announces her plan. They will take the antenna from the capital city of the Diamante Kingdom. She listened intently as Tiras confirmed the existence of such an antenna within the capital. The maid explained that while their master's golem control range is currently limited to a mere 3-meter radius, the antenna would change everything. With it, he had once been capable of managing the entire capital single-handedly. Tiras elaborated, noting that constructing such a device in the capital would be incredibly difficult, requiring advanced technology and rare materials. Langia's expression grew serious as she considered this. Even if creating the antenna itself were simple, their master wasn't currently focused on creating large golems anyway, adding another layer of complexity to their plan. Despite the challenges, their resolve solidified in an instant. With matching grins of pure excitement, the two slapped their hands together in a pact. They would go and take the antenna. King Barzil sits in contemplation, a grave document before him. He senses a pivotal moment is upon them, thinking to himself that if there is a major turning point, it is now. He is addressed by a court official standing before his grand desk. The king looks up from his papers, his expression weary. The official speaks with conviction, stating that, to be honest, he does not wish to accept the demand that has been presented. He explains his reasoning to the king, whom he addresses as Reiser. If they hand over the antenna to the hero community, they have been promised huge benefits concerning the kingdom's debt. The king confirms Reiser has read the proposal and asks why he is against it. The king presses the issue, asking why they shouldn't seize the opportunity. He then lays bare the kingdom's dire financial state, revealing that even a full year's national budget wouldn't be enough to pay off the debt. As it stands, the kingdom of Diamante can barely afford even 1% of the interest. Reiser's thoughts drift to Horus, the hero's master. He speculates that Horus must have sacrificed his operational range in exchange for enhanced control capabilities. Returning his focus to the king, he warns that if they surrender the antenna now and Horus were to one day return, the situation would be irrevocably different. The king, stroking his beard, urges him to go on. The monarch then asks if Reiser has read the 3 great records of super ancient history, a collection of foundational texts on magic and alchemy. Reiser confirms he has, and the king agrees, indicating the text's relevance. Reiser connects his theory to current events, proposing that Horus is active in their country specifically because the antenna is located there. The king follows the logic, surmising that Horus is likely using the antenna as a relay to compensate for the range he lacks. The king nods in solemn agreement. He concludes that this strategic reliance on the antenna is probably Horus's only reason for being in their kingdom at all. As the king considered the implications of their discussion, his official, Reiser, voiced a shared regret. He admitted that he, too, had hoped they might be able to invite Horus back to the castle, citing records that prove his long and loyal service. He then shifted the topic back to the present crisis, asking what the nobles had said. The king, holding a letter, prompted his official, confirming Reiser's suspicion that the nobles had also read the document. His expression hardening, Reiser insisted on knowing their exact words. He pointed out that since the antenna was not currently in use anywhere in the country, it should be a simple matter to relinquish it. The king slumped in his chair, burying his face in his hand with a weary sigh. He relayed the noble's callous opinion. If handing over useless trash would keep the country safe, then it was a fine trade, as commoner fools are easy to handle. King Barzil could only lament what unimaginative people they were. Reiser offered a piece of counsel, reminding his king that a ruler must never neglect subordinates capable of providing accurate reports. He stated that leaders must not believe anything they haven't seen with their own eyes, emphasizing the critical importance of gathering information firsthand. The words struck a deep chord. King Barzil rose from his seat, his fist clenched in a moment of stark clarity. He finally truly understood the wisdom of his father, which he had once dismissed as mere idealism. With newfound resolve, he announced his decision. They would accept the hero's demand. He commanded Reiser to prepare for the handover of the antenna, an order that caught the official by surprise. He confirmed it was his final decision. The king accepted that this meant forfeiting any possibility of the hero's master returning to their country. However, he added a grim warning. He had no intention of guaranteeing the peace the nobles so desired. The king's true plan then became terrifyingly clear. He commanded Reiser to compile a list of all suitable dungeons within the kingdom, declaring his intent to imprison every last one of the nobles. With a bow, Reiser acknowledged the order. As he absorbed the command, the official reflected on the king's startling transformation. Just a few days ago, His Majesty would only surround himself with foolish sycophants. Now, he was acting with decisive, ruthless authority. The court official offers his assessment of the mage, remarking that Horus seems to be the type of person who can accomplish anything if he truly applies himself. From behind, King Barzil gazes out the window, questioning if the hero's master is angry with them. He concludes it's because they failed to properly value the work he had done. The official elaborates, stating he doesn't believe Horus is the type to care about such slights. He points out how satisfied Horus was after merely punching the count's eldest son, even after the noble had drawn his holy sword. The king concedes the point, realizing Horus has no reason to be interested in them. He then asks the king directly if he still has regrets. With his hands clasped behind his back, King Barzil hesitates for a moment before quietly denying it. Elsewhere in the castle, a conversation is overheard. One person notes they've seen commoners complaining, while another remarks that it was only a matter of time before people grew tired of the situation. As they speak, the court official walks past, carrying a large wooden crate. The king, alone again, grips his head in frustration, lamenting that they have no choice but to give up on Horus. He reasons that if they apologize and maintain a proper distance, their relationship at least won't worsen. Observing from a distance, The official notes to himself that the king was acting composed until recently, but is now behaving like a worrying maiden in love. He reflects that it was impossible from the start for someone of Horus's caliber to be confined by this kingdom. Suddenly, the king's demeanor changes as an idea strikes him. He suggests sending a bonus from the underground vault along with the antenna. The official is taken aback by the suggestion, but the king simply dismisses him. As he departs, the official peeks back through the doorway, overhearing the king speaking to himself. King Barzeel expresses his regret as a monarch for being unable to properly reward Horus for his efforts. His resolve hardening, the king declares that they are merely returning things to their proper state. Even if Horus claims to be done with them, they cannot object. He believes that if this action leads to the country's growth, they will eventually be able to repay everything, all depending on how the bonus turns out. The narrative shifts to a vast, crystalline cave where Horus ventures forward. He suddenly halts, his senses alerting him to a presence, and he whirls around in surprise. From high above, a creature resembling a bird made of sharp metal dives toward him. He crouches, ready for the attack, as a faint wisp of energy emanates from his hand. As it streaks past, he analyzes the foe. He deduces that a creature made of metal can only fly by using magic and notes that in this unexplored territory, his usual aura-based advantage is gone. He steels himself for a different kind of fight. The metallic bird screeches, its body crackling with energy from an unseen blow. He watches the effect, calmly assessing that his attack had at least some impact. Following this thought, a small, glowing object materializes in his gloved hand. He decides a stronger approach is needed. From a swirl of energy, he summons a large, gun-like weapon, identifying it as a gun-type golem he wishes to test. Taking aim, he fires a powerful blast of energy from the golem's barrel straight at the diving creature. The shot connects, sending the metallic bird reeling. It cries out as it plummets from the air, crashing hard against the cavern floor below. After the fight, he inspects a small, glowing cube left behind by the creature. A flicker of disappointment crosses his face as he concludes it was weaker than he expected. Having collected a large sack full of the cubes, he sets about breaking them open with a hammer, revealing the valuable contents. His task complete, he decides it's time to return. He was in the warehouse, kneeling amidst crates of materials from his recent expedition. Lanhea approached, addressing him as Master and noting his location. He sorted through the crystalline ores, designating one for disposal while deciding to keep another. As she watched him, Tiras arrived carrying a tray. The maid remarked that he had been working tirelessly since his return from the dungeon, when he ought to be resting. A concerned Lanhea then asked him directly what he was doing. He turned from his task to answer Tiras, explaining that he was sorting the items into things he would keep and things he would not. The maid observed that, from her perspective, the ores he was handling looked exactly the same as others he had gathered before. To clarify, he explained that a sufficiently high appraisal skill allows one to perceive differences in quality even when items appear identical. He demonstrated with 2 crystals, one rated with 3 stars and the other with only 1, a distinction that left Tiras utterly astonished. This new understanding prompted Tiras to wonder if the ores she had gathered might have contained low-quality junk. Horus dismissed her concern, stating that he could easily adjust for such minor impurities with his alchemy. He added that rare ores from the deeper layers of the dungeon are especially useful for enhancements. His mind briefly returned to the dungeon, recalling the low drop rates for such materials and the immense hassle of navigating the labyrinthine paths to its deeper levels. Lanhea, having listened to the exchange, then asked if the high quality or heed just obtained was beyond his ability to refine. He confirmed that it was, explaining that his expertise as a Golem Master is a hybrid discipline, a midpoint between Earth attribute magic, alchemy, and magic tool creation. He paused, picking up a cup of hot liquid from the tray Tiras had brought. After a moment, he clarified that he does not specialize in the kind of alchemy that specifically manipulates metals. Taking a sip, he declared that since the initial sorting was complete, he would leave the rest to Tiras and the others. Just as he settled, Lanhea suddenly called out to him, having remembered something important. He looked over intrigued. She asked him directly if he wanted the bonus medal. The word caught his attention, and he repeated it as a question. Bonus. He listens as Lanhea clarifies the nature of the bonus medal. She explains that the Diamante Kingdom is sending an antenna, a deal they agreed to in exchange for reducing their debt. She then confides that she doesn't really plan on managing the country anymore. The bonus, she reveals while gesturing to a neatly wrapped package, was delivered to them first. She elaborates on her motive, explaining that she thought if his control range could be extended, he would be able to create even better golems. Horus concedes that her reasoning makes sense, even though no average item can expand the range of a master-level user. As they sit together, Lanhea remarks with a laugh that the device was quite convenient after all. Tiras smiles in agreement, while Horus remains contemplative with his arms crossed. His thoughts turn to a practical issue. He asks why the kingdom wasn't using such a valuable antenna in the capital, explaining that for it to work properly, the magic power flowing through it must meet the antenna's specific standards. She confirms his assessment. The kingdom's magic didn't meet the required standards. Furthermore, they didn't know how to create magic that would be compatible. Tiras correctly deduces that the antenna wasn't made by the kingdom. Horus affirms this, revealing it was crafted by Zetsioration, a legendary creator of super ancient magic tools, and that the kingdom had only acquired it by a twist of fate. Lanhea adds that it was stored in the castle's underground vault, a fact that seems to surprise Tiras. Horus shakes his head, remarking that letting it sit unused was a waste, and that they're making a big deal out of this bonus. With the history lesson over, Langia's excitement returns. She eagerly urges him to open the package, admitting she has always wanted to. Tiras chimes in with her own encouragement, but Horus looks utterly exasperated. She leans in, asking for his thoughts. He sighs, speculating that the kingdom was pretty sure to have sent it without knowing what it really was. He stared at the item, his mind racing. He declared that this single object would advance his research by a full decade. Tiras, taken aback, asked if this meant it was something he didn't actually need. He confirmed her suspicion with a simple, firm no. His declaration left both Lanhea and Tiras in stunned silence, their eyes wide with shock. Horus himself broke into a nervous sweat, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what he now held. He, however, was lost in thought, examining the small book-like object. It was amazing, he mused, what people didn't know. From his perspective, trying to obtain this through normal means would have been entirely dependent on luck. He explained this realization aloud, noting that since he lacked a direct route for his research, he had tried to avoid this particular path. He concluded with a smile that King Barzil must have sent it without any knowledge of what it could do, making it the perfect gift. Lanhea, still processing the item's importance, asked if it was truly so amazing. Horus elaborated with a hypothetical. If his work had been properly appreciated after the Demon King's defeat, and he had been asked to continue working at the castle to keep the hero in the kingdom, he would have agreed. He continued his hypothetical scenario, imagining King Barzil offering him a lab and this very item as compensation. In that situation, he admitted he would have simply nodded his head over and over in acceptance. Bringing the conversation back to the present, Tiras asked if there was any chance he would work at the castle again. Horus's response was immediate and firm. Not a chance. His opinion of the kingdom's people hadn't changed, and besides, being stationed at the castle would prevent him from reaching the Grand or Vein of Kinsekai. He would have left anyway. At this, Lanhea saw her opportunity. She asked Horus if he would like to write off the Diamante Kingdom's debt now. Tiras smiled slyly, remarking that with the debt gone, she could already see the nobles getting in way over their heads. Lanhea agreed it was fine, since they had given her such a great gift. Horus quickly grasped the underlying motive, asking if she planned to provoke a few idiots by using the no more debt news as bait, only to make an example of them. With a confident smirk, Lanhea confirmed his suspicion. If they forgot how much weight the title hero truly carried, she would make sure they remembered. Her plan was set in motion immediately. The very next day, a stunned King Barzil reread the same letter 5 times. The message was short and world-altering. The kingdom's debt is erased. At the gates of an opulent estate, word spreads of another arrival. A new hero has come, joining the others. A female guard posted at the entrance takes in the news. She understands this is part of the post-war gathering, a consequence of the cleanup after the Demon Lord's defeat. Her thoughts are interrupted by commotion. A portly, well-dressed man angrily accosts a young boy, demanding he not touch his belongings. The nobleman bellows for the brat to be removed, while the boy looks on in confusion, asking what the man is doing. She calmly gives her approval for the man to pass. As the nobleman is escorted to his carriage, an observer notes that the so-called hero community is exactly as the rumors describe. Safely inside his carriage, the nobleman clutches a bottle, his face alight with a lecherous grin. He declares his intent to make all the women his mistresses before planting a loud, wet kiss on the container. While Horus sips a drink and reads the paper, a flustered female guard rushes in, calling out for Lanhea. Horus remarks that it seems none of the nobles have left yet, to which Lanhea quietly agrees, thinking that if they had, it would have been suspiciously fast. She continues her report, explaining that a person from the Diamante Kingdom's ducal house is waiting outside. The guard relays a shocking message. He intends to make them all his mistresses and has demanded they come with him. Responding to the summons, Horus and Lanhea arrive at the gate to find a portly nobleman berating them for being too slow. As the man demands to know what they were thinking, making him wait, Horus internally notes that their response was actually quite fast. The nobleman puffs out his chest and loudly introduces himself as Ashton Requotenides, the head of the ducal family from the Diamante Kingdom. He arrogantly demands to know if they have not heard of him. Unimpressed, Horus steps forward and states plainly that this is the first he has ever heard of the man. He then directly asks what Ashton wants. His directness is met with a lecherous grin. Ashton explains that because the women are so beautiful, he has decided to invite them to his mansion to become his mistresses. Lanhea, disgusted, immediately refuses. Her refusal ignites his anger. Ashton snaps his fingers and threatens them, questioning if they truly understand the consequences of their defiance. He belittles their nation as a poor kingdom only capable of producing metal and scoffs at the idea that they could control the hero who wields the very sword that defeated the Demon King. He continues to taunt them, daring them to see how long their stubbornness will last. Langia's eyes narrow with fury. She finds it deeply insulting that he would call the country that produced her legendary blade poor, and silently wishes she could demonstrate its sharpness to him. Changing his approach, Ashton turns his attention to Princess Lucia. He declares that a country's leaders have a duty to repay their debts, and that as citizens, the commoners must also do everything they can to help repay them. Lanhea immediately challenges him, asking if he plans to lend money to the princess. Horace follows up, questioning if he intends to charge an outrageous interest rate. Ashton scoffs at them as uneducated commoners, clarifying that there would be no issue if she simply returns the favor immediately. Ashton Requotenides lays out his terms with a smug, unwavering gaze. He declares that he will be using his rights to have Princess Lucia pay 100 million gold coins in value to the Requotenides ducal house. He then turns his attention to the hero and her companions, stating that they will be collectively priced at 100 million gold coins. He asks Lanhea if she understands, his expression dripping with condescension as she stares back, stunned. Her shock gives way to frantic disbelief. She questions if Ashton is truly saying they can prepare such a sum, suggesting they could simply return the money once they acquire it. Horace, arms crossed, calmly tells her that her plan probably won't work. She turns back to the nobleman, her voice rising in protest. She demands to know if it's even possible for him to use this debt to force a one-sided obligation on Princess Lucia through other means. Before Ashton can answer, Horace explains the grim reality of the situation. He points out that while they can't exercise the right without probable cause, the debt itself is the same as a right, allowing them to force the debtor to agree to their conditions. Ashton, overhearing this, seems impressed, remarking that the commoner has some brains. Lanhea finds the entire situation strange. As the tense standoff continues, a sharp voice cuts through the air. A female guard calls out to Ashton Sama, her eye glinting with urgency, drawing everyone's attention. Following the guard's call, two of Ashton's armored men appear, carrying large wooden crates filled with metal ingots. They report that they found precious metals in a nearby warehouse, and could have taken more if others hadn't gotten in the way. Seeing this blatant theft, Lanhea confronts the female guard, demanding to know who these men are. Horace, standing beside her near a barred gate, shares her curiosity. Ashton smugly approaches his men, dropping a coin into one of the crates as he orders them to load it onto the carriage. He declares that the hero's community and everything they possess will eventually become part of his collection. He turns and walks away, his footsteps echoing on the stone path. Lanhea watches him go, her hand to her head in disbelief, muttering to herself about the irredeemable methods such people use. As Ashton Requotenides walks away, Horace confronts him. The nobleman smirks, stating that he is only in this country because it's convenient, as it holds the rights to the grand or vein of Kinsekai. His expression hardening, Horace asks if Ashton's words mean he intends to get in his way. The nobleman suddenly begins to sweat, letting out a choked gasp. Suddenly, an immense pressure forces Ashton to his knees, his face contorted in agony. Horace stands over him, calmly asking what's wrong, while Lanhea groans at the public display. Ashton's guards cry out, demanding to know what is being done to their master. The commotion attracts a crowd of onlookers. One citizen with a photographic device captures the humiliating scene as others shout for the nobleman to raise his head. As Ashton continues to struggle on the ground, Horace remarks that this is good, as now people will certainly remember his name. Lanhea adds with a wry smile that the picture might just make the front page of the next day's newspaper. Humiliated, Ashton scrambles to his feet and flees, screaming that Horace will regret making a fool of him. His guards rush to follow, as Lanhea shouts for them to leave the looted metal behind. With the immediate threat gone, the party regroups. The female guard suggests they give chase, and Lanhea agrees. Nearby, the townspeople look over the piles of metal that were nearly stolen. As they prepare to move, their ribbon-haired companion stops Horace. She asks about his earlier comment, questioning why it was convenient that this country holds the rights to the grand or vein of Kinsekai. The question catches him by surprise. Elsewhere, Princess Lucia winks playfully. She explains that for her purposes, the fact that her family reigns over this country is very convenient indeed. Returning to the group, Horace explains his true motive. Deep within the grand or vein of Kinsekai, there's another dungeon. He reveals that he has something he must do in there, but to get inside, he needs a special key. As Horace's party discusses their next move, Princess Lucia explains a critical piece of history to her companion. She reveals that the Yatsushiro clan is a bloodline that has existed since the world's beginning, and that her own Chaostan family is a part of that ancient lineage. Hearing this, the hero Lanhea expresses her surprise, admitting it's the first time she has ever heard the name Yatsushiro clan. Lucia's companion simply remarks that her ignorance is natural. Horace and Lanhea process this revelation. He explains that this clan rules over a territory deep within the grand or vein of Kinsekai, which confirms the existence of the dungeon he seeks in the treasure capital Lapis. He continues, stating that he confirmed this information through an autobiography. The stakes are now clear. If Princess Lucia were to fall into debt and lose her ability to reign, he would be unable to get inside the grand or vein. Lanhea understands, concluding that his goal is to avoid placing any unnecessary burden on the princess. Meanwhile, in a private room, Ashton Requotenides seethes over his recent humiliation. He clutches a large jewel, lamenting that his plan to use Princess Lucia's debt to subjugate the hero community was ruined. He fumes that his wounded pride will not be satisfied with this outcome alone. He scoffs at the thought of the foolish commoners who fail to grasp the fearsomeness of authority, imagining Horus and Lanhea laughing at him. However, a pragmatic thought cuts through his anger. He acknowledges that the number of subordinates he brought to the capital is not nearly enough to subdue the heroes by force. Realizing a direct confrontation is unwise, Ashton turns his attention to a more vulnerable target. He and his retinue arrive before the imposing gates of the Chaoston Palace, his new objective. Their sudden arrival startles the palace guards. A female guard steps forward, her expression alarmed, and demands to know who the intruders are. In response to her challenge, one of Ashton's men announces their master's identity. Ashton re-quotinides, Prime Minister of the Diamante Kingdom, from the ducal family. The guard can only stare in disbelief at the outrageous breach of protocol. With his identity declared, Ashton smirks and gives a single command to his men, go. As his guards surge forward, Princess Lucia and her companion look on from inside, their faces etched with shock and horror at the sudden invasion. The young princess is immediately confronted by the intruder, Ashton re-quotinides, who declares that she will uphold her duty to repay 100 million gold coins. Her companion, Idelica, steps forward in disbelief, demanding to know who these people are and ordering them to stop their charade. He smirks at their defiance, condescendingly asking if they refuse to hear him out. With an air of immense self-importance, he announces his identity as the Prime Minister of the world's largest country, the Diamante Kingdom, and the head of the re-quotinides ducal family. In response to his grand declaration, Idelica immediately retorts that accepting such terms would make their country nothing more than a slave to the Diamante Kingdom. Ashton coolly replies, of course not. He then elaborates on his cruel logic, stating that a country which can only gather metal is already a slave. With a dismissive glance at a card in his hand, he proclaims that the world is run by those who hold strength, leaving Idelica speechless at his pronouncement. Inside a royal office, surrounded by armored guards, Ashton re-quotinides presents a document to Princess Lucia and Idelica. He explains with a smug grin that while there are no rules in the World Council prohibiting it, this is the first time a one-sided payment obligation has ever been forced upon a nation. Idelica's face contorts with anger at his words. Beside a startled Princess Lucia, she glares at the nobleman and challenges him, questioning if he truly believes things will go as he pleases. In response to her defiance, Ashton declares that his words are clearly not enough. With a sharp crack, he contemptuously grinds the document under his boot, prompting a shocked cry of protest from Idelica. Her outcry is cut short as the cold steel of two sword blades are suddenly pressed against her throat, stopping her mid-word. Her eyes widen in disbelief. The swords are held by the armored guards flanking her. Despite the immediate danger, a confident smile spreads across Idelica's face as she asks if they are actually serious. Ashton's cruel visage looms as he delivers his ultimatum, stating he will not say it twice. He declares that her country is only good enough to be a slave. Turning to the distressed princess, Idelica acknowledges the truth in his arrogance. She tells Lucia that she knows from their history that their country has always been one that other nations take advantage of. But her expression hardens with resolve. She glares forward with fierce determination, vowing that if they truly think that will always be the case, then they have another thing coming. One of the armored guards scoffs at her empty-handed defiance. He dismisses her prattling, mockingly asking what she could possibly do with such a small staff before letting out an exasperated sigh. Just then, a calm voice cuts through the tension. Leaning against a nearby archway with his arms crossed, Horus remarks that this kind of atmosphere doesn't suit a royalty's office. Idelica gasps his name in shock as the guard turns to face the intruder. He stands protectively beside Lanhea, his expression grim. Ashton re-quotinides sputters in disbelief, demanding to know why the hero and Horus are present. Lanhea retorts, her voice sharp with anger, questioning how he cannot understand that his barbaric words and drawn swords could be interpreted as nothing less than a declaration of war. In response, Ashton explains that he and his retinue sensed the tense atmosphere in the palace and suspected trouble, only to find them here. Horus clarifies their purpose directly. They came because Ashton stole their oars. The nobleman scoffs at the accusation, his face a mask of arrogance. He dismisses them as commoners who should not get carried away, reminding them that he is the one who holds absolute authority in this place. At his words, his armored guards shift their stances, their metal-shod feet scraping against the floor as they prepare for conflict. Ashton gestures grandly, boasting that all he needs to do is give the order and his soldiers will surround the entire treasure capital. He proclaims this display to be the very definition of his authority and might. He screams at them, calling them powerless commoners who should not dare to defy him. Horus, however, remains calm, his eyes narrowed as he counters the nobleman's tirade. He states that true authority is granted to protect what is important, not to someone who abandons what is right. He continues his quiet condemnation, asserting that those who would enslave other nations or instigate wars are undeserving of any authority. Such people, he concludes, are simply criminals. Enraged at being labeled a criminal, Ashton bellows for his guards to seize him. Without hesitation, Horus instructs Lanhea to take Princess Lucia and retreat, an order she immediately accepts. In the ensuing chaos, the young princess has stumbled and fallen, while Idelica looks on in a state of panic. As the first guard charges, sword raised high, Horus observes the attack with a detached calm. He notes internally that despite their numbers, these opponents do not seem to be putting up much of a fight. With a swift, precise movement, he drives his fist into the guard's helmet. The impact sends the soldier reeling backward, his weapon clattering to the floor. Horus considers the action simple retaliation. He moves with blinding speed as one of the guards charges past him. Idelica cries out in alarm, but Horus is already there, intercepting the soldier with a powerful, decisive blow that sends the armored man crashing to the floor. The sudden takedown leaves Ashton re-Quotonides momentarily stunned, wondering what just happened. Horus kneels for a moment over the fallen guard, the impact of his strike still hanging in the air. His shock quickly turns to derisive laughter. Ashton points a finger, declaring that Horus has just laid hands on his subordinates and would be powerless to object if he were killed on the spot. He asks condescendingly if Horus has realized the gravity of his situation. Unfazed, he smirks, explaining his unique method. After he hits them, he heals their wounds. While no traces of injury remain, the pain is still very real. The downed guard confirms this, groaning that he doesn't have a single scratch on him. The guard elaborates that with this technique, even a blow strong enough to knock them unconscious would leave no visible proof. Enraged by this revelation, Ashton dismisses it as a foolish trick and roars for his men to kill Horus. Despite the direct order, the other two guards hesitate, clearly intimidated. Horus stands confidently and taunts them, asking what's wrong and sarcastically remarking that there shouldn't be any problem if someone from a slave country dies. Seeing their hesitation, one of the guards shifts his focus, turning his menacing gaze towards Idelica, who flinches back in alarm. Before the guard can act, Horus moves in a flash, striking him down with a sharp blow. In the same fluid motion, he incapacitates the final guard, leaving both men groaning on the ground. He holds one of the defeated men, whose face is contorted in discomfort. Horus calmly explains that he can't allow the man to vomit on the palace floor, so he's made it so anything he tries to bring up will just slide back down his throat. He tells the guard to suffer for a while. With all his guards defeated, a terrified Ashton stammers, demanding to know what Horus is. Looking back with a cold expression, Horus identifies himself as just a Golem Master, adding that he is not at a level where mere 3 soldiers would be enough to deal with him. He cracks his knuckles, deciding that if words won't work, perhaps a physical lesson is in order. Ashton re-Quotonides, refusing to accept his defeat, can only sputter that they must have been fooled somehow, calling Horus a pathetic man as he draws his sword. Before the nobleman can act, the bare-eared companion lunges forward, delivering a powerful punch directly to his face with a triumphant cry. The blow leaves Ashton dazed and bruised. Seeing the state of the man, Horus decides he can't just be left there and must be returned through the Diamante Kingdom's embassy. His companion agrees, adding that they should also write an official letter of protest. She laments that despite having weapons pointed at them, their only recourse is a letter. Horus reflects on the complexities of international relationships, noting that it is an unfortunate reality of being a small country. Later, while taking tea, Princess Lucia expresses her disbelief that someone would threaten to charge into the palace and treat them like slaves. Maid Tiras adds her own surprise, remarking on how easily Horus dealt with 3 soldiers. The female hero, Lanhea, smiles confidently, explaining that for her master, such a feat is as natural as breathing. Meanwhile, Horus sits calmly on a sofa, engrossed in a newspaper. He continues to read, his eyes scanning an article with a prominent headline. A Duke of the Diamante Kingdom issues an apology as his companions gather around. Lanhea notes that the paper used a rather unflattering picture for the article and asks if he thinks Ashton learned his lesson. The bare-eared companion, however, looks worried, convinced that the nobleman will come back. Tiras elaborates on this concern, explaining that while violence against nobles is rare in the Diamante Kingdom, the standard response when it does occur is retaliation. Elsewhere, Count Emodiad clenches his fist, his face contorted with rage. He seethes at the thought of retaliation, furious that commoners made them feel pain and wounded their pride, an offense he believes they cannot forgive. Elsewhere, Maid Tiras observes that some people are too narrow-minded. She explains to Princess Lucia and the bare-eared companion that true growth comes from learning to forgive, not from simply restraining oneself, which is why such individuals fail to mature properly. Meanwhile, Horus relaxes on a couch, discussing the same topic with his companions. He posits that nobles are quick to forget any pain they feel because they are in a position to eliminate anything that irritates them. He wonders aloud if they would even consider the possibility of retaliation biting back at them. His speculation proves grimly accurate. Count Emodiad, flanked by his personal guard, coldly remarks that those guys will likely receive the same wound again in just a few days. He stands before a grand estate, declaring that the hero has disrespected him, the head of the re-Quotonides ducal family. He vows that even though she defeated the Demon King, she will not be allowed to get away with this slight. In another location, Ashton re-Quotonides gives a similar order to his own men. With a greedy smile, he commands them to capture the entire party and bring them before him, promising a share of the spoils upon their success. He strokes his chin, scheming. He acknowledges she may be a hero, but considers that an attack while she is sleeping might just work. His plotting is cut short as his armored guards suddenly cry out in pain and collapse to the ground around him. He recoils, shouting in shock and confusion. He feels a terrifying pressure descend upon him. a sensation he cannot comprehend. As the hero walks past his fallen men, she remarks that having to face so many idiots has given her time to think. She stands radiating a powerful aura, her expression cold and distant. She muses aloud that perhaps it would have been better for everyone if the Demon King had actually managed to invade the capital. She then grabs the terrified nobleman by his collar, explaining that many people remained loyal to the Demon King even after his defeat, leaving her with only two options: restrain them or kill them. Looking him dead in the eye, she declares that she doesn't care who is right or wrong, and warns him what will happen if he gets in her way. Her eyes burned with a cold fury as she leaned in close, her voice a low threat. She declared her intention to make an example of him. Below her, Ashton Requotenides could only whimper, his face a mask of pure terror, sweat beading on his brow. With a forceful push, she sent the nobleman stumbling backward. She offered a sliver of mercy, permitting him to leave with all his limbs intact, but commanded him to hurry and disappear from her sight. From a short distance away, Count Emodiad observed the exchange, his expression unreadable. He seemed to collect himself, muttering an affirmation under his breath. A new resolve formed in his mind. He decided it was necessary to call for an urgent meeting of the World Council. Meanwhile, Lanhea turned her back on the collapsed form of Ashton, leaving him amidst his defeated guards. As she walked away, she left him with a final, chilling promise to look forward to what was to come. An attendant urgently reports to King Barzil. He announces that Ashton Requotenides, the head of the ducal family, has declared Princess Lucia his and surrounded Ruster's base with his private army, proclaiming the Dragonstone Kingdom to be their slave. The attendant adds, however, that due to pressure from the hero, Ashton's forces were defeated. He concludes his report by presenting a letter received from the hero herself, causing the king visible distress. He holds out the letter, but the king recoils, stating he doesn't want to read it. The hero, standing nearby, sternly points out that the letter is marked confidential and that reading it is not optional. The attendant presses the matter, pleading with the king not to be difficult as he offers the document once more. Reluctantly, the king takes the letter and begins to read, his expression shifting to one of surprise. The attendant observes this, thinking to himself that the hero possesses a more discerning eye than they had previously thought. He explains the letter's contents to his attendant, admitting he had expected the hero to demand he take responsibility for Ashton's actions, but that was not the case. When asked what she sent, the king reveals that, to put it simply, she is calling for a special World Council meeting. The attendant reacts with shock. The king elaborates that the hero will be hosting an audience and has invited everyone who has a problem with her. He correctly surmises that she intends to deal with all of her detractors at once. Elsewhere, a group of nobles discusses the development. One notes that it is true many people would love to pick a bone with the hero's party, and another adds that by calling a World Council meeting, she likely wants as many countries as possible to attend. Their conversation reveals their disdain. Many had expected someone of higher status to be the one to defeat the Demon King. They grumble that, in the end, the hero's party was unable to achieve the subjugation, believing that results are more important than effort. The attendant considers the letter's specific phrasing. I don't care whose principles are in the right. He realizes this means the hero is unconcerned with any shameful deeds her opponents may have committed, a fact he finds remarkably open-minded. The king, covering his face in exhaustion, explains the history of the World Council. It was created with the concept of humans becoming independent from God after a huge incident in the past where religious leaders seized control of most rulerships. Because of this, he concludes, they cannot even invite religious figures to the meeting. He agreed, surmising that the hero's true purpose in calling the council is to force the nobility to confront the kind of person she truly is. Indeed, her plan is to make the so-called divine blood tremble in fear. Even when confined to their mansions, the kingdom's dukes and counts continue to cause trouble, an audacity befitting the hero's attention. This divine blood adventure is a sociological term referring to the three pillars of society: the religious nations, the bloodline nations, and the adventurers. It is said that all humans must belong to one of these three spheres, a testament to the immense power wielded by gods, bloodlines, and adventurers. Back in the throne room, King Barzil lets out a weary sigh, predicting that the upcoming audience will descend into chaos. His attendant can only confirm his fears, stating it is an absolute certainty. He then considers the attendance of a certain individual, believing he will likely be present but, as a master, will manage to remain unseen. The king interjects, pointing out that it is his disciple's achievement that is being treated so lightly. The monarch then wonders aloud if it is truly possible for someone to lose all faith in the world. He acknowledges that it's an easy sentiment to express from their position of safety, but worries that if this person has truly given up on everything, they would only ensure the safety of the Chaostan Dragonstone Kingdom, abandoning all other lands. His attendant concedes the point, but adds that there are still people who hold the unwavering belief that the strong must protect the weak. This leads him to a quiet realization. His master's powers are not meant solely for protection, and he himself does not care which principles are ultimately correct. He internally affirms his desire to protect people, no matter the cost, and questions if the king could understand such a sentiment. King Barzil counters, reminding him of the shameless complaints lodged by commoners at the castle and pointing out that the attendant himself has been granted great authority and the power to protect others. He presses further, stating that even when the attendant does protect them, he receives no gratitude in return. The king's pointed words leave his attendant momentarily speechless. He elaborates, explaining that rewarding someone for their achievements is merely an assessment. He is not suggesting they swear absolute fealty to the hero. However, he forcefully declares that there is a profound lack of gratitude for the one who defeated the Demon King. It is imperative, he insists, that they engrave the truth into their very minds. The hero saved the world. A somber truth hangs in the air. The value of the world the hero has saved will only become cheaper if left to its own devices. This very sentiment weighs on King Barzil. His attendant informs him that the hero has called for a meeting with everyone who has a problem with her, noting that the best outcome would be for no one to attend. The king understands this only highlights the immense significance of a gathering. He strokes his beard, his gaze firm with resolve. As the leader of the world's greatest country, he concludes that he must take action to ensure the value of this world rises. Meanwhile, at the World Council, the hero stands before the assembled nobles. She recounts the transgressions made by Ashton Recornides, expressing her shock that he's the prime minister of the Diamante Kingdom. With her hands on her hips, she issues a challenge. If there are any rebuttals, they should speak now. Her challenge is met with a cacophony of outrage. One noble declares that commoners should naturally serve the nobility. Another dismisses her victory over the Demon King as irrelevant. Others insist that her power should be used to forge closer ties with them, accusing her of hiding some secret technique from her master. They twist her act of saving the world into a debt she has forced upon them, demanding punishment for her supposed crime. She closes her eyes, listening as their demands escalate. They insist she should be wed to the crown prince of the Diamante Kingdom, the world's greatest country, and criticize her for relocating to the small Cast and Dragonstone Kingdom. Ashton Recornides bellows that it is the duty of leaders to forge relationships with major nations. He argues that even her master cannot know the future and should therefore share all his knowledge for the world's sake. In response to the tirade, the hero raises a gloved hand, her voice cutting through the noise with a single word: silence. Her eyes flash with fury. She declares them all far too selfish. The unfortunate result of their actions, she explains, was the Recornides family calling her people slaves and attempting to capture her master. The World Council, she concludes with a clenched fist, has shown no intention of apologizing. She continues, her voice ringing with conviction, stating that the power to subjugate the Demon King was granted to her by her master. She then turns the accusation back on the assembly, demanding to know what any of them have achieved. Her challenge hangs unanswered in the Great Hall. Elsewhere, King Barzil calmly articulates the heart of the conflict. It is one thing for others to watch and learn from a distance, he muses, but it is another entirely for them to defy another's way of life and demand to conform to their own. His words hung in the air, a stark condemnation of the assembled nobles. But before anyone could react, another voice cut through the tension. A figure with long, light hair addressed the ignorant bloodline, declaring that it was time for them to face the consequences. The hero, taken aback by this sudden interruption, demanded to know who he was. The stranger simply looked at her, his expression intense, and asked if she could hold on to her faith in the world for just a little longer. Before she could press for an answer, King Barzil stepped forward, addressing her directly. He seemed surprised she didn't recognize him, reminding her that they had met during her ceremony before formally introducing himself as Barzal Diamante. The long-haired man interjected, clarifying that the council for the rulers would be held later. He asserted that the current gathering was specifically for those who had qualms with him, and therefore had nothing to do with her. King Barzil countered that he wasn't going anywhere, stating that he also had something to say to the hero and was there to file a complaint. The long-haired man thought to himself what a waste of an opportunity it was to invite only those with problems. His eyes narrowed with cold intensity. He looked directly at the king and challenged him. Go ahead. Ignoring the man's challenge, King Barzil turned his attention to the assembly and bowed deeply. He began a formal address, thanking Hero Lanhea, the members of Custer, and her master, Horus, from the bottom of his heart for subjugating the Demon King and saving the world. His words left the hero stunned. The king continued, reminding everyone that at the previous World Council, the rulers had granted the hero's community a reward for their efforts. But, he added grimly, they had forgotten the most important thing. He declared that the missing element was gratitude. The accusation struck the nobles with physical force. One tumbled from his seat in shock. The king repeated the word, driving the point home. As the king's judgment settled over the room, the hero regained her composure. She stated that she wasn't so petty that she couldn't acknowledge someone's growth. However, she still had a question, wondering why all of this was happening only now. She stood her ground, her question hanging in the air. King Barzil met her gaze and conceded that she had every right to ask. He agreed with her, admitting that they had looked down on the title of hero and done many disrespectful things. The king acknowledged that even after saving the world, it is easy to lose faith when one cannot see any possibilities. However, he declared his intention to show her one, proclaiming that possibilities would now come forth. He then closed his eyes, focusing his thoughts, The king remarked that the pressure she used was a truly fearsome ability. With a moment of concentration, he prepared to demonstrate something similar, gathering his power. As he unleashed his power, an immense, invisible weight descended upon the hall. Across the room, the assembled nobles cried out in agony, collapsing to the floor under the crushing force. The king stood resolute amidst the waves of pressure emanating from him. The hero, untouched by the force, watched him with a sudden understanding. Inside the throne room, King Barzil lets out a hearty laugh. He admits to his attendants that while he knew winning would be difficult without proper training, he never imagined he would lose so easily. His laughter subsides, and his expression turns serious. He reflects that his country held certain truths that compelled him to act against his nature, adding that Lanhea doesn't seem like the type of person to do what she did. The hero turns away, remarking on her disappointment. The king's attention is then drawn to a man entering the hall. He identifies him as Horus and states that he has some things he needs to apologize for. Horus, now dressed in a formal suit, meets the king's gaze. He begins by offering a deep and sincere apology for having made Horus work in the castle without providing anything in return. To emphasize his sincerity, the king bows his head low. Lanhea quickly interjects, telling the king to raise his head. She then explains to Horus that the item he received made her years of service to the Diamante Kingdom feel completely worthwhile, even if it was just a bonus. She continues, stating that since Horus finds the Dragonstone Kingdom more appealing, they have no issue with him staying there. Horus turns to the king, asking if this satisfies him. The king listens and concedes, declaring that their debt is now settled. With that matter resolved, his demeanor shifts once more. He points directly at Horus, addressing him as the hero's master, and challenges him to demonstrate his own presence as well. He strokes his beard thoughtfully, explaining that such a demonstration is equivalent to 1,000 words and would make understanding the situation much easier. Horus, caught off guard, can only ask what the king truly is. In response, an immense and crushing pressure suddenly erupts from King Barzil, flooding the entire throne room and startling both Horus and Lanhea. The overwhelming force continues to radiate from the king, who grunts with the effort of maintaining it. Watching him, Horus remarks with surprise that he didn't even think the king would be able to remain on his feet, let alone exert this much power. He concedes that it is true, admitting his own surprise. Before the hero, King Barzil reflects that this is a world where even an ignorant and incompetent man is able to become a king. Looking away thoughtfully, he continues, remarking that the world she saved holds such possibility, and that the blood in their veins still holds immense potential. She listens in silence, her expression neutral as she takes in his words. With a slight gesture of his hands, the king declares his defeat. Lanhea acknowledges the truth of his statement, confessing that she had felt it would be acceptable to simply give up on this world. He then elaborates on a fine point, explaining that the title of hero is bestowed upon someone after a great achievement. The title of ruler, however, is its own existence. Bowing her head in understanding, Lanhea promises she will never forget the words of gratitude he offered for her victory over the Demon King. With their accord settled, the king turns his attention to the gathered nobles, covering his mouth to hide a smirk. He announces that he must now decide which dungeon to throw the overextended nobles into. As the nobles recoil in shock, Horus calmly asks if he should send the relevant documents. An offer one of the other nobles eagerly accepts. The reality of the situation dawns on the corrupt nobles as they are led away. They cry out in disbelief, realizing they are the ones being punished. They protest that it must be a mistake, an unfair judgment, especially now that His Majesty is on equal terms with the hero. Their protests grow louder. One declares his status as a Duke of the Meruade Kingdom and lists his contributions to the Diamante Kingdom. Another shouts that he too has contributed greatly, and they collectively vow that they will never be thrown into a dungeon. Later, in a secret meeting, the condemned nobles plot their revenge. Zates, his face set with grim determination, issues a command. It is an order to send the Sky Spirit Dragon Guy Gigant to the capital of the Diamante Kingdom. He reveals the location of the Summoning Stone, deep beneath Duke Requotenide's mansion. His plan is simple and brutal. Summon the beast and let it seize control of the capital. As he walks alongside his co-conspirators, he coldly rationalizes their plot. To guide the king, who is blind to their worth, they must sacrifice the citizens of the capital. Duke Requotenides expresses some doubt, but Count Amodiad dismisses his concerns. He recalls that previous experiments with the Dragonstone, ordered by the Chaostan Kingdom, were only small-scale and yielded poor results. This time, he declares they will unleash its full power, ensuring their victory. Their treasonous conversation is cut short as royal guards surround them. A captain announces that their communication magic has been intercepted, branding them international criminals. The news of their betrayal sends King Barzil into a towering rage, his shouts echoing through the chamber as he questions why they persist in such foolishness. His attendant urges him to control himself. He struggles to regain his composure. The attendant mentions a legend of a dwarven swordmaster who slayed a great beast, prompting the king to realize that Horus must be making his move. As if summoned by his very thoughts, a knock sounds at the door. An attendant announces that hero Lanhea and her master, Horus, have arrived. The king grants them entry. He steps into the room, his expression determined. The king asks if he is heading to the capital, and Horus confirms it, adding that he has a request. He gets straight to the point, stating his desire to borrow the Diamante Kingdom's underground antenna. Surprised, the king asks if he plans to use a golem, which Horus confirms. The king processes the logistical nightmare of the request. He explains that relinquishing control of such a large antenna requires extensive paperwork and transport time, as it is still officially owned by the kingdom. He looks at Horus, impressed, remarking on how much the young man knows. He confirms his understanding of Horus's plan, granting him permission to use the antenna as much as needed. Horus simply acknowledges the king's decree. With a grave expression, the king then entrusts the fate of the capital to him. Clasping his hand firmly, Horus accepts the immense responsibility. As he turns to leave, King Barzil asks if he requires teleportation magic. Horus declines, explaining that since the official documents will take time to process, he will proceed on his own. After Horus's departure, the king muses to Lanhea that there is a vast difference between his own perception of fighting and that of the young mage. Meanwhile, in a hidden chamber elsewhere, two robed figures press their hands against the pedestal, channeling energy into a large, glowing crystal and completing their dark ritual. The ritual's power culminates in a brilliant column of light that erupts from a city tower, piercing the night sky as startled citizens look on from the streets below. From that malevolent light, a monstrous, winged dragon materializes. Its jagged teeth and glowing eyes strike terror into the people below, who cry out in shock and fear. Panic erupts in the city streets as a colossal, winged beast descends from the sky. A terrified civilian gestures wildly, screaming at others to stop dawdling and simply run from the immense creature, casting a shadow over their homes. The beast's maw glows with a dangerous light, preparing to unleash an attack. On the ground, the unnamed mage engineer draws his sword, his eyes fixed on the gathering energy. He holds his ground as a massive beam of destructive power erupts from the dragon's mouth, carving a path of devastation through the street just before him. The creature pauses, grumbling to itself with annoyance. It recalls its orders, to simply buy time until the hero's master arrives. The unnamed mage engineer grips his head, a look of grim disbelief on his face. He realizes the absurdity of the situation. The higher-ups are in another country and cannot return immediately, and all the local members of the hero community have already been deployed elsewhere. He scoffs, deducing they must have thought an ordinary A-rank adventurer like himself, known as Deed of Twilight, would be sufficient. He couldn't even take his promotion exam due to the emergency. With a defiant cry, he launches himself towards the beast, challenging it for looking down on humans. His blade flashes through the air, connecting with the massive creature in a powerful, sweeping strike. He lands and glances back, a cold realization washing over him. This monstrous form isn't even the creature's final state, a fact he finds anything but laughable as the beast turns its snarling maw towards him. Meanwhile, high above the city, a long-haired man pilots a small flying vehicle. He observes that King Barzil's evacuation order seems to have been followed, but his attention is drawn to the ongoing battle. His gaze focuses on a large weapon emplacement and the lone warrior. He notes with interest that things are in better shape than expected, recognizing that the one holding the beast at bay is none other than Deed of Twilight. He watched the battle unfold, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. The mage engineer had managed to hold the colossal beast back for an entire hour, though it had cost him the use of his arm. The young man was more capable than he had anticipated. The dragon, sensing a new presence, turned its massive head. It let out a low growl, confirming the newcomer's arrival and issuing a direct challenge for them to approach. From his vantage point, the long-haired man's expression soured with understanding. He recognized the newcomer, armed with a large cannon, as the hero's master, finally making his appearance on the battlefield. Before Horus could process the arrival, the hero's master shot past him at incredible speed, riding a strange, hovering vehicle that kicked up a cloud of dust. The sheer force of the vehicle's wake slammed into Horus, sending him tumbling violently through the air. He glanced back, his hand reaching out in a belated gesture, as Horus stared in wide-eyed disbelief at the sudden, chaotic intervention. Coming to a stop, the master scanned the area. Seeing no other casualties, he surmised that the adventurer known as Deed of Twilight had been the only one fighting. Meanwhile, Horus sat on the ground, trying to make sense of the situation. He pushed himself to his feet, recalling how he had removed his limiter and rushed to the city at full speed. The strain was catching up to him, and he felt a wave of exhaustion as he quietly moved to a safer distance. Facing the colossal beast, the hero's master held up a small, glowing artifact. He addressed the creature directly, identifying it as the sky spirit dragon guy Gigant, and casually invited it to a warm-up bout. He then fired his weapon, unleashing a torrent of energy that slammed into the dragon's chest. The beast recoiled with a guttural roar as the powerful blast sent its attacker skidding backward from the sheer force of the recoil. Horus braces himself as the massive summoned dragon lunges forward, its powerful wings beating the air and its talons poised to strike. As the beast roars its intent, he throws a powerful punch, not at the dragon itself, but into the empty space before him with focused determination. The invisible force of his blow travels through the air, slamming into the dragon's head moments later. The creature recoils in pain and confusion from the unseen impact. He assesses the result, reflecting that he has set his bone golem to a stable mode. This maintains the balance of its magic power, but he notes that its actual combat effectiveness is much lower than he expected. He continues his analysis, concluding that to increase the firepower of his gun-type golem, he must rely on the bone golem, which in turn requires an increase in his own calculation ability for manipulation. For now, the stable setting is the best choice, highlighting the vast difference between theoretical knowledge and practical application. His thoughts are interrupted as the dragon retaliates, unleashing a wide beam of energy from its maw. He leaps away just in time, remarking on his unfortunate luck. Facing the beast, he calmly explains that its breath attacks are infused with magic power, which naturally seeks stability. He posits that since air is more stable than a breath attack, he can simply implant the idea of becoming air into the magic to neutralize it. He warns the bewildered creature not to underestimate humans, whose deep knowledge of magic allows for such feats. The dragon tries another breath attack, but as predicted, it dissipates into nothing. Horus dismisses the attempt as boring, but his expression quickly shifts to alarm as he senses the nature of the next attack is dangerously different. With a click of his tongue, he dashes away at high speed. He knows the dragon cannot truly understand his words, but it has at least figured out that his initial punch was a diversion. The dragon has adapted, increasing the stability of its breath to prevent him from overriding it. As a powerful, solid beam of energy erupts towards him, he dodges, shouting in frustration at the troublesome power and demanding that it calm down. He evades the dragon's breath, but the beast lets out a deafening roar. The sheer volume is overwhelming, forcing him to cover his ears as the concussive sound wave blasts past. Staggered by the sonic assault, he is caught off guard as the dragon's massive tail whips around, striking him with brutal force. He is thrown to the ground, looking up just in time to see the colossal creature stomp down, shaking the very earth beneath him. Leaping back into the air to create distance, a look of grim focus crosses his face. He thinks to himself that his preparations are just about ready. His momentary advantage vanishes as the dragon closes the gap with impossible speed. He briefly wonders if it's teleportation before realizing it's simply an incredibly fast short-range dash. The beast responds by spitting a rapid volley of energy projectiles, forcing him into a desperate aerial dance to evade the barrage. Despite his agility, one of the blasts clips him, sending him hurtling uncontrollably toward the ground below. From an unknown location, the Horned Demon leader watches the battle, her eyes widening in shock at the sudden turn of events. As the dragon dives in for the finishing blow, Horus, now on the ground, triggers his trap. With a series of sharp clicks, a structure of magical energy begins to materialize around it. The construct solidifies into a protective cage, just as the dragon's jaws snap shut. Safe for the moment, he glares at the beast and shouts his defiance, calling it a bastard. He stood calmly within the fiery confines of his magical cage as the dragon outside looked on in bewilderment. Meanwhile, observing from a high vantage point above the city, the hero's master let out a sigh. He conceded that he wouldn't call the tactic cowardly. It was simply a standard strategy to gain the upper hand. In response to the defensive maneuver, the dragon unleashed a devastating blast of energy that erupted against the magical shield. As he ran within the protective sphere, Horus calculated that this was merely the fourth or fifth most powerful attack in the beast's arsenal, but it would have to suffice for the moment. Its attack thwarted, the dragon loomed over the barrier, its frustration palpable as smoke billowed from his nostrils. He then raised his gauntlet hand, which began to shimmer with complex magical energy. He acknowledged that his creation was still unfinished, but declared this the perfect opportunity for a test run. He revealed the codename for this device, Deus Ex Machina, the god of machines. With unwavering confidence, he asserted that the opponent's strength was irrelevant. This scenario already guaranteed his victory. The dragon's expression shifted from rage to utter confusion. A memory surfaced in Horus's mind of King Barzil, giving him a special bonus. He reasoned that since the bone golem's power relied entirely on calculation power, he could counter it. To do so, however, he would need to switch his cube's function from its usual range expansion to calculation expansion, a trade-off he was now prepared to make. As the summoned dragon lunges forward with a ferocious roar, the mage engineer braces himself on the ground, his expression hardening in the face of the imminent attack. Suddenly, a figure descends from the sky, the hero's master, unleashing a volley of energy blasts from his gauntlets that intercept the beast mid-air, causing the mage engineer to look up in surprise. He hovers confidently above the battlefield, addressing the stunned dragon. He remarks that while his magic power isn't fully stabilized yet, he is operating at nearly its full capacity, though he admits he can't be entirely certain. He decides there is no reason to prolong the confrontation. With a firm grip, he readies his large, cannon-like weapon, channeling energy into his gauntlet. The dragon lets out a roar, a desperate final struggle against the overwhelming power. From the ground, the mage engineer observes the scene, realizing that if the gap in their abilities wasn't so immense, the outcome might have been different. He recognizes this is simply what a dragon without knowledge can manage. His eyes narrow with focus as he raises his weapon, gathering immense energy and calling out the name of his technique, Taurus 3. A colossal beam of energy erupts from the weapon, striking the dragon with devastating force and blasting it backward through the air. The beast's massive head slams into the ground with a heavy thud, sending up a cloud of dust and debris. It lies motionless, walking through the now quiet battlefield. The mage engineer surveys the area. He notes with concern that no gold coins have appeared, nor any ingots, the typical rewards from a defeated monster. He looks up, his expression shifting from confusion to resolve. A massive pillar of energy looms in the distance, and he understands. It is time, he concludes, for the final round. He watches as the ground before him erupts. A colossal, earthen figure, seemingly bound by thick ropes, tears itself free and lets out a deafening roar. The roar echoes across the land, a signal that travels through the air with visible force, summoning a response. This sudden escalation does not go unnoticed. The hero's master, still hovering on his vehicle, looks up with a flicker of annoyance, sensing the change in the battle. His gaze is met with a terrifying sight. The sky darkens, not with clouds, but with a massive swarm of dragons, revealing the first beast was merely the vanguard of a legion. Faced with this overwhelming force, Horus looks up and lets out a weary sigh. He dryly remarks on how lively the situation has suddenly become. He shields his eyes, taking in the full scale of the draconic army blotting out the sun. He finds it incredible that high-ranking dragons would resort to a strategy of sheer numbers against a single human. The hero's master, however, seems to take the overwhelming odds as a personal challenge. He declares that since they've gone to all this trouble, he feels obligated to return the favor, pointing a finger towards the ground. In response to his gesture, the very earth begins to tremble. A massive stone structure, previously dormant, begins to crack and stir. The rumbling intensifies as colossal pieces of stone and metal rise from the ground, beginning to assemble into a towering humanoid form. The construct completes its formation. Standing beside his newly summoned titan, Horus draws his sword with grim determination, announcing the name of his new ally, Orchestrion, the Barrage Iron Man. It's time to begin. He immediately put his creation to work. From its fingertips, Orchestrion unleashed a volley of crystalline projectiles that hammered into the approaching dragons with explosive force. The initial barrage was just the beginning. The golem's arm transformed, unleashing a massive, roaring beam of pure energy that engulfed another dragon in a blinding flash. He watched the destruction with satisfaction, noting Orchestrion's capabilities. The golem's barrage used magic bullets that required no reloading and had no recoil. Furthermore, it could accurately determine precise shooting routes on its own, a fact that briefly surprised even him. As his golem continued to decimate the swarm, he observed a peculiar detail. Unlike typical monsters, these defeated dragons didn't drop any gold. Realizing this, he changed tactics, shouting a new command to his construct. Orchestrion switched to paralyze mode. In response, the golem's next shot struck a dragon not with explosive force, but with a crackling energy that seized its body. The beast let out a choked cry as it was stunned, plummeting from the sky. He watched the paralyzed dragons fall, understanding the nature of his foe. These were summoned monsters, completely independent of their summoner's main body. This meant that defeating them one by one would accomplish nothing unless he defeated the main body itself. Dismissing the lesser dragons as a distraction, his attention was drawn to a much larger specimen that landed before him. He knew that such a direct, physical attack would be ineffective. He easily evaded the creature's lunge, his mind piecing together the enemy's plan. When employing a numbers strategy, a summoner funnels nearly all their resources into the act of summoning itself, while also controlling them in real time. As Orchestrion continued its relentless assault, he noticed a change in the battlefield. No new dragons were being made. A realization dawned on him. The summoner had finally reached their limit. He sees that the summoner has stopped wasting magic on summoning and is now channeling all their power into the dragon's main body. The appearance of Orchestrion must have been an unexpected development for them, making its construction well worth the effort. In response, the empowered dragon lets out a deafening, furious roar. As the beast lunges forward, he boldly declares that its attack is futile and raises his arm to intercept. He clarifies to the enraged creature that he holds no personal animosity towards it, but he will nevertheless use it to achieve his objective. With his purpose stated, he surges forward, his fist glowing as he closes the distance to the beast. He unleashes the technique Scorpion 3, a devastating strike that connects squarely with the dragon's head. A brilliant flash of light erupts from the point of impact. Watching from afar, the hero's master is stunned, realizing in disbelief that Horus has truly defeated the dragon. Now, perched on a distant rooftop, he reflects on the battle. He muses that the iron puppets were impressive enough, but the sheer amount of magic power Horus wields is unreal, something he can hardly believe even while witnessing it directly. Back on the battlefield, Horus looks up, his gaze fixed on the distant figure. Holding a small, glowing crystal, he identifies the observer. So that's the hero's master. In the aftermath of the battle, the royal court is in an uproar. The dragon, a beast said to have destroyed nations, was impossibly defeated by a single man. Ashton Recodenides, sprawled on the floor in disgrace, refuses to accept the reality of his house's swift downfall. His armored guards and fellow nobles can only stare, stunned by the turn of events. From his throne, King Barzeel addresses the assembled nobles, his voice dripping with scorn. He asks the sinners before him if they have finally lost faith in the social hierarchy they so vehemently defended. He continues, reminding them that the commoner they all looked down upon was the one who defeated the dragon. Furthermore, the young man left behind more than 10,000 gold coins he had earned, suggesting they use it for repairs. The king notes that their stunned silence is only natural. The nobles react with disbelief. One suggests the commoner probably didn't know how to use such a vast sum of money, while another declares the amount itself to be impossible. The king simply observes their greed and ignorance, noting that with this, the worst outcome, the dungeon, can be avoided. However, a sharp voice cuts through the murmuring. The hero, Lanhea, states plainly that the crime of planning to seize the capital with monsters is a grave one. Following her declaration, the king's judgment is swift. He announces that their sentence has been decided. They will all be consigned to the prison dungeon. Count Imodiad shouts in protest, while a terrified guard tries to flee, only to be stopped. The king then offers to enlighten the ignorant nobles about their new home. He begins his explanation of the world's mechanics. In nature, monsters are part of the ecosystem, and when defeated, they normally drop coins and items. Within dungeons, however, monsters appear as a fundamental feature. The prison dungeon, he clarifies, has a special mechanic. The scene shifts to the nobles already inside, fighting amongst themselves over who gets credit for a kill. Ashton and Count Imodiad are already at each other's throats, demanding the others go first into the fray. The king reveals the cruel twist. Any rewards from defeating monsters or opening treasure chests in this dungeon vanish on the spot. As he speaks, a guard inside watches in horror as the contents of a chest disappear before his eyes. Immediately, new monsters emerge from a hole near the entrance, full of energy. He concludes his explanation from the throne room. This system ensures they cannot use dropped items to prepare an escape or a counterattack. With a chilling calm, he asks the distant, suffering nobles if they are enjoying themselves, fully aware of their hopeless predicament. He listened as one of the condemned nobles, Ashton Reincarnation, protested their sentence, claiming their actions were an act of justice intended to guide his majesty back to the path of a wise king. The king repeated the phrase, "a wise king," with a questioning tone. Ashton eagerly confirmed, clarifying that he meant a ruler who grants the nobles their privilege of eternal luxury. Count Imodiad then added his voice, proclaiming that they have inherited blood chosen by the king, making them akin to gods and the legitimate rulers. He argued that the immense labor of ruling the people requires compensation of an equally extraordinary measure. A third noble asserted that it is therefore nothing less than justice for them to enjoy this eternal luxury, and that it is the king's duty, as a wise king, to provide it. King Barzil remained silent, his expression unreadable as he stroked his beard. His contemplative silence gave way to a look of pure disgust. He wondered how such men, the nobles of the Diamante kingdom, could ever have been entrusted with power, finding their twisted logic utterly mad and embarrassing. A noble answered his unasked question, claiming it was because his majesty had forgotten something. The king looked at him sharply, demanding to know what he meant. Ashton Reincarnation explained their reasoning. As inheritors of the chosen blood, they possess superior power. Yet, the king sought to punish them. He declared that they unleashed the monsters upon the capital precisely to serve as a reminder of that power. The king's eye widened in disbelief as the noble's voice echoed, asserting that the strength of one's power is ultimately demonstrated by the number of dead. A weary sigh escaped King Barzil's lips. Having heard their full, depraved philosophy, he finally addressed the assembly. He acknowledged that a wise king would indeed bring prosperity, and that it is only right for a high reward to be paid to those entrusted with governance. As Ashton Reincarnation cried out in agreement, the king continued, his words taking a darker turn. He reminded them that it is a fact of history that mankind has repeatedly waged war and massacred people, and that the title of hero has historically been bestowed upon those who killed the most. King Barzil's expression hardens. After listening to their twisted logic, he concedes a single point before delivering his true verdict with cold finality. "You are fools." His voice rises, catching the nobles off guard. He declares that they have made a mockery of the two founding principles of the World Council, and have forgotten something far more important than their noble titles. The men stare back, utterly stunned by his sudden shift in tone. He lets out a weary sigh, baffled by their ignorance. Then, with a thunderous roar that shakes the very hall, he proclaims the first principle. "We shall protect our people to the very end, even without praying to a god." The king clarifies that this vow of protection extends beyond just monster attacks. It encompasses shielding the people from starvation, from disease, and from the conflicts that arise between fellow humans. His fury crescendos as he slams his hand down. He demands to know how they could dare speak of using the lives of their own people merely to demonstrate power. The duty, he states with conviction, is to protect them from everything that would prevent them from living out their natural lifespan. He then reveals the second founding principle to the stunned assembly. For a humanity that cannot conceive of a word greater than God, the concept itself represents the ultimate limit. Therefore, he explains, humans must not name themselves gods, but must instead strive for endless growth. With their own words twisted against them, the king bellows that by claiming a king is akin to a god, they have insulted the founders of the World Council. Ashton Reincarnation attempts a feeble denial, but the king roars for him not to dare, commanding them to know their shame. The force of his condemnation sends the nobles crashing to the floor. His judgment is absolute. He sentences all of them to life imprisonment in the prison dungeon, Pandemonium. At his command, armored guards step forward to carry out the sentence, affirming their orders as the nobles lie prostrate in defeat. As the guards begin dragging the condemned away amidst pleas and curses, King Barzeel watches with a grim expression. He reflects that things could have been different, but resolves to etch this painful lesson into his heart. Elsewhere, a dungeon wall explodes inward. The mage Horus stands with his companions, Tiras, Lucia, a girl with fox ears, and a small floating creature. Tiras announces they'll be borrowing the room. Horus remarks that dungeons are perfect for training since they self-repair, though he feels it's a waste for its original master. The fox-eared girl eagerly urges her master to begin, and he agrees. He finds himself immediately on the defensive as Lanhea, the hero, lunges at him with her sword drawn. The fox-eared companion observes the sudden sparring match from a distance. He meets her blade, not with a weapon of his own, but with his armored fist, the impact echoing through the dungeon corridor. The force of the block sends a shockwave up her arm, and she realizes with disbelief that she cannot break through his guard. Despite her surprise, she presses the attack. In response, he twists his arm, deflecting her blade and sending her stumbling backward with a cry of exertion. As she struggles to regain her footing, her sword skittering across the stone floor, she looks up to see her next opponent already in motion. She realizes with a grunt that Tiras is now joining the fray. The maid doesn't hesitate, unleashing a volley of daggers with deadly precision. One embeds itself in the stone wall, while another finds its mark, only for the target to dissolve into a puff of smoke. Tiras gasps in surprise. Her surprise is short-lived as Horus materializes behind her, the thrown daggers now hovering harmlessly in the air, held in place by his power. With the weapons neutralized, he brings the side of his hand down in a swift, non-lethal strike to the back of her neck, incapacitating her. Watching the swift conclusion of the second bout, Lanhea gets to her feet. She admits to herself that she might have overdone it, but acknowledges that the fact Horus can still stand is a testament to his growth. She winces slightly, still feeling the effects of their exchange. Horus turns his attention to the fox-eared companion, who now stands before him, ready for her turn. He asks about Tiras' condition, but his focus is already on the next phase of the training. She lies defeated on the stone floor, admitting to Horus that she still cannot manage to best him. He stands over her, his training session with the fox-eared companion now concluded. He sits down with the others, Lanhea, Tiras, and the fox-eared companion, all gathered after the sparring matches. Lanhea concedes that she is still no match for her master. Horus replies coolly, reminding them that he was the one who hammered combat techniques into all 6 of his executives. His gaze drifts into the distance. The fox-eared companion, who is 17, notes that he seems lost in thought, an observation the 16-year-old Lanhea agrees with. Internally, Horus, who is 27, reflects that he cannot afford to lose to girls a full decade younger than him. Her thoughts drift to a past battle against the sky spirit dragon guy Gigant, a creature so formidable it would have taken their group 2 whole months to subjugate. She muses that this was why she was so curious to see the weapon that could overwhelm such a beast, yet she still cannot fathom the depths of its power. He smirks, calling the weapon his masterpiece, and revealing that it is only about 8% complete. The fox-eared companion is stunned to hear his projection. When finished, it will be more than 10 times stronger than it is now. Her shock gives way to concern. Alongside Tiras, she demands to know what on earth he is preparing for that would require such overwhelming force. Horus simply looks away, realizing he may have revealed too much. Just then, 2 more figures arrive. A woman with goggles named Lommel cheerfully greets her companion, a woman with glasses named Ellie, who waves back. They join the group, and Horus greets them, remarking that it took them a while to meet up. Lommel immediately asks Tiras if she has anything to eat, much to the maid's surprise. He steps in, confirming that if it's just snacks they want, he can provide some. With a swirl of energy from his gloved hand, he instantly materializes a round table and several chairs from thin air. He then produces a large platter laden with biscuits, eliciting a cry of delight from Lommel. Lanhea, surprised, asks if he made them beforehand and stored them in an item box, also noticing that he has prepared black tea. He dismisses the complexity of his snack dispensing technology when asked. He explains that it's simply a storage golem and a sweets maker golem that he placed into a subspace and linked together. As the group enjoys the treats, the conversation shifts. Lommel confirms that in the regions most devastated by the Demon Lord's invasion, they lacked sufficient combat personnel. Their only recourse was to improve the quality of their weaponry, which is where she came in, making weapons in various locations. Ellie then explains her role in the effort. She was responsible for sorting out matters related to debt, providing magical tools from other sources at exceptional prices, and offering significant financial aid to the regions that had suffered the worst damage. She clarifies, however, that it was not an act of charity. Since many of those countries couldn't provide what was wanted in return, there was no point in continuing the aid. Horus processes this, realizing that the regions which didn't suffer much damage were the ones that were put into debt. Taking a sip from his cup, he changes the subject, noting the large number of shared carriages he saw on the way. He asks if many people have been moving around lately, and Ellie confirms that it seems a great number of adventurers are on the move. This country, it turns out, is the perfect destination for them. Among the nations of the World Council, only the Dragonstone Kingdom and the Diamante Kingdom are free of debt. Both possess numerous dungeons, ensuring no shortage of ways for adventurers to earn money. Ellie elaborates on the situation. The Adventurers Guild may be neutral, but its members are still affected by national affairs. If a nation is in debt, they will try to extract money from any available source, which includes putting financial pressure on adventurers. This influx raises a concern for Lommel, who wonders if it will become harder to train in the dungeons. Horace questions why they would be affected, but Ellie interjects. She explains that the real concern isn't about competition for the deeper levels, as few can reach them. A look of realization crosses his face. He understands it's likely because the ones who subjugated the Demon Lord were a community of adventurers who were originally commoners. Lommel remarks that there are always adventurers who get in over their heads. She continues, explaining that the Dragonstone Kingdom has a contract for priority access to ores and gems from the dungeons, which in turn makes it easier for adventurers to buy high-quality weapons. Lanhea cuts in, calling Horace naive. She points out that the country has almost no immigration restrictions, allowing even arrogant and troublesome adventurers to enter freely. She sighed, adding one more point to the discussion. Horace conceded that since their kingdom's development was built on ores, it had been beneficial in the past to have a large number of adventurers. As he considered this, Ellie interjected with a potentially troubling rumor. She reported that executives from the adventurers' headquarters were rumored to be making a move, and that the term court adventurer had begun to circulate. She elaborated that for adventurers, this was the worst kind of immigrant invasion strategy, reminding them that a country had been destroyed by this very tactic a century ago. Horace reacted with disbelief, questioning who would entertain such nonsense in a world governed by the divine blood adventure. His expression hardened as he processed the implications. He wondered aloud if the adventurers' headquarters truly intended to destroy their country. Admitting he lacked details, he insisted they must remain vigilant, a sentiment with which Lanhea immediately agreed. He slumped forward, burying his face in his hands with an exhausted sigh. Things had become messy all of a sudden. Beside him, Lommel looked on with concern, asking what this meant for her. He then looked up, his eyes filled with conviction. He defined an adventurer as someone who treasures their ideals and strives for daily improvement, declaring that it was meant to be something more sacred. Lanhea asked him what he intended to do. With a grim look, Horace stated his policy. He would make an example of the problematic ones and round them all up in a single, decisive action. While Lommel responded with an enthusiastic, "All right," Ellie offered a more measured approach. She advised that to truly understand the root of the problem, they first needed to observe the situation carefully. Frustrated, he leaned back in his chair, hands clasped behind his head. He lamented that his enemies had created a situation he detested above all else. Lanhea pressed him, asking what exactly they were planning. His thoughts then drifted back to a painful memory from his youth. He saw himself as a small boy, on his hands and knees, desperately pleading with someone. "Please," the memory echoed, "teach me how to use a sword." A foot steps firmly onto the ground outside a large, well-appointed building. A cheerful voice calls out, announcing their arrival to someone named Horace. Inside, Horace is at a workbench surrounded by tools and components. A young woman with bear-like ears, Idelica, enters and immediately brings up the recent chaos, asking if he heard about his steel puppet rampaging through the capital. She playfully suggests he's confusing it with the dragon that was actually on a rampage. From nearby, Princess Lucia corrects her, stating that it was indeed the golem that was taken out of the capital. She adds thoughtfully that if the golem were truly the culprit, then she herself would become a criminal. She then turns to Horace with a beaming smile, declaring him an amazing person. Visibly tired, he questions her perception of him, retorting that his ability to leave no traces doesn't mean he would cause wanton destruction, as he wouldn't be able to fix it anyway. He then seems to properly register her presence for the first time. His focus returns to the table, which is covered in precisely machine parts. Idelica asks what he is working on, correctly identifying one component as a magic tool's core. Horace confirms simply that he is making a weapon. He elaborates that it is something like a gun or machine cannon, designed to emit a beam of light that can instantly penetrate steel armor. Hearing this, both Lucia and Idelica lean in closer, their expressions shifting to ones of serious concern over such a dangerous device. Idelica presses him, asking how in the world he acquired such an advanced level of technical skill. Horace looks away, stating only that he learned it from books and that a full explanation would take too long. His small, floating companion flits in surprise at the curtness of his answer. Lucia, however, seems to grasp the implication. She wonders if the inspiration for this weapon also came from books, recalling the great summoning era of 1,800 years ago. She notes that while the techniques of that time were incredibly refined, replicating them is another matter entirely, musing that with access to such books, one could do almost anything. Her exploration of the workshop suddenly yields a result. With a cry of delight, she holds up a detailed mechanical model of a humanoid golem, announcing that she's found something interesting. She presents her find to the others. Horace identifies it immediately as a replica of the steel puppet that had rampaged outside the capital. Lucia looks at the model with newfound understanding, remarking that this is what it looks like. He watches as Adelica playfully aims the new weapon, laughing and making shooting noises while Princess Lucia looks on. He quickly interjects, warning her to be careful as the device can actually fire bullets. Adelica freezes in shock, shouting for him to stop. Her playful demeanor vanishes instantly. Now terrified, she peeks out from behind a support beam, telling Lucia not to point the weapon at her. She reminds Horace that he claimed it was just a replica, but he clarifies that even a replica can turn a B-rank adventurer into a beehive. As the others discuss the weapon, Princess Lucia's attention is captured by the small steel puppet. She gazes at it, marveling that something so seemingly cute could be so deadly. She suddenly exclaims that the golem just smiled at her. Adelica, still shaken, laughs it off, refusing to fall for such a trick. Horace, too, seems skeptical, stating that the golem shouldn't be able to move on its own, let alone smile. But then, to everyone's astonishment, the small golem lurches forward. It takes a step, then another, its heavy footfalls echoing slightly in the workshop. Lucia's eyes widen with delight as she cries out that it's walking. He explains its slow pace, noting that it was designed to function as a stationary cannon. Since he already possesses sufficient mobility and is accustomed to manipulating weapons connected to his body, the golem itself doesn't need to be fast. Adelica, listening intently, realizes this was his plan all along. Seeing the model trundle along, Princess Lucia turns to Horace with a hopeful expression and asks if she can take it with her. He readily agrees, explaining that he doesn't really use it anymore. He clarifies that it was only for running tests before he could finish the real thing, and now that he can use the actual golem in the grand or vein of Kinsekai, he no longer needs the prototype. Overjoyed, she hugs the small golem tightly, affectionately calling it Ochan. Horace asks what the golem's name is, and Lucia, after a moment's thought, proudly declares its name to be Orchestrion. Later, standing before a grand building, her cheerful mood has faded. Cradling Orchestrion, she sighs in exasperation, lamenting that the problems never seem to end. She continues to fret, realizing that if the adventurers were to arrive en masse, they would not have nearly enough accommodations for them. She sits buried under a mountain of documents, her hands pressed to her temples in frustration. The sheer volume of preparations is overwhelming, and she cries out that she cannot possibly handle it all at once. As she despairs, the door opens and her companion, Adelica, enters the room, announcing herself cheerfully as Ochan. She explains she is there to help with the construction applications that have buried the princess. Lucia, looking up, acknowledges her friend's arrival and notes that she has already made space for the orchestra model from Horace on her cluttered desk. She remarks that the amount of work looks painful and muses that if she had known, she would have asked Horace to add an automatic writing function to his golem. As Lucia continues to diligently write, Adelica announces that someone is there to see her, revealing the visitor is Ares-san, the hero who united the merchant community. Lucia, too busy to process the name at first, simply questions the interruption. A tall woman with long, dark hair and glasses steps through the doorway, offering a warm greeting to Princess Lucia. A moment of recognition dawns on the princess's face, and she leaps up from her chair, joyfully exclaiming that it has been a long time. She rushes forward and throws her arms around Ares-san in a tight, enthusiastic hug. Held in the embrace, Ares-san responds with playful affection, sticking her tongue out before patting the princess's head with a gentle, knowing smile. She remarks that unfortunately, a 16-year-old girl like Lucia no longer makes her heart race. Watching the exchange, Adelica seethes, recognizing what she perceives as jealousy and muttering about how unsightly and perverted her companion is. Her anger erupts. She points accusingly at Ares-san, shouting insults and commanding her miniature golem, "Go, Orchestrion." The small construct lunges, but Ares-san stops it effortlessly with a single outstretched hand. She looks down at the immobilized puppet, dismissing it as a mere cheap imitation, leaving Adelica speechless and aghast. She turns her attention back to the princess, her demeanor shifting to business. She states that she heard about the construction problems and has prepared an item to help, presenting a binder of documents. She presented a document to the astonished princess, explaining that it contained data for a large-class magic tool. With this, she claimed they could construct quality 3-story buildings in a mere half-day. Before Lucia could fully process the information, Adelica slammed her fist down and raged. She demanded to know if they were looking down on construction, revealing that her master had created this tool while just playing around, yet it was exactly what they urgently needed. Her outburst continued as she turned to Ares-san, her confusion mixing with her anger. She pointed out the discrepancy. This was a magic tool, but Horace-san was known as a Golem Master. In response to the question, Ares-san calmly began her explanation. She stated that golems and magic tools are not fundamentally different. The key distinction, she elaborated, is that a magic tool's performance is fixed, while a golem's effectiveness is entirely dependent on the skill of its user. The explanation sparked understanding in Princess Lucia. She deduced that a Golem Master essentially acts as the crucial performance-giving components of the golem. Ares-san confirmed her insight, clarifying that they had taken the golem Horace created and modified it with new parts, effectively turning it into a magic tool. Her mind then turned to the practicalities of the device. The princess reasoned that a large-class magic tool would surely require a significant number of coins to operate. Eri-san affirmed this, adding that anyone could use it by simply inserting a coin and that she would provide the necessary capital. She then casually proposed a sum, 10,000 coins. The figure struck Princess Lucia speechless. She realized it amounted to a tenth of her country's entire national budget. Idelica, equally flabbergasted, demanded to know how Eri-san could possibly have access to such a vast fortune. She brushed off their shock, referring to the immense sum as a meager amount and stating that as citizens, it was only natural for them to help. Idelica, though momentarily irritated by the casual dismissal of a fortune, quickly declared they would gladly accept the offer. With the financial matter settled, she presented a compact, briefcase-like device. She cautioned that this magic tool was merely a test model. While its safety was guaranteed, its true effectiveness would only be known once used on site. The princess acknowledged this, agreeing to contact the castle architect before proceeding. She then announced her intention to depart. Princess Lucia, surprised by the suddenness, asked if she was returning already. Eri-san simply stated that it was because she had already finished recharging. She offers a cryptic smile, telling Princess Lucia that it is too early for her to understand the meaning of recharging. Lucia, depicted as a small, flustered doodle, can only question what she means. With those parting words, she leaves, the doors closing behind her. Alone in the room, Lucia's voice echoes her thoughts, wondering how long it will take for her to find out the truth. The young princess muses aloud, questioning if the answer will come tomorrow, or perhaps the day after. Nearby, Idrika listens with a weary expression, thinking to herself that it would be for the best if Lucia never understood such a perverted hobby. Meanwhile, in another part of the kingdom, Horace and Lommel make their way through a bustling street filled with the clang of hammers on anvils. The district is clearly dedicated to the crafting of weapons and armor. They stop to observe the area, which Lommel identifies as the Dragonstone Kingdom's smithing district. She notes with interest that it seems one can receive government funding just by opening a shop there, a revelation that catches Horace by surprise. She gestures towards the impressive displays, remarking on the abundance of high-quality weapons. It's obvious to her that the country has invested heavily, likely to ensure smiths can focus on creating the best possible equipment without financial worry. Her observation prompts a question for her master. Wouldn't he be able to make weapons like these as well? Horace clarifies that while he can appraise them, he is not a true blacksmith, and his own metal processing skills are limited. He explains further that the sword-type golem he uses is forged from a special metal that an average smith couldn't handle, which is why he must craft it himself. He admits, however, that his technique is nothing compared to an expert's. Lommel recalls that he only taught her combat and the basics of weapon making, then playfully asks why he won't sell his creations to her. Their conversation is interrupted by commotion nearby. A man holds up a gleaming sword, shouting that it's made from a special kind of metal. Instantly intrigued, Lommel exclaims at the scene and urges her master to go take a closer look. As they draw closer, they find a portly blacksmith sternly refusing the sale. He warns that if someone unskilled in mana manipulation uses the weapon, their body will be torn apart from the inside. The smith demands a certificate proving proficiency before he will even consider selling it, a requirement Horace has never heard of before. His quiet inquiry was interrupted by another customer, a B-rank adventurer who loudly protested the shop's policy. He insisted that he was perfectly capable of mana manipulation and that the country's rules shouldn't apply to him. As the argument escalated, Lommel observed that since other adventurer guild branches lack the authority to issue these special certificates, it's common for outsiders to cause a fuss. The blacksmith confirmed her point, explaining that while most workshops avoid troublesome ores, this town's advanced techniques mean some such items are still produced. His patience exhausted, the adventurer lunged forward, screaming at the old man not to mess with him. He declared that he'd feel bad for the weapon if it were to be used by an ignorant fool. In response to the threat, Lommel moved in a blur, her expression hardening as she prepared to intervene. Before he could react, a solid blow connected with the back of his head, stunning him mid-shout. The force of the impact sent him crashing face-first on the floor. Lommel stood over his fallen form and offered a casual apology. Horace, however, immediately critiqued her method, telling Lommel that in such a situation, she should have paralyzed him instead of simply pushing him from above. Her confident expression faltered slightly. The adventurer staggered back to his feet, clutching his head and demanding to know who hit him. Annoyed, Lommel retorted that she already said sorry and that he should treat her to a meal. Her audacious response completely changed his demeanor. The adventurer's anger vanished, replaced by wide-eyed admiration as he declared her a top-class lady and enthusiastically invited her to join his guild. Lommel stared back, unimpressed. He pressed on, noting that she looked like a blacksmith and that his guild could use her skills. He then revealed his surprise that she hadn't realized he was using an intimidation skill on her, impressed by her immunity. She considered the adventurer's offer while Horace recalled the ranking system displayed on a chart. The ranks ascended from F to S, with SS and hero ranks designated as special, indescribable categories. Lommel quietly wondered if B-rank adventurers were truly only at that level. The B-rank adventurer himself dismissed her concerns with a smug grin, assuring her his guild was amazing and he would handle everything. When Lommel retorted, asking if the B in his rank stood for idiot, his expression soured instantly. He lunged forward, grabbing her and shouting that they were all looking down on it. His aggression was met with calm expertise. Lommel twisted his arm into a lock, coolly informing him that her response was simply self-defense. With a grunt of effort, she leveraged her position to throw him. She sent him flying out of the shop entrance. He crashed onto the street with a sickening thud as startled onlookers watched, his face contorted in pain from the impact. Back inside, Horace nonchalantly commented that the materials from the man's armor seemed worth extracting and asked for her opinion on the sword. Lommel, however, was still incensed, questioning how anyone could hit a woman so easily and comparing him to a human-shaped mimic. When Horace asked why she was fighting, she shot back, demanding to know what he was doing while his cute disciple was in trouble. The portly blacksmith interjected, explaining that he knew Lommel would be all right. Horace conceded the point, adding that since everyone was ignoring him anyway, he was considering finding something else to do. His attention then returned to Lommel, who was gazing out a window. He asked if she ever felt lonely. The moment he said her name, the blacksmith froze, his eyes widening in sudden, dramatic realization. He recognized her as the legendary greatest blacksmith of the hero community. She turned, a confident smile playing on her lips. Tipping her goggles slightly, she confirmed it. "Yeah, that's me," she stated plainly. "Nice to meet ya." The revelation left Horace stunned. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple as he processed the information. "Does that mean you're the hero's master?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Lommel's grin widened as she confirmed that he was right. This confirmation was too much for the local blacksmith to bear. He began to tremble violently, his fists clenched and a low groan escaping his lips, completely overwhelmed by the presence of his idol. Horace and Lommel could only watch, taken aback by his intense reaction. While browsing the blacksmith's wares, Horace notes that he doesn't see items like this very often, finding it interesting enough to purchase for research. Lommel adds that tales of his dragon slaying in the capital are spreading, and his help maintaining the country's facilities has even led to lower taxes. He turns to the shopkeeper, pointing out 2 items he wishes to buy. The blacksmith, still overwhelmed, exclaims that a big shot is in his shop. To think that the hero's master would want one of his swords, this, he declares, is the defining moment of his life. Unfazed, Horace simply asks for the price. After completing his purchase, Horace steps outside, apologizing for any commotion and jokingly asking if he should test his new blade right there in the street. He examines the new blade, admitting it's a welcome surprise. He explains to Lommel that while the government has been improving steadily thanks to Aderica's magic tool development, he hadn't been interested in looking at civilian tools because they lack the same resources. As they walk away from the shop, Lommel remarks that deciding an item's worth based on first impressions isn't always wise. Horace agrees, noting that the aggressive man from earlier had disappeared while they were inside, and that he had been holding back. He then asks if there are many adventurers like that these days. Lommel confirms, suggesting he was the type of person Ellie had mentioned, adventurers who get in over their heads. Horace concurs, stating the man was the type you couldn't reason with. She elaborates, reminding him that while they lent a construction magic tool to the Dragonstone country, there isn't enough accommodation for the resulting influx of people. This has led to more people arriving than there are established guilds to manage them, increasing the odds of encountering such individuals. Her point is punctuated by a glimpse of the same adventurer bragging that the man from earlier was also from his guild, implying their arrogance stems from newfound numbers. Back with the pair, Lommel supposes that could be true. The aggressive adventurer is now seen standing outside the blacksmith shop, looking back inside with a confused expression. He questions what the shopkeeper is saying, reminding him that he was supposed to procure some weapons. His confusion turns to outrage as he shouts for the blacksmith by name, Ivan San. He yells that it's strange, questioning why the shopkeeper suddenly won't sell him a weapon. His frustration still simmering, the aggressive adventurer recounts the incident from the blacksmith's shop to his superiors. He sits in a well-appointed room, head in his hand, while a female colleague stands by, listening intently with her arms crossed. He explains that just as he was making his case, another customer arrived and interfered in the matter. His colleague confirms this, adding that she even attempted to reason with the interloper, but to no avail. The report is received by a sharp-eyed official, who processes the information with a grave expression. He muses on the severity of the situation, concluding that if the story is true, a blacksmith refusing to sell weapons to their SS-rank guild, the World Conquerors, is an act of defiance equivalent to declaring war on all adventurers. Outside a guild hall, an indignant voice shouts in agreement with an unseen compatriot. Inside, the aggressive adventurer slams his fist on a table, complaining loudly to a dark-haired official. He fumes that the shopkeeper was just trying to pick a fight and that he refuses to forgive the barbaric woman. The official calmly asks what happened, prompting the adventurer to stammer and try to dismiss the topic. He recalls with frustration how he had been nice enough to invite the goggled woman to the guild, only for her to make fun of him. His companion cuts through the excuses, stating plainly that the adventurer started a fight and ended up getting beaten. Stunned, the adventurer demands to know how he could possibly know that. The official advises him not to pick fights with the wrong people and to always gather information first. The adventurer protests that she was just a blacksmith, a fact she never denied. He then laughs it off, claiming he let his guard down while trying to gather information. He admits he thought he could win because she was a woman, remarking that the red-haired lady with the ponytail was top class. A nearby blonde official listens with a stoic expression. His dark-haired companion pieces the story together aloud. A top-class, red-haired woman with a ponytail, who is a blacksmith yet powerful enough to defeat a B-rank adventurer like him. The adventurer tries to interject, but the official continues his train of thought. He concludes that, as expected, the adventurer truly did pick a fight with the wrong person, before identifying who that woman was. The official reveals her identity. She is the chief of the hero community's workshop. The adventurer's face contorts in shock at the news. Still reeling, the adventurer sputters about her audacity to refuse an invitation to an SS-rank guild. The official calmly counters that a recent report confirms she defeated the Demon King, and then poses a chilling question. Why do you think we're above them? He desperately tried to rationalize his defeat, arguing that even Ivan San had acknowledged the Demon King's ability to control men's minds. He insisted that if they had possessed an item to protect their minds, they could have one on their own. The dark-haired official, identifying himself as the Guild Master, cut through the adventurer's excuses. He calmly asked the man, whom he called Settle, if he knew the real reason he had been allowed to join his personal squad. Settle was left speechless. With a faint, knowing smile, the Guild Master stated the reason was simple: money. He added a sarcastic remark that it was, of course, because Settle was so amazing. He elaborated that his personal guard normally only accepted adventurers who were at least A rank. The sole reason Settle was an exception was because his family's trading company had paid the guild a vast sum. The blonde female official then chimed in, her voice sharp with indignation. She pointed out that Settle was the only person in the guard who was an S rank. She then revealed that a weapon made by the very woman Settle had fought, a weapon considered a defect by the hero community, had been sold to a trading company. She continued, explaining that she had needed a huge amount of money to buy that exact sword at an auction. It was for this reason that she bent the rules and allowed Settle to join. The revelation struck Settle with physical force, sending him to his knees in shock. He couldn't comprehend that even the blacksmith's mistakes were so valuable. The guild master confirmed it was true, adding that he himself had been promoted from S rank to SS rank because of that very sword. Leaning in, the guild master's voice turned cold and menacing. He warned Settle that he didn't care about his ignorance, but if he caused any trouble for the guild, he would be removed. He pressed the point, asking if Settle now understood his actual worth. The adventurer could only stammer in disbelief. Humiliated, he stumbled away down the corridor. The guild master watched him go, muttering that he was an idiot before telling him to go and cool his head. Once Settle was gone, the female official, Leona, asked the guild master how many of their guild members had come to the city and were likely to side with Settle. He replied that he believed the number was around 50, a figure that gave him pause. He considered the potential troublemakers, recalling how Settle was always bragging about his connections to thugs in other high-ranking guilds. His subordinate, Leona, however, advised against any rash action. She brought up a recent newspaper story about the hero community capturing troublesome nobles, warning that if their guild caused trouble for the community, the devil might demand they repay their debts. Understanding the precarity of their situation, he acknowledged that a single misstep could cause the entire guild to collapse. He ordered Leona to gather the executives and devise countermeasures. With a quiet affirmation, she turned and left the room. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Horace gazed out a window. He mused that it had been 10 years since they were in the same city, but it seemed a happy reunion was not in the cards. He had come specifically because he'd heard rumors that Deed-san was here, but it appeared he had missed him. His search brought him to the local adventurers guild. He scanned the quest board, his expectations deflating as he saw it was filled with nothing more than simple or delivery requests. His companion, Ellie, asked if he'd ever been to other guild branches. He explained that he had been an adventurer 10 years ago, but couldn't continue while also working at the castle, so he had to stop at some point. As Ellie began to ask if he was listening, the bell on the guild's door jingled. She remarked that it was about time, just as a cheerful voice announced, "I'm back." A small girl, Nasha, entered, dragging a large sack. Horace looked on, confused. Ellie introduced her, explaining that Nasha is the youngest adventurer alive and uses this branch as her base, acting as a sort of mascot for the others. Horace wondered how such a small girl could be an adventurer, and a solo one at that. The reason is that monsters don't appear in the shallow parts of the Grand or Vein of Kinsekai, where there are gathering spots with ground deeper than usual, perfect for a child to access. Nasha proudly presented her haul to the receptionist, who praised her for gathering so much. Ellie explained to Horace that since the location is out of the way and a hassle for adults, it's a perfect job for an energetic little girl. He stood just inside the Adventurers Guild, puzzled. When Ellie had asked him to come along, he had wondered what might have happened, but this was not what he expected. As he stood there, Ellie approached the young adventurer, Nasha, with an unsettling glee. She greeted the girl warmly, asking if she had been working hard. Nasha, recognizing her as the hero One-E-san, seemed pleased. Watching from the doorway, Horace could only conclude that Ellie was simply a pervert. Ellie found the child's dedication admirable. With determined fists, Nasha explained her motivation. She needed to do her best and earn money because her father was seriously injured. The guild receptionist overheard and expressed her concern, questioning if Nasha should be pushing herself so hard. She reminded the girl that, until recently, she had been bedridden due to a heart condition. Nasha beamed, excitedly proclaiming that she was now fully healed. Upon hearing the good news, Ellie became flustered with joy. Inspired by the praise and her own goals, Nasha declared that she needed to become an amazing adventurer, just like the hero she admired. Watching the scene unfold, Horace reflected on the nature of such aspirations. He mused that adventurers are those who aspire to be someone, striving every day to get closer to their ideals. He continued his internal monologue, acknowledging that while life sometimes forces compromise, true aspirations never disappear. His philosophical train of thought was cut short by Ellie's actions. As she moved to embrace the child, he quickly grabbed her shoulder, declaring that aspirations remain pure only if they are not defiled. A nearby man with glasses yelped in surprise, but Horace quickly dismissed the commotion as nothing. With Ellie momentarily restrained, his gaze fell upon the young girl again. A strange sense of familiarity washed over him. He felt he had seen this child somewhere before. The feeling coalesced into a sudden, vivid memory, carrying a small, unconscious child from a raging fire. The realization struck him. This was the very same kid he had saved. He looks at the young girl, a faint smile on his lips, and tells her he's glad to see she's doing well. Nasha, though confirming she is fine, seems puzzled by his sudden warmth. Before he can explain, Ellie steps beside him, a knowing look in her eyes. She welcomes him to this side, observing that he has awakened as well. Her cryptic words only deepen Nasha's confusion, who asks what they're talking about. Nearby, the grumbling of other adventurers fills the air. One complains bitterly that Settle is a relentless taskmaster, a sentiment that clearly irritates him. Another vents his frustration, declaring he feels like breaking something, while his companion decides he'll blow off steam at the brothel later that night. A sharp clap cuts through the murmuring crowd. The sound came from Settle, who bellows for everyone's attention, his voice echoing through the guild hall. As he speaks, a boisterous group of adventurers steps forward. Their leader, a man with a towering mohawk, proudly announces they are from the S-rank guild, Excalibur. He then makes a stunning declaration. From this moment on, the entire branch will operate under the orders of the newly formed Settle Alliance. The receptionist quietly explains to a bewildered Nasha that an alliance is a coalition, a team formed by gathering people from different guilds and communities. The word alliance seems to strike a chord with Nasha, whose hand tightens around the hilt of her sword. Processing this new development, Horace turns to Ellie, questioning how such a takeover is possible and with whom Settle is affiliated. She explains that it is indeed possible, but it all depends on the rank of the guild that the alliance's representative belongs to. As the Excalibur leader roars at the crowd to silence their muttering, Ellie provides the final, chilling piece of the puzzle. She surmises that Settle's eligibility stems from his affiliation with the SS rank guild, World Conquerors. As the hostile takeover of the guild unfolds, the young girl Nasha, brandishing a wooden stick, confronts the aggressive adventurer Settle. She demands to know who he is to act so selfishly. Roaring, Settle retorts that it's his line, vowing to crush anyone who runs their mouth. Though flustered by his outburst, she stands her ground, declaring her own aspiration, that even she can become like the hero. Her bold claim is met with scorn. Settle dismissively asks what's wrong with this brat, while his dark-haired companion feigns a scream. From behind the counter, the guild receptionist's eye narrows in silent anger. Nasha presses on, insisting she's not a brat, but an adventurer who will one day be just like the hero. Settle's face twists in derision at her perceived cockiness. Nearby, Horace and Ellie observe the escalating situation, Horace looking on in surprise. His contempt boils over into rage. Settle complains that all anyone talks about recently is the hero, and it's starting to infuriate him. Nasha shrinks back as he looms over her menacingly. He grabs the child by the head, a cruel grin spreading across his face. He sneers that it's 100 years too early for her to be so arrogant, belittling the hero's accomplishments by claiming she only defeated a weak demon king due to a special ability. Overwhelmed by his cruelty, Nasha begins to sob. His companions erupt in laughter, mocking the idea that a child could ever become a hero. As Nasha cries, a sharp voice cuts through their ridicule, asking if they are too blind to see that they are the truly lame ones. The voice belongs to Ellie. Her face is a mask of pure, unadulterated fury, her glare so intense that it shocks Settle's group into stunned silence. Her sudden intervention startles Settle, who demands to know what's wrong with her. He attempts to intimidate her, reminding her she's just an employee and threatening to report her to her superiors for threatening them. The guild receptionist remains silent, her face hidden by her bangs. Before he can finish, the receptionist explodes. Screaming that they are pieces of trash, she lunges forward and smashes her fist into Settle's face. She furiously declares that as someone who deals with high-ranking adventurers daily, she knows people like him are a dime a dozen, and questions how he could dare yell at Nasha. Her fury unabated, she roared at the adventurers to get out, threatening to crush them if they lingered. The force of her blow sent Settle and his companions careening out of the guild hall, much to the shock of Horace and the others watching. With the troublemakers gone, Horace knelt to comfort the crying Nasha, reassuring her that the scary men had left. Nearby, the receptionist, still fuming, rolled up her sleeve and shouted for them to never return. He watched her, thinking to himself that a scary woman was still very much present. Ellie, however, approached the receptionist, whose name she revealed to be Tracy, and asked to speak with her about something. Moments later, seated in a private office, Tracy remarked on Horace's identity as the hero's master. noting that his calm demeanor during the incident now made sense. She added that the punch he delivered earlier was also quite something. She continued, explaining that she herself had been an adventurer until just a few years ago. She reminisced about adventuring with a blacksmith and how, after they had a child together, she was completing far more quests than she does now. Her story turned to her husband, Angel, who she recalled had a huge, creepy smile on his face recently. When she asked him about it, he excitedly told her about an amazing person who had bought one of his swords. Ellie, putting the pieces together, asked if his store was the Smith House Angel, while Horace realized he couldn't get to his main topic. The realization struck Horace. He confirmed that it was indeed him. He had been buying 2 swords for Lommel's research. Tracy beamed, understanding that if the hero's master bought something from her husband, he would naturally be thrilled and have every right to brag. As the friendly conversation continued, Ellie cleared her throat to interrupt. Apologizing, she asked to return to the main topic, prompting Tracy to ask what she wanted. She stated her request plainly, asking about this subtle alliance they had encountered earlier and what the branch planned to do. She specified that she would like for them to refrain from making any moves for the time being. Tracy, sensing a hidden motive, noted that Ellie seemed to have a plan. Ellie confirmed she had a small plan. Tracy, taking a sip from her cup, agreed to inform the branch chief herself. Ellie then asked what Tracy's plan was, to which she replied that they were quite busy with something else at the moment. She continues, explaining that rumors have reached even here about the Diamante Kingdom's plan to establish a new class of court adventurers. Ellie elaborates on the concept, explaining that the kingdom plans to grant this title to adventurers who have proven themselves and can serve as role models for others to emulate. Horace adds that these chosen adventurers would be granted special privileges, provided they limit their activities to within the kingdom's borders, a thought that gives him pause. The current world order is divided. There are the adventurers, who grew weary of constant territorial disputes and chose a life of journeying. Then there are nations like Diamante, which focus on human growth and lineage rather than praying to a god. And finally, there are the religious states, which maintain themselves through the name of a deity. A delicate balance has been maintained by keeping human society split between these factions, particularly the Divine Blood Adventure. Forcing these 2 disparate groups, who have grown so differently, to merge would only shatter that equilibrium. Returning to the present issue, Horace asks Tracy to leave the matter of the Settle Alliance to him, though he admits uncertainty about whether it will be enough to convince the higher-ups. He then asks Ellie if he can entrust the control of any potential backlash to the hero community, to which she confidently agrees. She clarifies that the matter isn't quite settled. Her concern isn't for Nasha herself, but she still asks Tracy to please keep a close eye on the young girl. Her request puzzles Horace. Ellie explains that while she would prefer to watch over Nasha constantly, it's impossible. Tracy understands the implication, acknowledging that the girl could be targeted because of recent events and promising to remain vigilant. As they prepare to leave, Tracy gives a friendly wave, asking them to let her know if her husband, Angel, comes across any unusual or. Horace confirms he will pass the message along, and they depart. Outside, the town continues its day under a cloudy sky. Inside a well-appointed room at night, the adventurer Settle reviews a document, a smug grin spreading across his face. He murmurs his satisfaction. Nice, nice. Across from him, a well-dressed man named Alvaro gestures enthusiastically, praising Settle for the Alliance's amazing growth. Alvaro predicts that one day, their organization will be large enough to monopolize all the wealth in the treasure capital of Lapis. Settle simply lets out a low, confident chuckle. His companion, Alvaro, looks on with a hint of confusion, questioning the quiet reaction. In response, Settle's expression hardens into one of intense ambition. He rebukes his companion sharply, declaring that Alvaro lacks ambition. The sudden shift in tone leaves Alvaro stammering Settle's name in shock. He continues, dismissing the idea of controlling the Dragonstone Kingdom as insufficient. Settle's vision is far grander. He proposes creating an even bigger organization that will encompass the entire kingdom. Leaning forward with his hands clasped under his chin, a predatory gleam in his eyes, Settle reveals his ultimate goal, a day when even the world conquerors, those who once looked down on him for being a mere beer rank, will be forced to bow their heads to him. A large, stately building stands under a dark sky, its many windows suggesting a place of significant administrative power. Inside, a well-dressed man named Alvaro stands before a seated adventurer, Settle, declaring that their reason for undermining the country is to right its wrongs. Settle quietly contemplates the gravity of this statement. As Settle's expression remains grim, Alvaro elaborates. He concedes the country has its faults, but also notes its strengths, such as the treasure capital Lapis, which boasts an abundance of dungeons filled with rare ores and excellent weapons. He then details the systemic issues, explaining that every single ore taken from a dungeon must be handed over to the guild. Furthermore, to even access the middle and lower layers, adventurers must obtain special permission, a fact Alvaro acknowledges as a significant barrier. Settle adds his own perspective, stating that trustworthy adventurers who have spent years exploring the grand ore vein of Kinsekai are given such permission with ease. He continues, explaining the ripple effect. Blacksmiths and merchants with few connections find it difficult to establish themselves. To acquire materials, they must constantly seek out adventurers who already possess the necessary permits, a process he calls a huge pain and an excessive demand. Raising a finger for emphasis, Settle reveals another layer to the system. Soldiers of the Dragonstone Kingdom also venture into the dungeons for training and resources, and the ores they collect are funneled into a rare stone market that is exclusive to citizens. He turns to Alvaro, his voice sharp, labeling the constant monopoly as unfair. He explains that only when ores are left unsold in the exclusive market are they finally transferred to the common market. With narrowed eyes, Settle declares that this inequality must be stopped. His voice rises to a shout as he proclaims his solution. Everyone must be allowed to enter the dungeons freely. Alvaro throws his arms wide in enthusiastic agreement. With a triumphant, almost manic grin, Settle clenches his fist and reveals the true nature of his plan. All the ores inside the dungeon, he roars, should become their monopoly. He listened as his associate, Alvaro, laid out the next steps for their monopoly plan. Alvaro explained that they would need more people, suggesting they could easily recruit adventurers, merchants, and blacksmiths who were dissatisfied with the current state of affairs. He responded with a booming declaration, pointing forward with conviction. They would gather all the disgruntled parties and forge a giant organization. With that power, he proclaimed, he would become the new ruler of the treasure capital Lapis. Their discussion was interrupted by a sudden knock at the door, prompting him to call out for the visitor to enter. The confident declaration was cut short as the door burst open, revealing a man covered head to toe in bandages. The injured man stumbled forward, urgently pleading for Settle to listen. Settle's expression soured with annoyance as he recognized the man as the leader of Excalibur. The bandaged man, supported by two companions, explained that when they announced they were taking control of the branch, they were met with retaliation. Seething with rage, he clenched his fists and vowed that he would never forgive those women. Upon hearing of their defeat, Settle erupted in fury, smashing his fist down on a nearby table and shattering it instantly. His companions continued their complaint, the dark-haired one boasting that as a member of an SS-rank guild, an association led by him should have been more than capable of taking over a mere branch. He demanded to know why this had happened. Alvaro interjected, explaining that while their opponent's guild was currently S-rank, that was only due to their previous leader, but he admitted he didn't know how the failure occurred. The dark-haired man turned to Settle with a dramatic flair, placing a hand over his heart and asking if he would take revenge on their behalf. Settle stared back, his anger giving way to cold consideration. He smirked, confirming that he would. He declared that what his opponents had done was akin to throwing mud in his face. Overjoyed, the bandaged leader announced they would be leaving, and the trio quickly departed. As the group departed, a calm voice emerged from the shadows behind Settle. It was Horace, who asked who Settle had been fighting. He then offered a piece of advice. Don't pick fights with the wrong people. He listened as Settle described the group responsible for his allies' defeat. A small girl, a receptionist with dyed hair, and another woman. Settle scoffed at the description, declaring that such an insolent lot could not possibly be heroes. Despite the setback, Settle's confidence was unshaken. He grinned, telling his companion not to worry and to leave everything to him. He reasoned that even if they were adventurers, he simply needed to formulate a plan to corner them, assuring himself of his eventual victory. Meanwhile, within the grand castle of the Diamante Kingdom, King Barzil stood by a window, his gaze distant. He murmured to himself, contemplating the emerging concept of a court adventure. A dark-haired courtier approached, reporting that a significant number of adventurers had begun to flood the capital, many of whom voiced support for this new system. The king stroked his beard, his expression thoughtful, and inquired about the sentiment of the common people regarding the matter. The attendant confirmed that a large portion of the populace was against it, appearing to reject the notion on an intuitive level. The king simply hummed in acknowledgement, his gaze remaining fixed on the city below. He elaborated, however, that there was a segment of the population, specifically those who relied more on adventurers than the nobility, who believed it was necessary to regulate their numbers, with some even protesting in favor of acknowledging the court adventurers. King Barzil's expression hardened. He considered the current era one where the divine bloodline was carefully managed to create a proper balance. In this context, he viewed the Adventurers Association's proposal as a direct act of aggression against the nation. He turned to his courtier, questioning if those who proposed and supported the idea of court adventurers truly understood the implications of elite adventurers being officially recognized by the state. The courtier affirmed that they did not. The king's eyes narrowed. He concluded that if that were the case, the nation would be forced to establish its own court-exclusive adventurers. His attendant confirmed that, according to the rumors, this was precisely the intention. King Barzil continued his line of thought, recalling a historical lesson. He stated that it is impossible for a neutral party, like an adventurer, to work under a government. The country that had attempted this very system 100 years prior, he remembered, was destroyed in just a few years, a cautionary tale he suspected few people still knew. His courtier continues the briefing, explaining that the Adventurers Guild is fundamentally a neutral faction. To ally with one country is to go against that core principle, and the freedom to move between nations for work is a complication born from that very neutrality. He elaborates that the quest system is recognized in every country as a mechanism for resolving public dissatisfaction. Adventurers, by their nature, are simply people with a right to accept or decline these quests. The courtier posits that in the case of a particularly long quest, some form of exclusivity contract might be made. King Barzil listens intently, murmuring in thoughtful agreement. The king's expression hardens with realization. He concludes that it appears someone has instigated the adventurers, manipulating them from the shadows. He sighs, leaning back in his chair. For now, he sees no choice but to let them continue, admitting that he has no clue who could have planned this. The courtier warns that the citizens' dissatisfaction is growing by the day, and a riot might not be out of the question. Stroking his beard, the king replies that they will have to wait for the other side to show their hand before deciding on a course of action. The king gives one final, cryptic instruction regarding the antenna. The courtier bows, acknowledging the order, and departs from the royal study. The courtier presents a single strand of hair. The king asks if the idea came to him after seeing the king's own beard, to which the courtier affirms. King Barzil then muses aloud that it should be about time the item reached the hero's mansion. In the world of combat, a fundamental principle exists. Every technique has a defined range. Because this is common knowledge, fighters can anticipate and avoid attacks based on their expected reach. However, the item known as the antenna is a tool that completely overturns this notion, creating an overwhelmingly superior range. If Horus could wield such an item freely, his combat potential would become absolute. Within the royal court, the dark-haired courtier considered the implications of the king's gift. He mused that whether Horus's targets were good or evil, they might be completely destroyed before they even realized what was happening. King Barzil concurred, stating that for Horus, it was the perfect toy after all. He then sat at his desk to formalize his commands, deciding what to tell the trading company they had dispatched. The king instructed his courtier to have them retreat to the nearest town away from the treasure capital, Lapis, citing the danger of stray bullets. He declared his intention to write the message verbatim. His expression hardened as he contemplated the political situation. He acknowledged that as long as the Divine Blood adventure remained divided, he could not apply too much pressure on the adventurers. Nevertheless, he resolved that sometimes a king must make an example. Meanwhile, far from the capital's political machinations, two of Horus's companions, Lommel and a long-haired armored woman, arrived at their destination, letting out an excited gasp of awe. Before them stood the source of their amazement. A colossal communications antenna, its massive dish pointed skyward from atop a towering structure. Lommel could only stammer at its immense size. As they took in the scale of the device, Lommel remarked that it must have been difficult for the Diamante Kingdom's soldiers to transport, even in pieces. The armored woman noted that weight reduction magic had been applied, but Lommel admitted that despite hearing that excuse every time, she couldn't help but be impressed by the sheer size. Horus joined them, observing the fully assembled antenna. He recalled that it had just been in pieces underground and mused that while he could have operated the capital single-handedly without assembling it, he now wondered just how much more he could accomplish with it in one piece. His thoughts were interrupted as Ellie and Tyrus arrived, carrying stacks of equipment. Ellie announced their arrival, confirming she'd brought the items. Lommel, however, questioned why he'd gone to the trouble of placing something so eye-catching there and what he planned to use it for. He turned his attention to the large wooden crate they had delivered. Now open, it revealed rows of identical, compact devices. He offered a simple word of thanks. The armored woman knelt by the crate, picking up one of the items. "What are these?" she asked. Ellie explained they were communication magic tools. The armored woman immediately declared her intention to test one, warning the others not to jostle them. She and the others stared in awe at the small devices Horus presented. He explained that while communication systems were typically the size of entire buildings, he had done everything he could to miniaturize them, a feat that left his companions speechless with admiration. As Lanhea inspected one of the devices, noting its surprisingly simple construction, Horus's attention was drawn to Tyrus. The maid was meticulously examining another device with a small tool. "What's wrong, Tyrus?" he asked. She replied, expressing her surprise at its design. In response, Horus revealed that the main system for processing the communications was stored separately in his room. His revelation shocked Lommel. "So small?" she exclaimed. He confirmed her surprise, gesturing with his hands to indicate the system was merely the size of a small box. He then elaborated on the device's inner workings after Tyrus pointed out that the internal boards didn't seem to use any magic power. He confirmed she had noticed correctly, explaining that a panel golem beneath the main cube was designed specifically to generate the necessary power. This new information led Lommel to ask if the panel golem was a monster-type golem, given its ability to generate magic. "That's right," he affirmed, as Tyrus marveled at his deep knowledge of such creatures. While they discussed the golem, Ellie, holding her own device, pieced the entire system together. She correctly deduced that the magic power generated by the monster was sent to the main cube, which then enabled calls via the large antenna. Her summary clarified the system's uniqueness. The armored companion noted how different it was from the magic tool golems Horus typically used. Lommel, ever the entrepreneur, excitedly pointed out its key advantages. No need for personal magic power and no coin slots. She immediately saw it as a fantastic advertising opportunity. This talk of profit prompted the armored companion to suggest they could be used as emergency wallets by defeating the golem for coins. "Don't break them," Horus quickly interjected, explaining he had only made 100 prototypes and that they should just call for help instead. Putting the device to the test, Lommel powered one up. She explained the simple procedure. Enter the assigned number to call a specific device. Lanhea, what is your number? She asked. Upon learning it was XX9, she initiated the call. Ah, do you hear me? She spoke into the communicator as Horace and Lanhea watched intently. Puffing her cheeks in anticipation, she held her device ready. Nearby, Horace gave final instructions to Lanhea, explaining that she must press the device when the incoming call light activates. The armored companion announced she would move to the other side to complete the test circuit. The connection was instantaneous. On the other end, Langia's hair stood on end as she reeled back, utterly shocked by the sudden, loud voice erupting from her device. Back with the others, Lommel burst into maniacal laughter, thrilled to have witnessed Langia's reaction. Horace calmly informed her that if she didn't end the call, the connection would simply remain open, privately musing on her childishness. Through the open line, Langia's voice inquired about the device's maximum range. He admitted that while he wasn't certain how the antenna processed the signal, he was confident it could reach anywhere within the city of Lapis. To properly determine its capabilities, Horace later explained to Ellie and Tiras that he needed testers to gauge the range and provide feedback. Ellie immediately understood and took charge of distributing the devices. Tiras, meanwhile, was overjoyed at the realization she could now speak to Princess Lucia in Nasha whenever she wished. Her enthusiasm bubbled over, clutching 2 devices to her cheeks. Ellie clicked her tongue in disapproval, prompting Horace to sternly remind Tiras that he required testers who could articulate proper feedback, not use the devices to indulge personal attachments. Despite his warning, Tiras delivered a device to Princess Lucia. The young princess held it with a bright smile, happily confirming with Tiras that they could now talk at any time. Meanwhile, Ellie began her own field tests. Speaking into her device from City Street, she explained a critical limitation. Since magic power cannot enter or exit dungeons, she could not be contacted for the palace while inside one. Otherwise, she was completely available to call. Back with the princess, Tiras elaborated on the device's revolutionary nature. She explained that for a mage to achieve the same result, they would need to master specialized communication magic and fine-tune it for long distances, a process requiring immense training. Lucia listened, utterly amazed. The princess marveled that these devices could be used by anyone and required no magic power. Tiras agreed, adding that such high-value magic tools rarely appear, especially not in dungeons. She recalled that even the communication system at the World Council's headquarters had cumbersome security measures, making Horace's invention all the more impressive. She laughed heartily, musing that even the great Golem Master can't create laws by himself. Her companions agreed, with one noting that regulations for the new communication infrastructure would be necessary. Another promised to send the princess the very first commercial version once it was released, a prospect Lucia eagerly awaited. Elsewhere, a gloved hand carefully placed 3 of the sleek, rectangular devices onto a wooden surface. One of these devices was now in the hands of the adventurer Settle. He squinted, examining it with suspicion as he questioned if such a tiny thing could truly be a communication magic tool. His subordinate Alvaro confirmed that it was. Alvaro then explained the situation, reporting that the hero's master had created 100 of them and was gathering testers. Seizing the opportunity, he had his own people purchase some from those testers. Holding one of the devices to his ear, Settle spoke with irritation, asking if the other party had managed to avoid being found out. He dismissed the risk, stating that since they only took 3, their absence would likely go unnoticed. His conversation was interrupted by a soft knock. A young woman, his assistant, peeked into the office and excused herself. Settle, still holding the device, curtly granted her entry. She entered, informing President Settle that he had received a number of letters. His attention now fully on her, he leaned back in his chair and asked if there were any important ones. With a lecherous grin, he demanded she show him. The assistant flinched, her face flushing as she stammered that one letter had arrived from the association's headquarters. His demeanor shifted instantly. He snatched the letter, his eyes fixed on the official seal. After a moment's inspection, he dismissed her, and she turned to leave. Just as she reached the door, he stopped her. "Actually, wait," he commanded, his face shadowed ominously. "Tonight, come to my room." The young woman froze, her eyes wide with shock and fear. She stands frozen as the well-dressed man, Alvaro, insists that her course of action is obvious. Settle, seated at the desk, looks up from his letter, feigning surprise. He leans forward with a menacing grin, reminding her of the medical expenses for her heavily injured father and questioning who she thinks is paying for them. As she begs for forgiveness, Alvaro coldly dismisses her pleas, stating that apologies are meaningless and that she must show her sincerity to him that night. Trembling, she quietly agrees. Settle watches her submission from his chair while Alvaro looks on with satisfaction. After she departs, Alvaro congratulates Settle, remarking that both the assistant and her father are fools. The truth of her situation washes over the assistant as she weeps alone. It was a trap, a monster deliberately strengthened to injure someone non-fatally. Back in the room, Settle confirms she delivered the letter from headquarters. Alvaro scoffs, claiming she brought this on herself, and that she only has her looks, not the intelligence to back them up. He notes with surprise how quickly Settle obtained information about the new magic tool. Settle clarifies that the letter is from his backer in the association, a man named Pastel. A silhouetted figure explains the plan. As an executive, Settle can use the communication device at headquarters, but the backer desires a more portable version. To that end, Settle is instructed to give one of the 3 devices he acquired to Pastel. Leaning back with a smug expression, Settle declares that things are becoming interesting, especially with the night's events ahead. Alvaro agrees, adding that Settle's evaluation will surely rise because of this. Elsewhere, in a well-stocked shop, Ellie examines a bottle, identifying it as a high-rank potion. As she turns to leave, her armored companion appears in the doorway, asking if she is heading into a dungeon. Ellie looks away, stating only that her purpose is personal. Her personal mission led her to a quiet courtyard. There, sitting alone on the edge of a fountain, was her target, Settle's young assistant, looking utterly dejected. As she observed the scene, her armored companion expressed confusion, asking what she was talking about and pointing out that she was usually the one disturbing the peace. Unfazed, Ellie declared her intention to protect the peace for all the cute girls in town. She then explained her original plan, to let Settle, whom her companion confirmed was the leader of that new band of nuisances, run loose for now. He was necessary bait to lure out someone named Pastel. However, her expression twisted into a menacing grin. Contemplating the hopes and wishes of her targets, she declared with chilling intensity that she was going to crush it all. Inside his workshop, Horace presents his latest creation to Princess Lucia and Idrika, a mechanical copier. As the device ejects a perfect duplicate of a drawing, he explains that with sufficient paper and ink, it can reproduce an image any number of times. Idrika gasps in amazement at the incredible machine. She holds the copied image, acknowledging that while methods like letterpress printing exist, the sheer speed of this new device makes it incomparable. The scene briefly shifts, showing the grand palace where this technology might soon be put to use. Horace then asks Idrika to test the machine at the palace. As he speaks, Princess Lucia, holding one of the bear drawings, asks what it is. Her curiosity quickly turns to the machine itself. She wonders what its insides look like and nervously asks if Horace plans on taking it apart later. Before he can answer, Lommel bursts into the room, excitedly holding up a new drawing she's made. She cheerfully calls out to Idrika, showing off her artwork. Seeing the drawing, Idrika's face flushes with embarrassment as she holds a blank sheet of paper and a strange new writing tool, muttering in resigned understanding. Horace explains his reasoning, stating that the paper available in town wasn't of high enough quality for his needs. Idrika adds that she prepared her own pen and paper for this reason. Horace examines one of the drawings, impressed, noting that the paper is high quality and the ink has already finished drying. Lommel, using the new pen on the special paper, marvels at the experience. She exclaims how smooth it is to write with, calling it amazing. Idrika expresses her astonishment that a GOLEM Master could also create something like this. Princess Lucia, however, recognizes the object, explaining that in the language of the Great Summoning Era, it is called a ball pen. At the mention of his past, Idrika has a sudden realization. She remembers the immense stress Horace was under while working at the castle, understanding that without these creative projects, the pressure would have been unbearable for him. Horace sighs, a flicker of that past strain crossing his face. He turns back to Idrika with a gentle expression, telling her she can come visit his workshop anytime she likes, which she happily accepts. He adds that the copier is still a prototype and asks her to inform him of any issues she finds. He waves goodbye to his companions, promising to bring his next creation over. As he departs, Idrika reminds him that the palace is not his personal testing ground. Watching him go, Idrika remarks on how his inventions are always so exciting. It's almost bad for her heart. Princess Lucia enthusiastically agrees, finding his work simply amazing. His business at the palace concluded, Horace considers his next stop as he walks through the city streets. His thoughts drift to the people he needs to visit, picturing a bustling market street where some of his acquaintances are enjoying a meal. Arriving in the commercial district, he decides he should probably get something to eat as well. While eating, his attention is drawn to 2 adventurers trying to move a cart. One exclaims that it isn't moving at all. Horace realizes the owner must have been careless, and that the men believe they can simply take the abandoned property. The aggressive adventurer, Settle, strains against the cart, shouting in frustration and questioning why the magic tool is stuck. His companion looks on, equally perplexed. A voice cuts through their efforts. Horace steps forward, sandwich in hand, and asks what they're doing with his cart. He confirms with a smirk that the vehicle is, indeed, his. Caught in the act, Settle laughs it off, claiming he thought it was free for the taking. With a dismissive laugh, he declares he wouldn't just give it away and thrusts a few coins towards Horace, telling him to take the payment. Horace stares down at the paltry sum in his palm, his expression one of disbelief. He quietly questions if this is all he's being offered, clearly taken aback by the insultingly low amount. He stands calmly before the adventurers. One of them, a man with a headband, boasts that they are from the S-rank guild, Excalibur, and questions if it isn't in Horace's best interest to sell them as goods. He surmises they must think he's just some novice from a trading company. He concedes that a deal with an S-rank guild might sound appealing to a newcomer, but clarifies that sounding good and being good are 2 different things. Enraged by the dismissal, the adventurer with the headband roars that it's time for a life lesson. He lunges forward, fist raised, demanding Horace's hand everything over immediately. His fist freezes in midair, mere inches from its target. The adventurer strains, muscles bulging, but finds himself completely immobilized, unable to land the blow on the unperturbed Horace. A moment later, the man is violently repelled, sent stumbling backward as if struck by an invisible wall. His companion cries out in shock at the sudden turn of events. Both men find themselves paralyzed, struggling against an unseen restraint. Horace calmly addresses them, noting that their absence from the battlefield doesn't equate to weakness, but adds that he is unconcerned with their personal moral code. He then mentions their guild by name, Excalibur, and observes with a faint smile that they aren't quite the force they once were. He finds it amusing that they seem completely unaware they've been cast aside. The stunned adventurer can only demand to know what he means. As Horace walks away, one of the adventurers scoffs, suggesting that Horace has no ideals, or has long since forgotten them. He stops, his face hardening with contempt. He turns his head slightly, his eyes sharp as he declares that people like them are not worthy of being called adventurers. The sheer force of his conviction seems to send a shockwave through the air, knocking the arrogant adventurers off their feet. Horace lets out a weary sigh as they tumble to the ground. He glances back at the fallen men. One of them, trembling on his hands and knees, looks up in fear and demands to know who he is. The entire group of adventurers stares in stunned silence. With a cold, unwavering gaze, he introduces himself simply as Horace, adding that to make it easier for them to understand, he is the hero's master. He continues his address, informing them that they are nothing but pawns for a figure named Pastel. He then asks if they are afraid of him, coolly offering to dismiss the incident as a mere attempt. Enraged, Settle shouts back, questioning what Horace is talking about and boasting that S-rank guilds are far more important. He then tries to draw a parallel, claiming that if they're discussing fear of the Demon Lord, then Horace is in the same position as them. Horace turns away, unimpressed. He states that just because their robbery was only an attempt does not mean he has forgiven them. Pulling out a small rectangular device, he declares that he will inform them of his decision now. He looks back at the group, who act like tyrants, and clarifies his position. What he finds even more unforgivable is that they dare to call themselves adventurers. His gaze remains fixed and intense. Regarding his own ideal for an adventurer, he concludes that they're the furthest thing from what it should be. His condemnation was met not with remorse, but with outrage. The adventurers, faces contorted in anger, roared back that he was the one who should be silent. Their defiance was cut short by the sudden arrival of armored soldiers. A captain stepped forward, pointing an accusatory finger. He declared that the executives of the adventurer group, Excalibur, were being placed under arrest for the attempted robbery of the hero's master. The adventurers could only stare in stunned silence. A group of city guards apprehends several rowdy men. One of the troublemakers, wearing a headband, shouts in confusion, wondering where the guards came from. His tone quickly shifts to pleading as he offers a hasty apology, promising to reflect on his actions, all while seeming to believe he'll be let go for his latest transgression. Overseeing the arrest, a man in a sharp suit, Horace, calmly orders the guards to take them away. As the guards affirm the command, he offers a parting warning to the detained men, advising them to be more careful with their words and actions in an era where communication devices are becoming common. He turns to the guard captain beside him and remarks on the group's energetic nature. The captain agrees, noting that Horace's communication magic tool proved its usefulness almost immediately. The captain then bows his head with a sincere apology, explaining that the men are from the Settle Alliance and have become a significant nuisance recently. He elaborates on the delicate situation, stating that adventurers play a major role in the town's economy, which makes it difficult to act against high-ranking guilds. Furthermore, he explains a frustrating loophole in international law. Unless a formal complaint is filed by a victim, no crime has officially been committed. Horace listens, realizing that taking extreme measures is not the answer. A balance must be found instead. He reflects on a past incident where the arrest of guild higher-ups caused immense damage to the economy by leaving the lower ranks unchecked. The memory of that chaos, he surmises, is still fresh in people's minds. The guard captain, noticing Horace's understanding, chuckles with relief. He admits that while he knows it's inappropriate to say, he's truly glad that Horace was the one targeted this time, having heard the same excuses for inaction countless times before. With the matter seemingly settled, Horace wishes the captain well and turns to leave. The captain quickly calls out, asking him to wait, as there is another matter he wishes to discuss. He stops, and the two walk together. The captain asks if Horace has heard that the Adventurers Guild branches are considering implementing a court adventurer system. Horace confirms that he has, which the captain notes with relief, saying it means they can skip the preliminary explanations. The captain then reveals the local branch's plan. They want to make Settle the leader of the troublesome Settle Alliance, a court adventurer of this country. Horace confirms he's referring to that Settle. The captain affirms, adding that while it's unknown if the Diamante Kingdom will adopt the system, the local branch seems determined to proceed with its own agenda. He thanks the guard captain for the information, stating he understands why the captain chose this moment to tell him. The captain, in turn, expresses his own gratitude. His mind turns to the Settle Alliance's branch office. Meanwhile, inside that very building, the leader of the alliance, Settle, seethes, cursing the name Pastel. The bare-chested adventurer glares angrily as someone knocks on his door, his face a mask of irritation. Impatient and shirtless, Settle throws open a door, shouting that the occupant is far too slow. He mutters to himself, wondering just how long the woman inside plans on making him wait. Instead of the woman, he is met by a terrified man in a suit. Settle grabs him aggressively by the collar as the man, Alvaro, stammers out his name in fear. Still gripping the man's suit, Settle angrily demands to know what he wants, declaring that he is busy. Alvaro, looking pale and unwell, can only manage a weak cough. Alvaro finally delivers his message. The woman has run away. Enraged, Settle leans in close and bellows, demanding to know what he just said. His face twists in fury. He curses the woman, questioning aloud if she treasured her own life so much that she would even abandon her father. A few days later, in a different part of the city, Horace, Ellie, and Nasha stand before a large public notice board outside an official-looking building. From their spot, Nasha's eyes light up as she recognizes someone in the distance, calling out joyfully for her One-Ichan. She breaks into a run, dashing towards a young woman in a work uniform who turns in surprise, recognizing the approaching child as Nasha. The two embrace in a tight, happy hug. The woman cries out in relief, while Nasha exclaims that it has been a while. Holding the girl, the woman asks if she's all better now, then expresses concern about her running with her heart disease. With a beaming smile, Nasha announces that, for some reason, it's cured. Behind them, Ellie looks on in shock. She stands with Horace, and Ellie as a young woman approaches them. The woman, Risha, thanks Horace on behalf of the god of hugging little girls, gesturing toward the bizarre statue that leaves Horace utterly bewildered. Ellie adds that Horace also treated Risha's illness and her father's burns. Risha gently tells her younger sister, Nasha, that's enough affection for now. Ellie remarks that just having the two sisters present is enough to purify the air, though she reminds Horace they're there to pitch their air purifiers. The connection finally dawns on Horace. Risha is Nasha's older sister. He watches as Risha explains that she is Settle's subordinate, a fact that seems to catch his attention. She recounts how she began working as guild staff for world conquerors after their father was gravely injured. However, she was on the verge of becoming a victim of Settle, who was financing the treatment. With no other choice, she took matters in her own hands and treated her father herself, which infuriated Settle. Horace recoils, finding her methods crude, but Ellie enthusiastically praises her as the best. Risha sheepishly clarifies that her treatment consisted of spilling the entire contents of a high-ranking potion on her father. Just then, a well-dressed man named Alvaro enters the guild hall with several attendants. He scans the room with a dismissive air, remarking that the interior is quite shabby. He turns his attention to the occupants, announcing that he is an executive from the main headquarters, present to fulfill the orders of someone named Pastel. With a confident smirk, he declares to everyone in the guild branch that they shall now be under the command of the Settle Alliance. The announcement sends a shockwave through the room, and Risha cries out in disbelief. The guild receptionist, Tracy, springs forward, her face a mask of outrage. She shouts, demanding to know how they dare barge in. Before she can advance further, Horace's arm shoots out, blocking her path. Alvaro looks on, noting that blocking his greeting was impressive. He condescendingly offers Horace the honor of stating his name, but Horace simply demands to know who Alvaro is. He stood his ground as the executive, Alvaro, addressed him directly. Alvaro noted that he recalled Horace defeating a guy gigant despite not being an adventurer, then revealed a surprising connection, claiming to be the hero's master. With a confident smirk, Alvaro offered to provide Horace with a superior uniform and demanded he register as an adventurer right now to become his subordinate. Horace simply questioned the offer. In response, Alvaro clarified his authority, stating that the hero community is practically an adventurer community. As an executive from the main headquarters, he declared everyone present to be his subordinates and asserted that Horace could not defy him. He calmly replied that he had no intention of becoming an adventurer again. Alvaro immediately accused him of ignoring an adventurer's duty to the people, framing the refusal of someone strong enough to defeat a guy gigant as pure selfishness. To reinforce his point, Alvaro turned to the other adventurers gathered in the guild hall, asking for their agreement that Horace's stance was selfish. Unmoved, Horace coolly brought up one of the founding reasons for the Adventurers Guild. His detached attitude visibly angered Alvaro, who snapped back, demanding to know the meaning of his insolence. He began his explanation, reminding the executive that adventurers are inherently travelers. The guild, he elaborated, was established for these powerful individuals to protect their freedom to explore the unknown, unimpeded by the authority of the state or religion. The surrounding adventurers dismissed this history, muttering that in modern times, they are nothing but cogs in society. Enraged, Alvaro shouted back, questioning the use of a story from the distant past and accusing them of forgetting how to be free. Horace pressed on, pointing out that the world population is 2 billion, while the mere 200,000 adventurers are just a tiny fraction. He concluded that the headquarters, having only ever managed such a small scale, has no right to take the world for a fool. Alvaro smugly countered that the world is a better place precisely because the headquarters oversees these cogs. Horace looked him in the eye and agreed, then delivered his final blow. He likes adventurers, but he hates the headquarters because of people like Alvaro. The executive was left speechless with fury. He coolly dismisses the executive's outrage, stating that he doesn't care about the guild's definitions of right or wrong. To him, adventurers exist for the pursuit of freedom. The executive, Alvaro, trembles with fury. He points a shaking finger, shouting that Horace is neither an adventurer nor a noble, but just a common person, and warns him not to get carried away. He sneers, reminding Horace that as a member of the headquarters staff, he is untouchable. From across the room, Horace watches with a detached smirk, finding the man's arrogance interesting. He wonders aloud if he is truly just a normal person. In an instant, Horace closes the distance, grabbing Alvaro by his collar and lifting him slightly. He remarks that he is very familiar with the mindset of people like him, as the executive sputters in disbelief. He holds the man firmly, calmly telling him not to worry. He then declares that, for now, he will let him off with just a single punch. As he draws back his fist, he adds a chilling promise. It won't leave any marks, only pain. Alvaro's face contorts in terror, and he screams for Horace to wait. His fist connects squarely with Alvaro's jaw, the impact echoing through the silent room. The force of the blow sends the executive flying backward. As Alvaro lies crumpled on the floor, Horace calmly warns him again not to get carried away, reminding him that he is staying in this town. Horace stands amidst the stunned silence of the other adventurers. Alvaro's attendants rush to his side, their faces a mask of shock and disbelief at the blatant assault on their superior. His attention shifts as he turns to see his companions. Ellie is shielding the eyes of Nasha and another young girl, murmuring that she can't let them see such an unsightly display of adulthood. Horace looks over, slightly taken aback, and asks what she is doing. He stands silently, his gaze fixed on some unseen point. Nearby, Ellie, holding Princess Lucia, quietly considers the situation. She realizes that this man, Horace, is the very person the Dragonstone Kingdom and Diamante are discussing for the prestigious role of court adventurer. From a short distance away, the hero, Lanhea, watches the scene unfold, her thoughts sharp with disdain. What an absolute farce. Inside a stately office, Yurif Chiode slams his hand on a desk, his voice booming as he demands an update. He shouts for Settle, wanting to know what has happened with their court adventure project. Settle reports that their momentum has slowed significantly. He explains that members of the S-Rank Guild, Excalibur, were arrested for trying to utilize Horace's items. Despite this setback, he assures Yurif that they are still gathering like-minded adventurers to support their cause. At the mention of Horace's name, Yurif's expression hardens with fury. The image of the mage engineer flashes through his mind as he internally seethes. That man again. Settle then asks if the hero's master, a man named Pastel, has also caused problems for Yurif. He quickly tries to downplay the arrests, arguing that they are all fellow adventurers and that minor crimes should be overlooked. He dismisses the issue, shifting focus to a grander ambition. Settle declares that with the Demon Lord defeated, the Adventurers Guild now has the chance to take over the world. As Yurif listens, his own ambition ignites. He envisions his name being carved into history as the one who initiated this new world order. Meanwhile, in a well-appointed room elsewhere, Tiras pours tea. She remarks to her master that things have been difficult, noting her surprise that Pastel would appear in person and mentioning that Ellie had also wished to avoid him. As she serves him, Horace explains the situation to Lommel and Ellie. He confirms that Pastel's group, part of the Settle Alliance, was decisive in their attempt to seize control of the local branch. He adds that upon discovering Horace was the hero's master, Pastel also tried to recruit him as a subordinate. Lommel, munching on a pastry, connects the dots, realizing this is why they are pushing for court adventurers. Ellie calmly sips her tea and remarks that it seems they truly intend for adventurers to rule the world, calling the notion a joke that isn't even funny. Horace continues his explanation, stating that while Settle's achievements are recognized, he is desperate to increase the Adventurers Guild's authority. He then makes a grave accusation. Settle has been the main culprit behind many major incidents in the past. Lommel recalls that headquarters tried to suppress this information, but it spread regardless. She asks if the big incidents include the one from 4 years ago, where an underestimation of the Demon Lord led to major casualties. Horace's face darkens as he confirms it with a simple, heavy, the memory alone making his stomach turn. He continued his story, explaining that 4 years ago, during the Demon Lord Subjugation Assembly, the guild had underestimated their foe. Just as they misjudged the current hero, they looked down on the Demon Lord, even though word of her ability to control men had already spread. At the assembly, it was confidently declared that the adventurers would be unaffected by her ability. The leadership seriously believed this because every member of the headquarters was to be equipped with a magic item that provided resistance to abnormal status effects. And so, filled with this false confidence, they made their move. A large contingent of adventurers, including a younger, eager Settle, prepared to march on the demon territory. To support this massive undertaking, the guild gathered every craftsman and magic tool engineer under their command. They also hired high-ranking adventurers, mercenaries who would do anything for enough money, and had them all produce a large quantity of the resistance items. With these supposed protections, a force of around 1,000 A-rank adventurers attacked a large city, serving as the Demon Lord's front line. Their target was singular. They knew the Demon Lord herself was present there. Leading the charge, Settle roared that it was a competition, boasting that he would be hailed as a hero for taking her down. Another adventurer quipped that it was troubling Settle had forgotten about him, as the entire force surged forward. Their momentum carried them deep into a fortress, where Settle kicked down a large set of doors, bellowing for the Demon Lord to come out. He shouted for his men not to be scared, certain their magic items would protect them. As he declared his intent to take her head, one of his companions stared ahead, his face a mask of disbelief. His shock was warranted. As soon as the Demon Lord appeared in the vast hall, her presence alone was enough to make one adventurer drop his sword with a metallic clang. In an instant, every single adventurer was put under her control. Their faces went slack, filled with an unnatural adoration as they became completely enthralled by her. As the three companions sit together, Ellie reveals a little-known fact. The one who planned and carried out the entire operation was the then 19-year-old Pastel. However, she notes, this is a truth the world at large is not aware of. Horus internally reflects that this is how the truth was covered up. A memory of the hero, Lanhea, surfaces, explaining the political climate. With many countries suffering, they were desperate for good news, making the official story of a huge victory more palatable. The grim reality that the adventurers from the failed operation were captured and turned into monsters by the Demon Lord's drugs before being subjugated by the heroes was a horror that could not be publicized. His thoughts are interrupted as Lommel brings the focus back to the blueprint for the magic item. She questions its very origin, noting its incredible effectiveness was such that it was believed to work even against the Demon King. To top it off, she adds, it can be mass-produced. He leans back, confirming her observation is exactly what he finds so strange. Ellie, listening intently, agrees that she is also curious about this very point. He recalls a memory from his time in the capital. He had heard that a project to mass-produce magic items with abnormal status resistance had suddenly emerged, and that talented people were being gathered for it. That development, he admits, completely exceeded his expectations. Lommel, looking concerned, asks why he didn't simply interfere with Pastel's plans when he heard such talk. Before he can respond, Ellie interjects, telling Lommel to wait. She brings up the term tragic scenes, explaining that she wasn't suspicious of the item's creation because she assumed they were intended for use in such dire situations. Seeing Lommel's confusion, Ellie elaborates. She concedes the point is fair, but reminds Lommel that as someone who has fought on the front lines, she should have witnessed these tragic scenes many times before. The grim meaning is clarified through a memory of Lanhea confronting the Demon King. The hero explains that the Demon King can ensnare men, turning them into her servants, so she does not kill them. However, since she cannot use women in the same way, they are quickly and ruthlessly disposed of. Lommel's expression darkens with horrified understanding. This is the reason. The narration concludes that those so-called tragic scenes are invariably filled with the corpses of fallen female warriors. Her expression is grim as she processes the dark revelation. She explains to Horus that she had initially believed the magic items were distributed to help adventurers maintain their sanity while venturing into such dangerous places. Horus, his gaze intense, offers a chilling counter-theory. He suggests that someone may have deliberately leaked information to orchestrate the entire disastrous incident. As the pieces click into place, Lommel notes with growing dread that the items were shaped like medals or talismans, realizing she might know the horrifying reason why. Across from her, Tiras crosses her arms, conceding that the theory seems quite plausible. From another part of the room, Yurif chimes in, agreeing that they can conclude as much. He elaborates that this means Pastel's failure wasn't solely due to underestimating the Demon Lord, implying a conspiracy was at play. The conversation shifts to their next steps. Lommel asks Horus what he plans to do now, but Tiras asserts that regardless of his plans, the hero community will inevitably become entangled in the matter. The discussion brings to mind a crucial regulation. Because they are citizens of the Dragonstone Kingdom, they are considered exceptions among adventurers. A guild official had once explained that to remain neutral, they must formally put their citizenship on hold upon registering. Lommel connects this rule to their current predicament, stating that since their group is the closest to achieving Pastel's original goal, it's inevitable they will become a topic of discussion. Tiras soberly agrees that this is how things usually go. Leaning back with his arms crossed, Horus sighs in resignation. He mutters that he supposes they will have to face them again, accepting the confrontation to come. A few days pass. Ellie stands outside a two-story building, peering intently at one of its windows through a spyglass, her expression focused and serious. Lowering her spyglass, she announces that she is going out for a bit. As she turns, she is met by the sight of Horus and the armored female companion. The companion greets her cheerfully, remarking on her energy, while Horus looks on in surprise. His intense focus was broken when his armored companion reached for the spyglass he was holding, demanding he give it to her. Startled by the sudden command, he simply agreed. His silence had clearly made her suspicious. She questioned if he had somehow switched his allegiance to Ellie's side, sarcastically wondering if he had spotted a cute girl somewhere in the distance. Instead of answering her accusations, he simply extended the spyglass towards her, inviting her to have a look for herself. The offer left her momentarily confused before she reached out to take it. In front of the hero's mansion, the flamboyant nobleman Yurif Chiode stands on a makeshift platform, delivering a fiery speech to a gathering crowd. From a distance, the hero Lanhea watches through a spyglass, startled by the commotion. Beside her, the mage engineer Horus wonders about the man's motives, questioning why he would use a private residence for a public spectacle and surmising it must be for attention. Within the crowd, the young girl Nasha remarks that neither divine right nor bloodline contributed to the Demon King's defeat. Nearby, Horus listens and internally concludes that the speaker is likely advocating for the recognition of the court adventurer system. Yurif continues his address, pointing out that the celebrated hero doesn't even hold a high status and merely owns a single mansion in a remote part of the country. He proclaims that, as everyone knows, it was the hero community alone that subjugated the Demon King. His voice rises with passion as he shouts that it is only right for the hero who saved the world to be granted a status befitting her immense contributions. He declares the current situation to be utterly unforgivable. He then makes his demand clear, insisting that it is only natural for the hero to be granted the position of court adventurer, a role that operates at the very center of the nation. As he speaks, he clenches his fist in a show of conviction. Observing this, Horus quietly remarks that he isn't surprised, as this is what most people believe a court adventurer to be, simply an adventurer recognized by the country. Lanhea, however, expresses her sincere hope that no one is swayed by Yurif's rhetoric. He turns to his master, agreeing with her concern. He states that they should set things straight and also inform their companions of the potential danger this movement represents. The definition of a court adventurer is recalled, an adventurer who works for a specific country or government. Horus remembers explaining this, noting that adventurers are technically considered migrants without a country of their own. Lanhea, processing this, raises a crucial point. She asks what would happen if such an adventurer, while working for a specific country, were to discover a secret the government wished to keep hidden. Horus looks at her, impressed, and commends her excellent perspective. He then explains the core problem with the system. It would be far too easy for a government to use it to plant spies. While it's difficult for an adventurer to go against the Adventurers Guild, this arrangement creates a significant possibility of sensitive information leaking directly to a government, a fundamental flaw. He continues to ponder the flaws of the system. Since adventurers lack a sense of national belonging, there's a significant risk they would simply abandon tedious or troublesome work. Furthermore, without a formal structure, the skills and know-how they possess are not properly passed down. He explains to Lanhea that this is just one of the many downsides the system has. She crosses her arms, agreeing with his assessment. If their work isn't passed down properly, it will inevitably lead to a decline in quality. Meanwhile, the architect of this public debate, Yurif Chiode, observes from afar. He is impressed with how Horus, whom he calls Pastel, is framing the concept of immigration, recognizing its potential as a means to invade other nations using court adventurers. As Yurif muses, the adventurer settled passionately addresses the crowd. He proclaims that the hero who saved the world surpasses any boundary with justice. He argues that if people can safely produce goods and spend money, society will flourish, and the only duty of those in power is to ensure that safety. Horus listens to the speech, his expression thoughtful. His words stir the assembled adventurers and merchants. They voice their own complaints, pointing out that the citizens of the country are prioritized for the rights to the grand or vein of Kinsekai. He seizes on their discontent, his voice rising to a shout. He roars that from the very ores they themselves mined, all they are ever given is the leftovers. The crowd erupts in agreement. He points forcefully into the crowd, his face a mask of righteous fury. He declares that for them to obtain the rights to use what they've earned, the hero must become a court adventurer. His declaration is cut short by a firm command. A pair of polished boots steps forward as their owner tells Settle to shut up, countering that his plan would not put adventurers and citizens on equal footing. Settle whirls around, enraged, demanding to know who spoke. The challenger is revealed to be the blacksmith, Ivan San, his eyes narrowed with grim determination. Settle stares, his mouth agape in shock at the unexpected and public rebuke from the respected craftsman. From his vantage point, Yurif Chiode turns to his courtier with a smirk. He coolly asks if the man has any qualms with what Ivan San is saying, clearly amused by this sudden disruption to the proceedings. As the confrontation simmered, a new figure stepped forward, her arms crossed with authority. The woman, clad in a white coat with long dark hair and glasses, cut through the noise, declaring that she had more than just qualms with the rubbish Settle had been spouting. She positioned herself between Yurif and the unnamed mage engineer, a silent and imposing presence. Below them, The adventurer Settle could only stare, his mouth agape in utter disbelief at this sudden turn of events. From the crowd, another official with sharp features and spiky dark hair made a decisive declaration. He announced that while he had considered it before, it was now official. Settle was hereby expelled from the World Conquerors. His words hung in the air. Yuri Chiode, sensing an opportunity, turned to the official, asking what Settle had done to warrant such a troubling outcome for Ivan-san. Settle himself could only let out a strangled cry of shock, his face a mask of pure outrage. The official calmly explained his reasoning. He stated that he doesn't particularly care what anyone does with the prestige of being a member of World Conquerors, so long as it doesn't cause him any trouble. However, he had no complaints if that prestige was used to take hold of the unknown. He then addressed Ivan-san directly, elaborating on his core philosophy. As long as the world follows the path of the divine blood adventure, adventurers must remain adventurers. The official concluded that the Settle Alliance fundamentally rejects this notion, which is why they had become a problem. Yuri Chiode's eyes narrowed as he processed the implications. He questioned aloud if the official truly believed that the one who achieved the greatest of all feats, the subjugation of the Demon Lord, could be adequately rewarded with a mere mansion and citizenship in such a small country. The official, arms crossed, met Yurif's gaze. He simply acknowledged that he understood the direction Yurif was trying to steer the conversation, his own expression remaining unreadable. Some time later, a grand mansion stood under a clear sky. A thought surfaced in the mind of an observer within. It had been a while since Ivan had visited. Inside, looking out a window, the unnamed mage engineer stood beside the female hero. He confirmed the thought, remarking that it looked like the blacksmith had indeed come to their mansion.